It was the first time that man had ever used a divine technique. And the moment he did, everyone there was completely shaken, because what he unleashed was none other than Shaolin's supreme art, Stairway to Heaven. A peerless movement technique said to leave no trace, even on snow, and carry its user thousands of miles through the air. The crowd was terrified that a monstrous technique like that showing up on some no-name young brat was just absurd. The man stared coldly at the so-called righteous sect standing before him. Using secret voice transmission, he delivered a chilling warning. Let that girl go. Otherwise, not a single one of you is leaving this place alive today. But who would have thought that this killing, intent-drenched man was actually the fallen prince whose kingdom had collapsed just 2 months ago, ManhwaCapped. The reason he had fallen this far was simple. His uncle had seized power, usurped the throne, and tried to crown himself emperor. My dear nephew, if you truly care about the nation and its people, then hand over the throne and go where you belong. Otherwise, don't blame me for showing no mercy. It was a coup born from a bloodbath. Countless people lost their lives that day. At the most critical moment, his master grabbed ManhwaCapped and dragged him out of the palace with his life on the line. Leading him through an underground passage, his master barely carved out a path of survival. Before parting, he told ManhwaCapped to go to the Jade Emperor Summit of Mount Tai, find a stone stele, and hang the imperial noble plaque on it. If he did, 2 extraordinary men who had once served the late emperor would come to his aid. Back then, ManhwaCapped was in tears. What right do I even have to keep living like this? Hearing that, his master roared, "Snap out of it! Your Majesty, as long as you live, there is still hope." Even now, ManhwaCapped still remembered his master's final words. Only by staying alive could he truly act for the good of the realm and fulfill the late emperor's dying decree. That was why his master, tears streaming down his face, begged him, "You must survive, and no matter what it takes, protect yourself." After that, ManhwaCapped spurred his horse forward and rode off without looking back. But at that point, he was already a dying flame in the wind. Faced with life and death, ManhwaCapped had already let go of everything. Right before collapsing, he saw a butterfly. If there really is a next life, I want to be as free as that butterfly. In the end, ManhwaCapped sighed silently in his heart. "Master, it seems I can only make it this far." As he slipped into unconsciousness, 2 figures slowly blocked out his vision. Those 2 figures were a pair of old men. The very 2 extraordinary figures his master had spoken of before dying. The elder known as Elder Ui was shocked and immediately told Elder Huan to look toward the stone stele ahead. Looking up, they saw an imperial noble plaque hanging clearly from the stele. ManhwaCapped had no idea how long he had been unconscious, nor did he know where he was now. Then, all of a sudden, the 2 elders dropped to their knees before him. "Your Majesty, thank heavens you've awakened safely." ManhwaCapped slowly sat up, stunned that he was somehow still alive. At that moment, ManhwaCapped turned his head and asked who they really were. The 2 elders immediately bowed with deep respect. Introducing themselves as secret guards left behind by the late Emperor. One was Elder Huan, and the other was Elder Ui. Only after learning their identities did ManhwaCapped finally let his guard down. "So it was you 2 who saved me." And the reason they had rescued him was simple. He carried the imperial noble plaque, the absolute symbol of sovereign legitimacy, reserved only for the true royal bloodline. Elder Huan spoke in a low, steady voice. There have always been traitors within the royal family. His late majesty saw that danger long ago, so he told us everything about the imperial noble plaque in advance, and no matter how long it takes, we will help your majesty reclaim this realm. But the truth was, ManhwaCapped no longer had any desire to fight for the throne. So he answered calmly, "I don't need any of that anymore. I just want to live for myself for once. This land belongs to the people. It was never mine alone. If my duty is truly over, then I should forget the past and learn how to live among commoners like an ordinary man." The 2 elders were visibly stunned. They clearly hadn't expected their emperor to make a choice like that. ManhwaCapped gave a faint smile. "And as for your majesty, I've had enough of hearing it. From now on, call me young master." Elder Ui looked heartbroken. "To think that your majesty has truly abandoned all thoughts of reclaiming the throne. It cuts me to the bone." ManhwaCapped replied evenly, "All I want now is to live as an ordinary citizen, then die quietly in peace. I don't want to be dragged back into imperial power struggles ever again." At that, Elder Huan leaned in close and asked in a low voice, "Young master, do you truly wish to erase everything from your past?" ManhwaCapped waved it off. "Don't take it too seriously. I was just saying it out loud, that if it could really happen, then sure, that would be nice, but that's nothing more than wishful thinking." But Elder Huan answered without hesitation, "If you truly want it, then it may not be impossible. ManhwaCapped froze for a second. What do you mean by that? Before Elder Huan could finish, Elder UI immediately cut in. That method will never work. For the first time, ManhwaCapped was the one pleading. If there really is a way, can you make that wish come true for me? If you can truly let me break free from this land like a butterfly, then I'm willing to pay whatever price it takes. Elder Huan burst into laughter. If that is your majesty's command, then of course I will lend you my strength. But first, what kind of person do you wish to become? The question caught ManhwaCapped off guard. You mean, I could become the kind of man I want to be? Elder Huan nodded. That's right, as long as the person truly existed in history, anyone is possible. But there is one condition, they must already be dead. ManhwaCapped immediately fired off another question. So that means I could choose a past emperor, an imperial consort, even a former empress? Elder Huan smiled. Difficult, yes, but if that is what your majesty desires, I can still make it happen. Then ManhwaCapped asked his final question. What about someone from the martial world? Would that work too? Elder Huan nodded again. As long as they're dead, yes. But why would you specifically want to become a martial artist? ManhwaCapped answered honestly. I don't know much about the history of the Jianghu, but I figure the two of you probably do. Then he slammed both hands onto the table. Please, tell me if it can really be done. I'm willing to accept any price. Though Elder Huan didn't fully understand what ManhwaCapped was planning, he still spoke slowly. If you want absolute freedom in the martial world, then there is only one path. You must become the strongest. The strongest of every era is different, so it's hard to say who truly stood above all others. But if one name must be chosen, then there really is one man, the Heavenly Demon, the #1 figure of the martial world in his age. The moment he heard the name Heavenly Demon, Elder UI shuddered all over. Elder Huan, how can you let his majesty become someone like that? But when ManhwaCapped heard that name, he was actually caught off guard in a good way that he liked in fact. He felt it strangely matched the kingly identity he once carried. So he made up his mind on the spot and ordered the two elders to turn him into the Heavenly Demon. One day later, a full row of candles had been laid out inside the room. Elder Huan stood at the center, repeatedly striking the bell in his hand. As the ringing echoed out, an old memory rose in his mind, as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. The soul-swaying shadow shift art hidden in the rebel sect's secret vault, along with those 2 demonic soul pills. He had never forgotten them. Back when he stole those 2 items and fled, he had only survived by faking his death. If the late emperor had not shown him mercy back then, he would have died long ago. Elder UI asked anxiously, "Is the vessel ready?" And at that moment, Elder UI had only just finished everything on his side. Not long before, he had already cut open ManhwaCapped's skin, shaved and reshaped his bones, inserted ivory beneath the soft cartilage under the nose, and grafted the peeled skin back into place. On top of that, he had injected dozens of spiritual medicines and poisons into his body, melting and reforming the bone structure before rebuilding the entire contour of his face. He was old now, so he had to review every step again and again to feel at ease. Thankfully, everything checked out. Not a single mistake had occurred during the procedure. With a sharp rip, Elder UI flicked his wrist and tore the gray cloth off ManhwaCapped's face. His Majesty is about to receive a heaven-defying rebirth. At that moment, ManhwaCapped's features were handsome and youthful. All that remained now was Elder Huan's part. Elder Huan looked up at the sky and slowly spoke. Are you ready to welcome a new life? The one he was calling out to was none other than the Heavenly Demon. The Heavenly Demon's voice dripped with disdain. Someone actually dared to wake me? With a sweep of his sleeve, Elder Huan gestured for the Heavenly Demon to look at the person behind him. This is the crucial part. Through your existence, he is about to gain a new life. Hearing that, the Heavenly Demon burst into wild laughter. A new life? Now, that's interesting. But in the very next second, he coldly spat out 3 words. I refuse it. That answer instantly threw Elder Huan into a panic, and he couldn't make sense of it at all. He immediately sat down cross-legged and asked in a low voice, Why refuse? The Heavenly Demon answered coldly, Because I do not want it, and I have no wish to be reborn as a human again. Elder Huan was badly shaken and hurriedly told the Heavenly Demon not to leave yet. He knew full well that if the Heavenly Demon left now, everything would be ruined. So he had to come up with a way to provoke him and force him to stay. And if there was any line in this world that could make the former #1 of the demonic sect sit down and actually listen, there was probably only one. Elder Huan swallowed hard, because he knew that if he pushed too far and truly enraged him, everyone here might die. But in the end, he stopped hesitating and directly cursed the heavenly demon as an idiot. Behind him, Elder UI nearly jumped out of his skin that we're dead. We're dead. This old lunatic has really lost his mind. The heavenly demon instantly flew into a rage. Looks like you're tired of living. Wanting to finish you off right now. At that moment, Elder Juan kept warning himself not to panic. So he forced himself to stay calm and kept provoking him. If you really are the heavenly demon, then you're a complete idiot for being this blind to the times. Just as the heavenly demon was about to explode, Elder Juan suddenly threw out 3 words, Zhang Sanfeng. In this era, a peerless Taoist named Zhang Sanfeng has appeared in a man so unmatched that people even say he surpassed Bodhidharma himself. The heavenly demon only sneered at that .as for someone like Bodhidharma. He had never even heard the name. Seeing that, Elder Juan pointed straight at his nose and cursed. That's exactly why I said you're an idiot. You don't understand what it means for the times to change. People out there saying that even if the heavenly demon came back to life, he still wouldn't be able to block a single move from true man Sanfeng. In the next instant, the heavenly demon completely lost it. Which worthless bastard is spouting that nonsense? I'll tear his mouth apart. But Elder Juan didn't play along with his rage at all. After all, he had made all of it up on the spot anyway. Then he slowly added, Heavenly demon, do you even know what progress means? In your era, maybe you were the strongest, but the martial world never stopped moving forward. They kept refining their martial arts and techniques in silence. His meaning was clear. The martial arts of this age had advanced so far that they could no longer even be compared with those of his era. And then Elder Juan dropped the real bombshell. You called yourself the strongest under heaven and got bored of standing alone at the top, didn't you? Then why not try becoming the strongest in all of history? The heavenly demon froze for a second. This old man actually had a point. Then he let out a low, greedy laugh. The temptation was enormous, because the title of strongest in all of history meant standing above 2 eras at once. And that was a title he very much wanted. After that, the heavenly demon asked, How old is that boy? Elder Juan answered, 20. A satisfied look instantly appeared on the heavenly demon's face. If that was the case, then he still had at least another 100 years to live. Proving that he was the strongest in this era too would be no problem at all.as for the title of strongest across all ages. He was taking it. By the end, the heavenly demon even sounded strangely cordial. When this is over, I'll treat you to a meal. The moment those words fell, the heavenly demon shot straight into ManhwaCapped's body. Seeing that, Elder Juan immediately told Elder UI to bring over the demonic soul pill and hurry up with the final steps. With a hard gulp, they forced the demonic soul pill into ManhwaCapped's mouth and made him swallow it. Right after that, Elder UI instantly pulled out a silver needle and aimed it straight at ManhwaCapped's pulse gate. In a burst of rapid strikes, all within a single breath, Elder UI had already driven several silver needles into ManhwaCapped's body. In the very next moment, ManhwaCapped's eyes snapped open and he shot upright. The sight startled Elder UI badly. At that moment, ManhwaCapped felt as if his head were splitting apart. He was on the verge of blacking out. Even Elder Juan and Elder UI started panicking because neither of them knew what exactly was happening to their former sovereign. ManhwaCapped could hear a deeply sinister voice echoing through his head, as if it were trying to burst straight out of his skull. The pain was so intense that he was almost losing consciousness. Sensing that something was wrong, Elder Juan immediately rushed forward and checked his pulse. Then he pressed 2 fingers hard against ManhwaCapped's forehead. But to his shock, the strike had absolutely no effect on the heavenly demon. Instead, the force rebounded and threw him back on the spot. Elder Juan was left in total disbelief, unable to understand how things had turned out like this, while Elder UI, behind him, was practically panicking himself sick. At that moment, ManhwaCapped flew into a rage and shouted, You bastard! Shut up! Stop talking already! Beside him, Elder UI felt his heart skip a beat. Had his own voice accidentally disturbed the sovereign? Only then did Elder Juan speak up in a grave voice. The sovereign is talking to the heavenly demon right now. The IT looks like the ritual may have failed. Elder UI nearly smacked him on the spot. Enough with the useless nonsense. Hurry up and think of something. Do you really think I can't tell he's talking to the heavenly demon? The heavenly demon failed to completely seize control of the sovereign. There shouldn't have been this kind of clash of consciousness. If the state keeps going, the sovereign could end up mentally shattered. Elder UI suddenly came up with an idea. Then just send the heavenly demon away. It's that simple, isn't it? Hurry up and do it. The problem was, Elder Juan only knew how to summon. He had no idea how to send one back. Meanwhile, ManhwaCapped was already at his breaking point from the heavenly demon's endless noise. He wanted nothing more than to blow that bastard's ears out, but the voice wasn't outside. It was screaming directly inside his head, and he had no way to stop it. Covered in cold sweat, Elder Huan gritted his teeth and said, "It must be the heavenly demon's demonic nature clashing with the sovereign's own consciousness. Other than that, I can't think of any explanation." But right then, a sudden idea flashed through his mind. If demonic nature could overwhelm a person, then the one thing that could suppress it had to be innate righteousness. As if making up his mind on the spot, Elder Huan immediately turned to Elder Ui. "I still have one demonic soul pill left. That means we can use the ritual one more time, that we'll use it to suppress the heavenly demon's demonic nature." Elder Ui was completely lost and had no clue what he was talking about. Elder Huan instantly snapped. "You blockhead. Your brain's usually sharp, so why is it turned into a rock today?" What Elder Huan meant was actually simple. If they injected one more soul into the sovereign's body, a soul with overwhelming righteous nature, it could suppress the heavenly demon's demonic side. In other words, they needed to summon an ancient orthodox master. The idea won Elder Ui over at once. If they could bring in a figure powerful enough to suppress demonic energy and let two opposite forces cancel each other out, there might still be hope. Elder Huan didn't stop moving for even a second. He immediately shook the bell in his hand. "There's no more time. We use the same method as before. Start the ritual now." At the same time, Elder Ui had already finished his preparations. "Then let's try it. What happens after this is up to heaven." What they were about to face now was the heavenly demon's demonic nature, the righteous nature of an ancient master, and the sovereign's own imperial soul. Whatever kind of person would be born from that fusion, only heaven could decide. In the next instant, one wave of demonic energy and one wave of Buddhist light poured straight into ManhwaCapped's body. Moments later, both Elder Ui and Elder Huan collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. They were old now. Work like this was already pushing their bodies to the limit. Then, a figure slowly walked up in front of them. In those eyes, a black glint and a golden glint flashed by at the same time. ManhwaCapped looked at the two elders and asked, "Do either of you have food? I'm starving. Seriously starving." Not long after that, he started devouring the food in huge mouthfuls. Elder Huan and Elder Ui watched in utter shock, both thinking the same thing. This time, did it actually work? But right then, ManhwaCapped suddenly glanced to his left. The heavenly demon immediately cursed. "Successful my ass. It was already crowded in here, and you idiots shoved an old monk in too." In the next moment, ManhwaCapped glanced to his right. "It seems this benefactor is even more formidable than the rumors say. You must be the famous heavenly demon." Hearing that, ManhwaCapped slammed his chopsticks down onto the table. Gritting his teeth, he snapped, "Both of you, shut up already. Don't act like it's only the two of you in here. My head is loud enough as it is." The heavenly demon grinded his teeth in fury. "Oh, you brat. When I speak, you're not even in pain anymore. You should be suffering so badly you can barely stay alive." Only then did ManhwaCapped suddenly realize that things really were different now. The heavenly demon was still annoyingly loud, but that tearing agony from before was gone. At that moment, the heavenly demon was furious beyond words. He had originally planned to use this body to become the one and only supreme being across all ages. And now he had been reduced to a wandering soul that couldn't even control the body he entered. The sight left both Elder Huan and Elder Ui stunned. Least judging from the result, Elder Huan's plan to suppress the heavenly demon's demonic nature with a righteous figure had actually worked. The second soul that had entered ManhwaCapped's body was named Hainung, the eminent monk who had once been revered as the sixth patriarch of Shaolin. When Hainung heard himself being praised, a faint trace of smug satisfaction even appeared on his face. And ManhwaCapped also realized that this second soul inside him was no ordinary figure either. Without him, he probably would have been driven insane by the heavenly demon already. So ManhwaCapped immediately said, "Old monk, thanks to you." "No, wait, Master Hainung. Thank you." That light, casual tone instantly made Elder Huan and Elder Ui jump in shock. But ManhwaCapped himself didn't find anything strange about it all. Instead, he urged them, "Stop standing there. Give me another bowl." Elder Huan hurried off in a panic to serve more food, while Elder Ui remained behind, staring at ManhwaCapped in complete disbelief. He felt that ManhwaCapped had changed, and not just a little. This wasn't a simple shift in mood. His entire temperament had changed so drastically that he almost seemed like a different person. The refined and gentle emperor they once knew was nowhere to be seen. Then again, maybe that was only natural. After all, with three personalities trapped inside one body, extreme chaos was inevitable, that a major change in temperament was almost unavoidable. In the next moment, ManhwaCapped turned to Elder UI. What are you standing around for? Go get me some water, that I'm thirsty. And after that came the next truly important matter. ManhwaCapped no longer intended to keep using his old identity. That meant he needed a brand new name. Since Hainung had clearly spent years immersed in scripture and learning, he figured the monk ought to be well educated. So he asked him to come up with one first. Hainung thought for a long while before finally offering what he considered a fine name. What does the benefactor think of the name Wuchang? ManhwaCapped immediately shook his head. That name's way too ominous. Life is impermanent. Just hearing it sounds like I'm about to die at any moment. Forget it. Hainung was clearly unhappy about that answer, but there was nothing he could do to... As ManhwaCapped turned his attention to the heavenly demon instead. The heavenly demon immediately bared his teeth in a sinister grin and sneered from inside. That bald old monk is stupid and blind to his place, and you actually asked him to name you. You really are an idiot. You should have asked me from start. ManhwaCapped cut him off impatiently. Less nonsense, just give me a name. Instantly energized, the heavenly demon proudly came up with what he thought was an overwhelmingly domineering name. Iron Blood Shirak. The moment he heard it, ManhwaCapped froze on the spot. The heavenly demon burst into laughter. What? Are you stunned by how amazing my name is? ManhwaCapped twitched to the corner of his mouth. No, I'm horrified. I asked you for a name, not a ridiculous title. Honestly, how did someone as uncultured as you ever become the strongest under heaven? That line made the heavenly demon explode. You brat, you really don't know your place. Just wait. Sooner or later, I'm going to devour your consciousness, seize your body, and become the true strongest under heaven. Yet ManhwaCapped remained completely unharmed, as if none of it had affected him in the slightest. That was when the heavenly demon himself began to panic. No, that makes no sense. He then turned to look at Hainung, only to realize that this old monk had been interfering again. The heavenly demon's self-proclaimed brilliant mind quickly ran the numbers. Right now, he was alone. While the other side had in terms of numbers, he was clearly at a disadvantage. The more he thought about it, the more humiliated he felt. Once upon a time, he had never feared fighting 10,000 alone, and now he was helpless against these two. In the end, he could only pretend to cooperate for the time being, choosing to lie low and wait until the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, ManhwaCapped began seriously thinking things through. Since neither of the names those two had given him felt right, and continuing to use his old surname no longer seemed appropriate either, he needed to come up with a brand new name, one that truly fit the man he had become and the fate now waiting for him. At this moment, the heavenly demon was still lost in his own fantasy. In his mind, it was only a matter of time before he devoured ManhwaCapped's body whole. ManhwaCapped was getting annoyed by the non-stop noise. You've been muttering in my head this whole time that if you've got something to say, then just say it. To hide the scheme brewing in his heart, the heavenly demon casually threw out a name. I was just thinking about what to call you. Now I've got it, Passion. The moment he heard those two syllables, ManhwaCapped felt his heart jolt. Then he suddenly smiled. To break through the heavens, Passion, that I like that name. 3 days later, he changed into traveling clothes and prepared to set out for the martial world. Elder Huan could not help asking in concern. Young master, where are you planning to go? ManhwaCapped smiled faintly. Didn't I already tell you, I'm going to roam the martial world freely, step into the Jianghu, and live as a true man of it. But the two elders still felt that appearing in the Jianghu in his current state was not appropriate. ManhwaCapped simply waved it off. Don't make it sound so dramatic. What do you mean appear? I'm just going out to take a look around. Yet that was exactly what worried the elders most. ManhwaCapped had not truly organized or mastered the martial arts now living inside him, that if he rushed into the Jianghu like this, he could easily suffer for it. ManhwaCapped lifted a finger and tapped the center of his brow. I've already figured out. All of the heavenly demons and Hainung's martial arts are in my memory, that if I want to use them, I just can. You're the ones who turned me into this. Don't tell me you didn't even know it came with that. Still, the two elders believed it was too soon. The Jianghu was a place where all kinds of monsters hid in the shadows. There was no guarantee no one stronger than their sovereign existed out there. ManhwaCapped naturally understood what they were worried about, so he decided to prove it on the spot. He walked alone to the foot of a large tree. The two elders looked on in confusion. What is the sovereign trying to do? In the next instant, ManhwaCapped's gaze turned dark. Heavenly demon, show them your martial arts. A faint pressure of demonic energy rose around his body, and his fist was already coiled with power. A short while later, ManhwaCapped turned and walked away, while the two elders remained standing on the mountain, silently watching his departing figure. He hummed a tune all the way down the mountain, looking downright cheerful. The two elders exchange a look and let out the same sigh. It seems the sovereign no longer needs our protection. But in the next second, they both turned to look behind them, doubt if a monster like him was really being released into the Jianghu. Would nothing happen? The palm strike ManhwaCapped had unleashed moments earlier had already blasted the entire tree clean in half, and the lingering force behind it had carved a deep crack into the earth beyond, stretching nearly 300 meters. Spring passed into winter. Before anyone knew it, ManhwaCapped had been away for over a year. And today, atop a snowy mountain, a group of righteous sect warriors had surrounded a burly man. The man at the front let out a cold laugh. You may have the bearing of someone who can dominate a battlefield, but your luck runs out today. Now that our Northern Sword Society has made its move, anyone we set our sights on has only one ending: dying beneath our blades. The burly man looked at them with nothing but contempt. You should have shown your true colors sooner. In the end, you're just a pack of sanctimonious cowards who bully the weak behind a righteous mask. The Northern Sword Society might have been the dominant power in Jiangzhou, but this burly man was clearly no ordinary nobody either. The burly man threw his head back and laughed like a madman. Go back and tell your sword lord of the Northern Sword Society this. One day I, Hot Gunpyo, will personally take his life. The man in front only let out a sigh. You're already in this miserable state, and you're still acting tough, because from where I stand, that day is never coming. To capture the 7 kings of the demonic path, we laid out a net so tight, not even the wind could slip through. For trash like you, being hunted with this kind of effort should already count as an honor. Hot Gunpyo let out a cold laugh. A mere heavenly net meant nothing to him. But the next second, the enemy cut straight through his thoughts. Did you really think I couldn't see through your little plan? You stepped out on your own, just to buy time for your brothers to hide while they fled. That kind of courage, willingly drawing all the heat onto yourself, is admirable. But if you thought you could stall me, you picked the wrong target. Right then, a flock of birds burst out of the forest in panic. Mixed in with the frantic flapping came a wave of human screams. The moment he heard that sound, Hot Gunpyo trembled all over. It sounded exactly like his younger brother. The leader of the Northern Sword Society slowly raised a finger, his face full of contempt. Your brothers have probably already gone down to meet the King of Hell. In the next instant, Hot Gunpyo completely exploded. He raised his long blade and hacked forward in fury. So you so-called righteous sects really intend to wipe out the demonic path to the last man? The men of the Northern Sword Society immediately lifted their swords to block. With a violent clang, blade met sword like tiger against dragon. The saber came down with savage force, while the sword twisted and shifted with deadly finesse. But in the very next moment, the swordsman kicked Hot Gunpyo's blade clean out of his hands. Then he slammed the hilt of his sword straight into Hot Gunpyo's forehead. The blow was too much for him to bear. His knees buckled, and he crashed to the ground. Then the man coldly answered his earlier question. Things like the demonic path are better off erased from this world. Even so, a final shred of conviction still burned inside Hot Gun-Pyo. And no matter how arrogant these people were now, the moment that man appeared, the whole battle would turn in an instant. The enemy paused for a beat, then sneered. The man you're talking about, you mean the Grandmaster of the demonic path you all follow, Hioyun? Then he dropped an even crueler truth. The North Sea Sword King and the Qinghai Reaper have both betrayed you. Even if Hioyun really is a demonic Grandmaster, what can one man possibly do alone? Hearing that, Hot Gunpyo was completely shaken. His entire body started trembling. But even then, he still forced out a furious growl. One day, my brothers of the demonic path will make all you righteous dogs pay in blood and tears. The man clearly had no interest in hearing another word. He coldly gave the order, send him to the King of Hell. By now, Hot Gunpyo was already battered and half broken. He was no match for this group anymore. And to make things worse, more than a dozen reinforcements had arrived behind him. But even then, the burly man grit his teeth and surged back to his feet. With a sharp sweep, he spun his long blade until it howled through the air. One slash cut across the field, and dozens of men still couldn't force their way half a step closer. That was the brutal might of the bamboo hat saber art. But just as Hot Gunpyo still seemed to have the upper hand, several more figures suddenly swept in behind him. Do you really think you'll still get the chance to unleash your saber aura? The moment those words fell, 3 figures vanished from where they stood. And when they appeared again, 3 flashes of sword light had already cut through the air, instantly shattering Hot Gunpyo's saber aura. The sight left Gunpyo deeply shaken. His saber aura had been crushed so easily in front of them. Those three men were none other than the three swords of Qianshan. One of them said coldly, Gunpyo, among the 7 kings of the demonic path, you're the only one left. Once we kill you, today's hunt will finally be over. Gunpyo sneered with open contempt. You people call yourselves righteous, yet you speak of hunting down human lives like it's nothing. You really are scum through and through. But the other side saw nothing wrong with that at all. Instead, he smirked and said, all you need to do now is die. The sooner you leave, the sooner you can be reborn. With that, all three men swung their swords at the same time. Their bodies shot forward in a blur as they unleashed an invisible sword net. The air around their blades filled with razor-sharp sword chi. Gunpyo knew full well that this was probably the end for him, but he wasn't afraid. If anything, it meant he could go join his brothers below. In the next second, Gunpyo slammed one palm down onto the hilt of his saber. This was his final move, the bamboo hat saber art. Even if he had to die, he would drag one or two of them down with him. He swung his arm wide, and a massive burst of energy exploded from the blade, roaring toward the three of them. But at that exact instant, Gunpyo saw something so terrifying that his pupils shrank. A figure had stepped into the battlefield without anyone noticing and, with a single strike, sent Gunpyo's saber flying out of his hands. Then that same figure moved through the three swordsmen at a speed too fast for the naked eye to follow. A single heartbeat, all three of their swords were gone. With a loud clatter, all 4 weapons were casually tossed onto the snow. Everyone present was stunned speechless. Just who exactly was this young man? Especially the movement technique he had just used. It was so insanely fast that the eye couldn't even track it. The young man let out a chuckle. What a pathetic bunch. The moment they heard his voice, all 4 men whipped their heads around toward him. With a look of pure disappointment, the young man said, I thought watching you fight might actually be interesting, so I stayed to watch for a bit. But what a letdown. With skills like these, you still dare call yourselves experts and strut around like you own the place. Shameless. The 4 of them were shaken to the core. This man had stripped them of their weapons in a single instant. Just how deep did his strength run? At that moment, everyone present was thinking the same thing. What major sect or clan had this young man come from? One of them cupped his fist and asked in a low voice, Who exactly are you, sir? Why are you mocking us like this? The young man replied with total indifference, I wasn't mocking you. But there's one thing you really don't care about at all. All 5 of you had your weapons taken away. Isn't that the greatest humiliation of all? Just as that man was about to keep talking, a large hand suddenly stretched across and cut him off. At the same time, the second of the 3 swords of Qianshan slowly stepped out from the crowd. He took one step forward, cupped his fist toward Manhwa, and said, I am Hio Diakong, second sword of Qianshan. May I ask who you are, young hero? Would you honor me with your name? The sudden question caught Manhwa slightly off guard. He gave a light cough, then said, I'm called the Heavenly Demon Scholar, Passion. That instantly made the Heavenly Demon inside him excited. Looks like you really do like that name, kid. Hearing the Heavenly Demon start chattering again, Manhwa immediately began reciting the scripture Hainung had taught him. One beginning, no beginning, one. One beginning, no beginning, one. As long as he kept chanting, the Heavenly Demon would get so annoyed he'd quiet down. Sure enough, the Heavenly Demon quickly started suffering. Stop chanting, stop chanting. Fine, I'll shut up, all right? But to Manhwa's surprise, Hio Diakong looked overjoyed instead. So you are the Heavenly Demon Scholar Passion, young Master One beginning no beginning one. That made Manhwa explode on the spot. What the hell are you talking about? I'm the Heavenly Demon Scholar Passion. Heavenly Demon Scholar Passion. Don't go changing my name however you want. But just then, a powerful aura erupted from behind them, and someone sharply questioned Hio Diakong on the spot. Why are you announcing your name to this man? In the next moment, that person strode straight forward and fixed Manhwa with a cold stare. You brat, you dare act this arrogant after just one flashy move. And with the way you keep mentioning the Heavenly Demon, you're obviously one of the demonic path. And if you're demonic path, then killing you today is only natural. With that, he immediately ordered everyone from his faction to attack at once. Yet faced with the encirclement of these so-called righteous warriors, Manhwa did not panic in the slightest. The Heavenly Demon asked in confusion from inside, You're not seriously planning to just stand there and let them hack you apart, are you? Manhwa chuckled and shot back. Do I look like I came here just to die? These people have no idea what kind of hell I've already crawled through. Now that I finally carry all this power, why would I let a bunch of nobodies butcher me? What a joke. Whoosh! Just as the enemy's sword was about to strike his body, ManhwaCapped twisted at the waist and slipped past it. Then, with a backhand uppercut, he blasted the man halfway across the map, sending him flying nearly 2 li. ManhwaCapped flicked his wrist and faced the 2 experts charging in at him without the slightest fear. Severed meridian hand. Watch me cripple your pathetic arts. Bang, bang. With 2 punches, the pair couldn't even withstand a single move from him. But the heavenly demon sneered in disdain from inside. So that's it. You still don't know how to properly use martial arts and internal power? Right then, one of the 3 swords of Qianshan suddenly burst forward at terrifying speed and charged straight at ManhwaCapped. Swish, swish, swish. Several sword strikes fell in an instant, and a few strands of ManhwaCapped's hair were actually cut away. That made ManhwaCapped inwardly startled. He hadn't expected this old bastard to be that fast. In the next instant, the 3rd sword slashed down again, and a sharp streak of sword light tore across the front of ManhwaCapped's chest. A vicious grin spread across his face that he was certain he had landed that strike. But in the very next second, that grin froze solid, replaced by pure shock. ManhwaCapped was standing there with one hand holding the swordsman's companion, speaking in a flat voice. The body, the hair, the skin, all of it comes from one's parents. You cut my hair just now, and that made me very unhappy. But what really leaves me speechless is the fact that you can casually slash your own people too. Want to try cutting a few more? The 3rd sword instantly flew into a rage. You arrogant little bastard, I'm going to kill you today, no matter what. The moment those words left his mouth, ManhwaCapped drove a brutal kick straight into that old man's face. Bang! The 3rd sword was sent flying on the spot, blasted away for nearly 2 li. ManhwaCapped sneered. No idea where you got that confidence from, but you've got some nerve saying garbage like that. Right now, in this entire Jianghu, no one dares run their mouth about killing me. Yet here you are, begging for death. That near-humiliating display completely enraged the 3 swords of Qianshan, and the 3 of them instantly decided to join forces and kill him together. The next moment, the 3 swords moved as one. 3 sword lights ripped through the air at the same time, carrying a chilling, killing intent straight toward ManhwaCapped. But in ManhwaCapped's eyes, their blades were laughably slow, barely faster than crawling turtles. With a casual punch, he could have blown straight through one man's organs, while effortlessly dodging another's attack at the same time. Then he whipped out a vicious kick, nearly snapping that old bastard's neck on the spot. Everyone watching felt their scalp go numb. Just where had this monster of a young man come from? Seeing even the 3 swords of Qianshan get suppressed, the leader immediately ordered every disciple under him to swarm ManhwaCapped together. But in the very next second, ManhwaCapped appeared in front of him like a ghost and said with a grin, "Old man, looks like you really love mob tactics." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The man panicked and instantly threw himself backward, desperately widening the distance between them. His heart was already pounding. Damn it, this brat got right in front of me without making a sound. But the next second, he froze again because he had no idea what ManhwaCapped was doing. ManhwaCapped slowly tilted his head back toward the sky and raised one foot on Katia's ankle. A crimson glow began to flicker. The heavenly demon immediately let out a strange laugh from inside him. "You're really going to use this move?" ManhwaCapped couldn't even be bothered answering. He only said coldly, "Shatter. Let everyone here fall into hell." Then his foot slowly came down. The motion looked slow, but the pressure packed inside it felt endless. The instant that foot truly landed, a thunderous boom exploded out, and the entire ground shook violently. A terrifying wave of power erupted straight from ManhwaCapped's body, and violent cyclones burst outward in every direction with him at the center. Every single spiral was filled with murderous force. Anyone caught by them would be crippled or killed on the spot. But even that was not the end. What came next was the heavenly demon's most iconic martial art. That technique was the heavenly demon sovereign spirit step, and every afterimage it created was a real body. The burly man stared in shock, almost wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him. Even the people on the other side thought the same. A cheap illusion trick like this, and you dare show it off in front of us? Since none of them believed it, he decided to let them test it for themselves. The first sword of the 3 swords of Qianshan charged in first, full of contempt. We, the 3 swords of Qianshan, would never be fooled by some low-level illusion art like yours. But what he never expected was that the sword he had already swung was blocked on the spot by one of the phantoms. At the same time, his other phantoms had already tangled themselves with the second sword as well. Bang, bang, bang. At that moment, ManhwaCapped looked like a slaughter god descending into the mortal world. The disciples of Qianshan were cut down one after another with no power to resist. And that massacre continued for a full 5 minutes. Before long, the third sword of Qianshan was already scared out of his mind, and one of his arms had been severed on the spot. What was even worse was that his elder brother and the rest of their disciples were already lying dead all across the snowy mountain. When he looked at ManhwaCapped again, all he felt was terror. This young man was 100 times more vicious than the demonic path itself. In the next instant, he threw all pride away and fled in panic with the few survivors he had left. He made no move to chase them, that he was simply tired of killing for the day, and that was enough. But that casual remark landed in the burly man's ears like thunder. So that was the reason he hadn't chased them. Not because he couldn't, and not because he was merciful, but simply because he was tired of killing. The burly man turned and looked at the hundreds of corpses around him, his scalp going numb. This is what he calls stopping here. In the martial world of today, the righteous sects were far stronger than the demonic path. In a world where orthodoxy crushed the demonic factions, surviving as a member of the demonic path was already brutally difficult. But things were different now, because a truly top-tier monster had just appeared. Thinking that, the burly man immediately bent low and asked ManhwaCapped to take him in as a disciple. "Hero, I admire you from the bottom of my heart. Will you please take me as your disciple and let me follow you through the Jianghu?" That request made him shudder inside. If you were some heroic beauty, maybe that'd be one thing. But you're way too ugly for this, and you're covered in hair. In the very next second, he bolted, "Don't follow me. If you keep tailing me, I'll wipe you out." One day later, ManhwaCapped arrived in the territory of Kaifeng Prefecture. And by then, what he had done on the snowy mountain the day before, slaughtering the disciples of Qianshan, had already shaken the entire martial world. These days, most people in the Jianghu were talking about him. Some are even saying that the Northern Sword Society's 2,000 swordsmen and the Jioding League's 500 elite fighters had already brutally wiped out 6 of the 7 kings of the demonic path during the hunt. The righteous factions gaining the upper hand over the 7 kings was not all that shocking on its own. But then a second piece of news spread, and that was the one that truly shook the entire martial world. It was said that the heavenly demon scholar, Passion, had personally slaughtered 528 men from the Northern Sword Society and another 127 from the Jioding League, like a demon god walking the earth. His strength was so terrifying that no one could even dream of reaching it. There were also rumors that his methods were unbelievably ruthless, and that every single strike he threw was meant to kill. From that day on, people across the Jianghu began whispering the same thing, that a demon god had descended during the Zhanwu era. But when ManhwaCapped heard those stories with his own ears, all he felt was that they were ridiculously exaggerated. No matter where he went now, he could hear people talking about him. Some said that everyone who had ever seen his true face had ended up dead. Others claimed he looked like a devil made flesh, hideous and terrifying. But some insisted he was actually a refined and handsome young nobleman. That second version, naturally, had come from Diakong, the second sword of Qianshan. In any case, the rumors outside were now saying that the Northern Sword Society had already dispatched a special investigation team, and that the entire martial world might soon be drenched in blood. The Heavenly Demon's hearing was absurdly sharp, so the moment he caught those conversations, he was overjoyed. "Not bad at all, brat. The whole Jianghu is talking about what we did. You just stepped into the martial world, and you already made this much noise, flashy, bold, and glorious. Sooner or later, the name Heavenly Demon Scholar Passion will shake the entire Jianghu." But all that chatter only sounded unbearably noisy to ManhwaCapped. Deep down, he felt like he had been dragged into a conflict he should never have touched, and the feeling left him uneasy. To make matters worse, the Heavenly Demon and Haineng started arguing inside him again. They fought like this hundreds of times a day, and his ears never got a moment of peace. What really bothered him, though, was the fact that Diakong had already seen his face. Because of that, ManhwaCapped felt he needed to disguise himself at least a little. That was when Haineng suddenly spoke up that, in his view, instead of going overboard with some dramatic disguise, it would be better to simply change the atmosphere around him. ManhwaCapped paused, confused. "What exactly do you mean by that, master? Why don't you explain a little more clearly?" 2.5 hours later, inside an inn, a server was just about to take a guest's food and wine order. But the moment she got closer, she froze. Somehow, she had already gotten flustered just looking at this ridiculously handsome young gentleman. By then, ManhwaCapped had already changed clothes, tied his hair up neatly, and bought himself a book. The whole look made him seem like a graceful young noble born to elegance. He watched the server for a while before lazily speaking up. 1 jug of wine and 10 small dishes. Did you hear me? Why are you staring at me like that? Only then did the server finally snap out of it. Why, yes, of course. I'll bring everything right away. But the look on her face hit me in a completely different way. My heart tightened. Don't tell me she somehow figured out my identity as passion. The server scratched her head and said, blushing, I know this is a little rude to say, but I've worked as a server for over 10 years, and I've never seen a man as handsome as you, young master. I just kind of froze for a second. Then she turned bright red and hurried off to the kitchen to fetch the wine. Before long, the food and wine were all brought to the table. He quietly poured himself a small cup and took a sip. Clack, he suddenly set the cup down hard against the table. This wine, it's like a sledgehammer. I frowned. The wine I used to drink back in the palace didn't taste like this. At that moment, Hainung spoke up from inside him. This little monk does not know the true taste of wine, but perhaps for ordinary people is one way to soothe themselves. What do you think, benefactor? Does the wine of the martial world taste different from what you knew before? He stared into the cup for a long while. Back when he was still emperor in the palace, fine wine and rich food had always been endless, and though he had plenty of chances to drink, he had never been one to indulge. The one who truly loved wine had been his uncle. But this time, for some reason, the wine tasted unbearably bitter to him. He turned to look at Hainung, and the monk calmly said, This little monk has heard that when the heart carries illness, even wine changes its taste. That only confused me even more. What sickness could possibly be in my heart? But what Hainung truly wanted to say lay deeper than that. He was warning ManhwaCapped that even if the slaughter this time had been unavoidable, the sins he committed would still be his alone to bear to S.O. If there were battles that could be avoided, they should be avoided whenever possible. More importantly, he must never allow himself to become a fool who killed the innocent for no reason. Perhaps only then would the wine in his cup turn sweet again. But as for when such a day might come, no one could say. ManhwaCapped fell silent for a moment, then finally nodded that Hainung was right. I absolutely cannot let myself become a monster who slaughters the innocent. The heavenly demon, however, clearly hated hearing that. He immediately sneered. You old monk always spout the same stale nonsense. Do you even know what wine tastes like? And have you already forgotten what happened on that snowy mountain? If we hadn't made a move then, we would have been the ones in the dirt. That's not just how the Jianghu works. That's how the whole damn world works. Don't tell me you still don't understand that. But Hainung urged the heavenly demon to be a little more tolerant. The benefactor only stepped into the martial world yesterday, and he already had to open the gates of slaughter. It's only natural that his state of mind would be shaken right now. The heavenly demon wanted none of it and sneered, I don't need any of that so-called tolerance. Sooner or later, that brat has to become a butcher like me. After hearing Hainung's words, he lowered his eyes and looked at his own hands. ManhwaCapped had never expected the heavenly demon's martial arts to be this terrifying, and that wild, unrestrained sense of freedom was something he had never felt before in his life. But if he used that power only for his own selfish desires, then how would he be any different from his uncle? That was why he silently resolved to remember every word Hainung had just said. In a low voice, ManhwaCapped said, The day I truly find the wine in my cup sweet, I will raise one to both of you. Only after saying that did he realize something awkward. The old monk probably could not even drink. Just as the three of them were bickering inside him, a new set of footsteps entered the inn. The moment the heavenly demon noticed the newcomer, he let out an excited laugh. Now, this is interesting. Then he immediately warned ManhwaCapped, a group's coming this way. Stay sharp. Soon enough, the owner of those footsteps came to a stop right in front of him. That instantly made ManhwaCapped cautious. Could this be someone sent by the Northern Sword Society? After all, their second sword, Hyo Diakong, had already seen his face. There was a good chance his portrait had already been spread through the sect by now. His wrist sank, and he set the wine cup down hard. If they had come looking for trouble, he had no intention of letting them leave in peace. But what surprised him was that the newcomer actually cupped his fists and bowed first, one of the highest forms of courtesy in the Jianghu. The man introduced himself as Dang Jinyu, a disciple of the Tang clan from Shu. ManhwaCapped simply gave a faint "oh," clearly having never heard the name before. Dang Jinyu did not seem offended. He merely pointed toward a nearby table and invited him to sit with them. ManhwaCapped glanced over and saw a group of young people seated there. Every one of them carried an aura far beyond that of ordinary wandering martial artists. He took another look and realized they were around his age, and every one of them was clearly from the martial world. Since he was bored anyway, it seemed like a decent chance to drink with them for a bit and casually gather some information about the Jianghu. Dang Jinyu quickly led him over and began introducing everyone one by one. Among them a man in white slowly rose to his feet. His voice rang out like thunder. "A pleasure to meet you, young master. I am known in the Jianghu by a modest title, the White Sword Divine Dragon, Namgung Hyakryan." Monpachion immediately cupped his fists in return. An honor. Then another man rose and bowed. "I am Iron Fist, Peng Jinhu." A young woman also greeted him with a smile. "This humble one is Namgung Warren. It is truly an honor to meet you today, young master." Still, in her heart, she could not help thinking, this young man is absurdly handsome. But beside her, Namgung Haimi was clearly less pleased. She quietly grumbled to herself. "What's so special about this guy? Why is everyone acting so excited?" Monpachion smiled and returned the greeting with a cupped fist salute. "A pleasure to meet you all. I am called Scholarmon, just a wandering drifter traveling the world. To share a table with all of you today is truly an honor." That instantly made the heavenly demon grumble inside him. "You've got some nerve. Now you're making up another name for yourself? What? Was one passion not enough for you?" Namgung Hyakryan burst into laughter. "So you're young master one. What a pleasure. Up until that moment, I had assumed the people in front of me were simply fellow martial artists around my age. But after hearing their introductions, I realized that these 4 men and 4 women were far more important than I had expected. It was said that, compared to hardline orthodox powers like the Northern Sword Society and the Southern Saber Alliance, the force that carried itself with relatively more fairness and openness was the 5 Union Assembly. And that 5 Union Assembly had been formed by 5 sects joining hands. Those 5 were the Namgung clan, the Tang clan of Shu, the Peng family of Abei, the Yun family of Jinzhou, and the Morong clan. To put it simply, the young men and women before me were the rising talents meant to support the future of the 5 Union Assembly, the most outstanding prodigies of their respective factions. Even so, I still found one thing strange. Why were they in Kaifeng Prefecture? As far as I remembered, this place was nowhere near Jiangnan. The heavenly demon sounded genuinely surprised inside me. This brat, does he seriously know absolutely nothing about the martial world? Before long, someone answered for me. As we just mentioned, young Masterwin, we belong to the 5 Union Assembly. And Kaifeng is not only home to the Beggar Sect's main headquarters, but also the mountain gate of the Northern Sword Society. That cleared things up for me, though the fact that the Northern Sword Society's base was here still caught me off guard. I scratched my head and admitted awkwardly, I really didn't expect the martial world to be this complicated and so many factions, all tangled together. To be honest, I really don't know much about it all. Namgung Hyakryan only laughed it off. That's nothing that if young Masterwin doesn't understand something about the Jianghu, just ask me. Then he patiently explained further that in today's Jianghu, people were broadly divided into only 2 camps, the orthodox path and the demonic path. Once someone stepped in the martial world, sooner or later they had to choose one side. But that immediately gave me a question that if the world truly only offered those 2 roads, then what about people who wanted to remain apart? Those who refused to join the orthodox path and also refused to submit to the demonic path. What happened to them? Namgung Hyakryan let out a long sigh. Very few such people exist. Anyone caught in the middle usually gets treated as an enemy by both sides and ends up hunted down by both. That answer sounded fundamentally wrong to me, so I cut in at once. I have a question that if the answer is always to execute the other side, then who exactly decides that they deserve death? At that, Namgung Hyakryan clenched his fist slightly and for the first time looked uncomfortable. But after a brief silence, he still answered, "In practice, the orthodox path decides." The moment those words fell, the entire table went quiet, and no one said another word. Clearly, all of them knew there was something unjust about that. Even though Namgung Hyakryan himself belonged to the orthodox path, he clearly believed that suppressing the demonic path in this way was not true justice. Hearing that, even I felt a jolt in my chest. Those were not words one could throw around carelessly. If the wrong person heard an orthodox disciple speaking on behalf of the demonic path, it could ruin his future. Even the heavenly demon found him interesting. Look at this kid. Sure, he's some greenhorn from the righteous side, but his head's in the right place. At that point, his younger sister quickly warned him, "You absolutely can't say things like that outside. Someone will target you for it." In truth, I knew Namgung Hyakryan was not wrong, but being right did not solve anything. Even if he was one of the 5 Union Assembly's prized rising stars, words like these probably still would not change the current balance of the Orthodox world. Even so, this man had already earned a place in my mind. And Namgung Hyakryan clearly found me easy to talk to as well, smiling as he said, "Since young Masterwin seems so interested in the martial world, you should ask more." Taking the chance, I finally asked the question I truly wanted answered. It may be a bit abrupt, but I honestly want to know, in the martial world today, who is the strongest? Namgung Hyok Ryan was clearly taken aback. He had not expected me to ask something like that so suddenly. Even the others at the table reacted strangely, and some looked openly displeased. Could that question really be this sensitive? This time, however, Namgung Hyok Ryan did not avoid the question. If you ask who the strongest person in the martial world is today, that's honestly not easy to answer. Everyone has their own view. Some would say the leaders of the four great orthodox powers. Others would point to the Grandmaster of the demonic path, the North Sea Sword King, or the Qing High Reaper. The Heavenly Demon was openly disdainful. I haven't even heard of any of those names. Still, even he had to admit that the Jianghu was far too vast. At any moment, a top-tier monster could appear out of nowhere. Mun Pachion then asked another question. If that's the case, then what about Master Hainong, the sixth patriarch of Shaolin? This time, visible unease flashed across Namgung Hyok Ryan's face. That was a figure from 700 years ago. It's very hard to judge someone like that. At the side, the Heavenly Demon burst into laughter. Looks like even you can't do anything against time, old monk. You could never reach a height like mine. The name Heavenly Demon is the one that truly stands above all ages. After that, Mun Pachion casually asked what people thought of the Heavenly Demon himself. Namgung Hyok Ryan's expression stiffened instantly. Why would you ask something so rarely brought up, and why are all your questions about ancient figures? At that moment, he realized something. This young master one did not seem merely ignorant of the Jianghu, but on the contrary. He knew names that usually only appeared in old martial records. Most records about the Heavenly Demon sound like unbelievable legends that it's hard to say what's true and what isn't. That answer only made the Heavenly Demon more irritated. What's there to doubt? Even those old monsters beyond the heavens know those stories are real. Just as they were about to keep talking, a sudden scream from outside the inn seized everyone's attention. Turning toward the sound, they saw a group of Orthodox disciples chasing a young girl. At the front stood a white-haired man, sneering coldly. "You little brat, did you really think you could escape our grasp?" The girl's face was wet with tears as she begged them for mercy, but it clearly had no effect. These men were disciples of the Northern Sword Society, and they were hunting her down on the grounds that she was connected to the demonic path. Their leader was Ja Diok Sam, Deputy Tiger Commander of the Northern Sword Society's Enforcement Division, better known as the White Tiger Sword. Namgung Hyok Ryan and the others did not step in right away. Instead, they stood to the side and watched first. In the next moment, one of the disciples grabbed the girl by the hair and yanked her up violently. With a savage expression, he snarled, "To save your own life, you even abandoned your own father and ran by yourself. You've got some nerve, girl." But just as he was about to drag her away by force, a cold voice suddenly cut him off. The one who stepped forward was none other than Namgung Hymi. She had always hated seeing the strong bully the weak. Her sword flashed free, and the tip pointed straight at the Northern Sword Society. "If you don't let go right now, I will draw blood." Since when did Kaifeng Prefecture become this lawless? Is this what your so-called righteous path looks like, bullying a helpless young girl? Her words instantly stirred anger throughout the inn. People began voicing their dissatisfaction one after another. Even if you're from a Northern Sword Society, this has gone too far. You have to let her go today. Ja Deoksam finally loosened his grip on the girl's hair, but his tone remained hard. Anyone who interferes with the Northern Sword Society's affairs will be punished. Namgung Hymi answered with a cold laugh. "You think I'm easy to scare? My name is Namgung Hymi. Your Northern Sword Society's reputation might frighten other people, but it won't frighten me." The moment those words were spoken, the entire inn erupted in whispers, and no one had expected that she was actually from the Namgung clan. If that was true, then wasn't she the daughter of the Heavenly Sword? That immediately made Ja Deoksam feel the pressure. He clearly hadn't expected to run into someone this troublesome. So he lowered his posture as much as he could and said politely, "Miss, there's an unwritten rule in the Jianghu. People do not casually interfere in the affairs of another sect." But Namgung Hymi gave him absolutely no face. "I'm not stupid enough to confuse right and wrong as someone of the martial world. I have even less reason to stand by and ignore injustice." In her eyes, these people were plainly using their power to bully that girl. That gave Ja Deoksam a headache. Perhaps you don't understand. That girl is Seol Jubong, daughter of Seol Hocheon Su, sect leader of the demonic path faction Demon Mirror sect here in Kaifeng. His tone had already grown as mild as possible, because he needed to explain the situation clearly that if trouble exploded here, he would have no way to justify it later. But if the other side still insisted on interfering, then force might be the only option left. Just then, A bold burst of laughter rang straight into Ja Deoksam's ears. The one laughing was none other than Namgung, Haime's older brother. So what you're saying is, you want to use force. Since when did a mere enforcement division from a Northern Sword Society become arrogant enough to bark like this? As he spoke, he strode through the crowd and took his place at the very front. That sheer presence alone was enough to shake the room. But inside, he was thinking something completely different. Damn it, I still couldn't help getting involved after all. Ja Deoksam obviously did not want to escalate matters, because the people before him were not ones he could easily afford to offend. We are carrying out official duties. I know the Namgung clan is not easy to provoke, but if the Northern Sword Society fails to complete its assigned mission, we won't have it easy either. Then his tone sharpened. So was that threat just now meant for us? Hearing that, Namgung Hyok only sneered again and again. Then go ahead and take it as a threat. What are you going to do about it? The other side clearly knew they could not afford to provoke the Namgung clan, so they were just about to report the matter upward. But at that exact moment, another man stepped into the inn. The newcomer was none other than the captain of the Northern Sword Society's Enforcement Division, Neo Hainyung, known as the Smiling Face Killing Sword. He said calmly, "All of you, step back. There's no need to report something this minor. Leave it to me." The moment the captain appeared, the others immediately dropped to one knee in respectful greeting. Munpachion took the chance to study the man carefully and felt at once that this stick-thin fellow looked wrong in every possible way. Faint strands of green light were drifting off Neo Hainyung's body. An ordinary person would never have noticed it. But Munpachion could clearly sense the sinister chill hidden inside that green glowed. It was not the kind of aura that should ever come from someone of the righteous path. With a sharp hiss, Neo Hainyung drew the sword from his back and barked. From this moment on, no one is allowed to leave this inn. Then he walked step by step to stand before Namgung Hyok and asked, "So what now? Are you going to interfere in this matter or not?" A sinister smile hung on his face that it was obvious he wanted to see what kind of choice this young master of the Namgung clan would make. But that very expression instantly enraged the heavenly demon inside Munpachion. What a disgusting little rat. Since ancient times, these so-called righteous bastards have always been wolves in sheep's clothing. Passion, just go crush them already. But Munpachion cursed back inside his head at once. What? Do you want me to blow my identity wide open right here? The heavenly demon, however, already had what he considered the perfect answer. Then just kill everyone here if they're all dead. Who's left to leak your identity? That plan obviously was not going to work. Just then, Hainung spoke up as well. In that case, why not use this little monk's martial art instead? At that moment, the two sides were still locked in a dead standoff, and the tension had grown so thick it was hard to breathe. Namgung Hyok was so furious his teeth nearly cracked. "That girl is coming with us? If you won't agree to that, then I will go with you myself and watch every step of your so-called investigation. Whether her father belongs to the demonic path or is branded an enemy of the world has nothing to do with her. And if you refuse even that, then we won't let this go either." In the next instant, the captain's vicious side finally showed. That's the line I was waiting for. I finally have an excuse to start this fight. A chill ran through Namgung Hyok chest. The aura bursting out of this man felt bizarrely sinister. Even Ja Deoksam's face changed on the spot. The captain was truly angry now. This was the look he only wore when he had already decided someone had to die. The captain threw back his head and laughed. "You little brats hiding behind your clan names really don't know the height of heaven. If you've got the guts, then come take her away yourselves." The young disciples from the 5 great families did not back down in the slightest. "If you want to fight, then we will fight to the end." At that, the captain slowly drew the long sword from his back, though he did not strike immediately. He hated the sight of them, but the truth was that they belonged to the 5 Union Assembly, and he could not attack them without thinking. Still, the more he looked at those young heirs standing there so confidently, the more his fury rose. In the next moment, he suddenly pressed the blade straight against the girl's throat. "If that's how it is, then I'll just kill her right here today. Once she's dead, there won't be anything left to argue about." Namgung Hyok face changed drastically. "You despicable bastard, and you still dare call yourself a man of the righteous path?" The captain only let out a sinister chuckle. "Sure, maybe it's a little excessive. So what? What if I kill this woman right here, right now? What exactly are you going to do about it?" Those taunts made Namgung Haime tremble with rage. This man was arrogant beyond reason, a lawless monster. But right at that moment, a figure flashed, appearing in front of the captain in an instant. Then a kick crashed out without the slightest hesitation, slamming directly into his forehead. Those words had pushed Munpachion past the limit. He simply could not hold back any longer. With a violent crash, the captain was sent flying away by that single kick. The sight left the Namgung siblings stunned. This guy really moved the instant he decided to act. But what shocked Namgung Hyok even more came right after that. ManhwaCapped was now suspended in midair, not falling at all. And this was none other than Shaolin's long-lost supreme movement art, Stairway to Heaven. The captain's earlier words had truly enraged him, and now he stared down coldly from above without a trace of expression. The captain had only just managed to recover when he realized he still didn't even know which madman had dared humiliate him like this. But in the next second, his eyes widened in utter disbelief. ManhwaCapped was walking through the air as though gravity meant absolutely nothing to him. Everyone present was struck dumb. He was walking in the sky, that a supreme movement art like that actually existed in this world. The captain knew one thing for certain. This man did not belong to the Five Union Assembly. But no matter how hard he thought, he could not figure out where a monster like this had come from. In the next instant, ManhwaCapped blurred and appeared right in front of the captain. His voice turned ice cold. "Let that girl go. Otherwise, no one here is getting out clean today." But the captain, still burning from the humiliation he had just suffered, refused to listen at all. He snarled, "Then try and stop us if you've got the guts." ManhwaCapped immediately shifted into stance. "If you insist on refusing good advice, then don't blame me for turning this place into a slaughterhouse." In the very next breath, his palms moved, and the pressure of Shaolin's immortal palm and bamboo leaf hand seemed to surface at once. A single strike from either was enough to shatter a man's organs. And if the Vajra palm was unleashed in full, the massive five-fingered force it formed could crush a man alive on the spot. The sight sent a chill straight down Namgung Hyok's back. These were long-lost Shaolin arts. Where in the world had this young man learned them? But ManhwaCapped had no interest in explaining himself. Mere dogs of the Northern Sword Society had no right to bark in front of him. The captain's heart shook, though he forced himself to bark back. "I don't know who you are, but why are you so determined to interfere?" Even as he spoke, one hand quietly slid toward his sword hilt. The next second, ManhwaCapped slapped him across the face so hard it cracked like thunder. "Did I say you were allowed to move? I've already heard enough of this Northern Sword Society dog routine. Let the girl go. Stop talking." But the captain still refused to yield. "Even if you're strong, you'll never stand against the Northern Sword Society." He never even finished the sentence. ManhwaCapped drove a punch into his stomach, then followed with a kick that blasted him flying across the room. "If you insist on ignoring good sense, then don't blame me for getting rough." Thud, 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 thud in the next instant. ManhwaCapped's figure flickered again and again, each kick crashing into the captain's body until it looked like he was about to come apart. By the time the captain regained his senses, he realized in horror that his acupoints had been sealed without him even noticing. Meanwhile, ManhwaCapped descended slowly from above, one leg extended straight like a sword. The captain stared at his own abdomen in terror. That final kick, packed with overwhelming force, had stopped just a hair before impact. IT had not actually landed. But if he kept being stupid, the next one would not stop. For the captain, though, that only felt like mockery. Humiliation twisted into rage, and he immediately ordered every member of the enforcement division to swarm ManhwaCapped together. Lifting his eyes, ManhwaCapped saw a wave of Northern Sword Society disciples charging straight at him. He could only feel speechless. Even now, these idiots still thought mob tactics would work. Against trash like you, I don't even need a weapon. That a little wine bottle is enough. With that, he flicked the bottle off the table with the tip of his foot. IT shot out and smashed straight into one disciple's skull, knocking the man backward in a full tumble. Off to the side, Sam was stunned. These subordinates of his were no ordinary weaklings. Anyone who could kick one of them down so casually had to possess monstrously deep internal power. But his shock was only beginning. In the next instant, ManhwaCapped planted one palm directly on his face. Then he drove him hard into the ground and said coldly, "They tried talking to you nicely just now. We didn't listen, so now you get beaten instead." That scene completely stunned the Northern Sword Society disciples. With their level of strength, they were nothing in front of ManhwaCapped. He let out a faint laugh. "Looks like you finally understand. Swarm tactics mean nothing against a real master." But then another Northern Sword Society disciple roared, "A brat like you dares act this arrogant. Today we'll make you suffer and teach you what the Northern Sword Society really means." With that, the man flashed and appeared behind ManhwaCapped in an instant. But the moment he closed in, dense internal force had already gathered in ManhwaCapped's palm, visible threads of blue light coiling around it. Bang! One palm strike blasted that man away on the spot. Those dogs of the Northern Sword Society charged at him like newborn calves with no fear of tigers, rushing him in a frenzy. ManhwaCapped simply met them head-on, his fists and palms smashing heavily into their chests one after another. This time, I need to hit a little harder. Otherwise, these idiots will never learn what pain feels like. The sight stunned MangaMangacapped so badly that he nearly forgot how to speak. Because what ManhwaCapped had just used was clearly Shaolin's bamboo leaf hand, a technique normally reserved for elite inner disciples. And that was not all. The immortal palm and Vajra palm he had used earlier were also among Shaolin's most famous supreme arts. These techniques have been passed down for more than 800 years, yet somehow they had appeared in the hands of a young man they had only just met. Could he really be some core Shaolin disciple? But then, why did he still have hair? That same scene made the captain tremble with rage and fear. He immediately tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. In the blink of an eye, he was already in front of ManhwaCapped, roaring viciously, "You little bastard, today I'm killing you." But the moment he finished those words, his whole body locked up, and a layer of golden light even began to spread over his face. ManhwaCapped had already planted his stance firmly, his right palm drawing sideways as power surged into it. Then he struck. The golden aura condensed around his body was driven straight into the captain's chest. With a thunderous boom, a five-fingered burst of golden force blasted the captain flying, and that was none other than Shaolin's Vajra palm. At that point, even MangaMangacapped no longer knew what to say. That was unmistakably the Vajra palm. But wasn't that technique supposed to be one that only abbots or equivalent figures could pass down? And yet this young man was carrying several of the 72 arts of Shaolin within him. Not long after, the entire and finally fell quiet again. MangaMangacapped hurried over with a worried expression, asking the girl whether she had been hurt. As for the captain, he had already been beaten flat onto the ground, stripped of every bit of arrogance he had shown before. ManhwaCapped walked over to him and warned him coldly, "Listen carefully, I'll only say this once. Order every member of your enforcement division to withdraw right now, and from this moment on, no one follows up on this matter again. And if you dare ignore what I say, then I'll make sure you experience a kind of pain you've never known in your life. Understood?" The captain was horrified because he could tell the other man was speaking directly into his ears through secret voice transmission. He immediately nodded like a cat with its tail stepped on. "Understood. Understood. As long as you spare my life, I'll be eternally grateful." Only then did ManhwaCapped slowly straighten up. "Now that's more like it. With that arrogant face you had earlier, anyone would have wanted to beat you." The sight of him scolding the captain like a dog left everyone behind him frozen in shock. But when ManhwaCapped turned around, he found the entire place had filled with staring onlookers. That made him suddenly awkward. "Looks like I may have blown this up a little too much. Oh, how exactly am I supposed to explain this now?" In the end, he could only force out a polite but stiff smile. "I'm a little tired from fighting today, so how about we just stop here for now? Maybe clean up the inn first." Once things had been more or less tidied up, he sat back down at the table with MangaMangacapped and the others. But this time, every single one of them wore an unusually serious expression, which only made ManhwaCapped feel even more awkward. On top of that, the captain he had just beaten into the ground was somehow now sitting at the same table too. The whole scene made ManhwaCapped feel like he was sitting on needles. After all, when I first met them, I kept claiming I knew absolutely nothing about the martial world, and then turn around and unleash the 72 arts of Shaolin. To ease the tension, I had simply dragged that guy over as well, figuring this was as good a time as any to smooth over today's grudge. Peng Jinhu was the first to frown, clearly displeased. "This is getting a little ridiculous. Even if you wanted to keep things hidden, there should have been a limit. You lied to us, and you can still sit there smiling? We treated you like a friend." MangaMangacapped was just as annoyed. "Exactly, young masterwind. This joke went way too T. First you acted like someone who didn't understand the martial world at all, and now it turns out your internal power is this monstrous." MangaMangacapped, on the other hand, looked rather taken with the whole thing. This kind of hidden master who played weak on purpose was exactly the type she liked, and in her eyes, the fight from earlier had been absurdly cool. Left with no other choice, ManhwaCapped cupped his fists and apologized properly. "In the end, I really do owe all of you an apology. I did not mean to deceive anyone before. It's just that I truly had reasons I couldn't openly explain. So on this matter, I hope you won't be too harsh on me." Then he lifted his head and added seriously, "But there's one thing I really did not lie about. I truly know almost nothing about the martial world. At the end of the day, I really am just a newcomer who only recently stepped into the Jianghu." Even as he said that, he still felt awkward. "You're not all seriously going to hold this against me forever, are you? If you do, wouldn't that be a little beneath the grace of the Five Union Assembly? Hearing that, Namgung Hyok Ryan burst out laughing. Young Masterwind, what kind of thing is that to say? If you still have questions, just ask me. He was the sort of straightforward and open-hearted man who had no intention of losing a newly made friend over a little concealment. Even so, curiosity still gnawed at him. That said, I do want to know what this so-called reason you couldn't speak of actually is. That if you're willing, why not tell us? At the very least, it'd be an explanation for today. What exactly is young Master Wind's real identity? That question genuinely caught Mun Pachion off guard that if he really told the truth, the whole table would probably have to kneel on the spot. But just then, a flash of inspiration crossed his mind, and what felt like the perfect excuse surfaced immediately. So without changing expression in the slightest, he said, since young Master Namgung has put it that way, then I won't hide it any longer. The truth is, I inherited the true teachings of Master Hainung, the sixth patriarch of Shaolin. The moment those words landed, everyone at the table changed expression. Master Hainung was a figure from 800 years ago. How could his true teachings possibly have ended up in the hands of a living young man? The heavenly demon laughed so hard he nearly lost it. This brat really is unrivaled when it comes to making things up. Yet strangely enough, Hainung himself felt that what he had said might not be entirely false either. Namgung Haimi was the first to reject it outright. That's impossible. I absolutely cannot understand how the ultimate arts of someone from 800 years ago could have survived to this day and then somehow ended up with you. That question actually stalled Mun Pachion for a brief moment. Namgung Haimi raised one finger and continued pressing him. Think about it yourself. What era was Master Hainung from? And how exactly could you have inherited his teachings? What? Are you immortal? Some ancient monster who's lived for thousands of years? Her words sounded almost ridiculous, but the two others at the table also seemed half convinced by the logic. Clearly, they too found the idea of an 800-year-old legacy suddenly reappearing a little too unbelievable. The heavenly demon laughed even harder inside him. Now, I really want to see how you'll explain your way out of this one, that ordinary lies aren't getting past these people. But Mun Pachon only chuckled. The reason you're all so confused is because I didn't explain it clearly earlier that, of course, I never met Master Hainung in person. I was born on Mount Tai and raised there as well. When I was around 7 years old, I accidentally discovered a cave in the mountain. Back then, I was just a child, restless and curious, the kind who would crawl into any cave I found. And once inside, I discovered scripture nearly 300 pages long, an ancient, worn text so old it looked ready to fall apart. But back then, I was still illiterate, so of course I couldn't understand a single word of it. Even so, I kept the manual safe. Only after I later learned to read did I finally realize that it was a peerless martial scripture. From the moment I could understand the text, I began visiting the cave almost every single day. The scripture was dense and difficult, but after years of bitter practice, I gradually managed to grasp parts of it. Then one day, with a casual palm strike, I produced something that felt capable of splitting mountains and seas. The force thundered so loudly that even I was stunned. From that moment on, I knew I had truly inherited the 72 arts left behind by Master Hainung 800 years ago. Of course, right now I've only learned maybe 20 or 30% of it. If anything, it would be more accurate to say I've only barely inherited a fragment of Master Hainung's legacy. After hearing that explanation, even Namgung Haimi could only half believe it. If she had not seen him fight with her own eyes, she never would have accepted such a story. Namgung Hyok Ryan, on the other hand, looked thrilled for him. That's a true fated opportunity. Chances like that are rare even in the Jianghu, and even if one finds them, it doesn't mean one can actually inherit them. Mun Pachon immediately cupped his fists and said respectfully, "In any case, hiding things from all of you before was never my intention, but I hope you can forgive me for that, and I thank you sincerely." Namgung Hyok Ryan returned the salute at once. "Young Master Wen, you mustn't say that. If anything, your appearance is a blessing for the righteous martial world. It seems we'll need to be even more careful in how we treat you from now on." That sudden statement left me genuinely startled. Why should you treat me carefully? What exactly does that mean? Can't we simply be friends? Namgung Hyok Ryan laughed heartily. It really does seem that young Master Wen knows nothing about Jianghu customs. One of the most important things in the martial world is seniority, and if your inheritance truly traces back to the line of the sixth patriarch of Shaolin, then your generational standing would be terrifyingly high. How could we possibly treat you lightly? As soon as he said that, the others at the table nodded as well. Inside the Jianghu, the rules really are like that. Outside the Jianghu, of course, we can still treat each other as equals and friends. In the next moment, laughter rose once more around the tavern. Come on, a toast to our meeting today. The only one still miserable was the captain off to the side, his face full of gloom. Just what kind of rotten fate had landed him here, drinking with this bunch? But the next second, his whole body stiffened because ManhwaCapped suddenly spoke. Stop frowning, I already let you off. What exactly are you still unhappy about? The captain jerked his head up in confusion, only to realize that ManhwaCapped was not even looking at him. He was still casually chatting and drinking with the Namgung group. On the surface, he was smiling and talking with everyone else. But the message was clearly aimed at the captain alone. If you keep ruining the mood here, then go ahead and get out. And you should know perfectly well what will happen if you start talking too much. In that instant, the captain finally understood. This monster could speak and laugh with one group while secretly pressuring him at the same time. Use a technique like that so casually. Just how deep was his internal power? Then ManhwaCapped slowly added, Hero Nyo. And those two words alone were enough to drench Nyo Hyenyung in cold sweat. The smile on ManhwaCapped's face looked almost gentle, but the threat beneath it was unmistakable. There won't be any more complications after this, right? Nyo Hyenyung immediately lowered his head. Absolutely not. There will be no further trouble. Young master can drink with his friends in peace. Only after hearing that answer did I smile in satisfaction. Good. Then Hero Nyo should head back first. Don't you still need to recover from your injuries? By nightfall, I was taken to a residence, and it turned out to be an impressively grand manor. Earlier, once Namgung Hyokrin learned that I had nowhere to stay, he had been delighted and immediately suggested, if that's the case, then young master one should simply stay with us. The Jianghu truly had many things the palace never did. Take the hot spring in front of me, for example. That kind of easy, unrestrained comfort had never existed in the imperial palace. I had only wanted to pass a few quiet days in peace, yet heaven seemed determined to throw trouble at me wherever I went. The heavenly demon, however, only found that natural. That's what life is like for the strong, but that's fate. Whether you want trouble or not, trouble will come looking for you. Even so, ManhwaCapped knew one thing clearly. If Hyenyung had not helped smooth things over today, his identity might truly have been exposed. Thinking of that, he could only let out a soft sigh. Too many things had happened today, so many that even he was starting to feel exhausted. Just then, a man suddenly stepped in from outside. ManhwaCapped had been resting with his eyes closed, only to be jolted awake by the heavenly demon's sharp yell, urging him to look toward the newcomer at once. The man had a fierce face, and his build was ridiculously huge, so broad and towering that he looked almost twice his size. ManhwaCapped stared at him for a moment, and suddenly felt that the guy looked strangely familiar, like someone he had seen before. The bearded brute, meanwhile, looked just as stunned. I never imagined I would run into my master in a place like this. Then it clicked. This was the very same burly man he had met on the snowy mountain a few days ago. Back then, I found a man so ridiculously hairy that I wanted nothing to do with him and simply ran off. There was no way I wanted a disciple like that. Now, standing in a hot spring, ManhwaCapped instinctively took a few steps backward. He truly had not expected this clingy lunatic to follow him all the way here. The hairy brute immediately bowed low. Master, please accept this disciple's respect. The moment he heard that, ManhwaCapped felt a headache coming on. His ears almost hurt from the sheer volume. You idiot, shut up. You seriously chased me all the way here? The brute slapped his own chest and said in complete earnestness, I'm already a man who's died once. Since you saved my life, then this life naturally belongs to you now. That left ManhwaCapped speechless. This guy was stubborn, troublesome, and completely impossible to deal with. But at that exact moment, the heavenly demon started stirring things up from the side, saying that having a subordinate around was not such a bad idea. That actually made me think. Having a lackey might indeed be useful. The problem was that someone this huge and conspicuous would attract attention just by standing there. That wouldn't it be better to stash him somewhere no one else would see him for now? The moment that thought struck me, the perfect place came to mind. I muttered inwardly that the other two really had no right to blame me for this one, because this guy was simply too clingy. Then I said, I can take you in as a subordinate, but you'll have to go somewhere first. Meanwhile, at the foot of Mount Tai, the two elders suddenly felt a faint trembling nearby. They exchanged puzzled looks, unsure where the disturbance was coming from, especially since it had been going on for a while now. Before long, they spotted a burly man approaching from the distance, carrying an absurd amount of baggage on his back. After several days of hard travel, Hot Gunpyo, the Azure Flame Demon King, had finally arrived. The moment he saw the two elders ahead, his face lit up with excitement. The scene shifted back to the hot spring a few days earlier. The moment Ha Gunpyo learned that I was willing to accept him, he looked ecstatic beyond words. But ManhwaCapped knew full well that with his current strength, the man was nowhere near qualified to follow him around, yet that he needed time to cultivate first. That was why he had sent Ha Gunpyo off to a designated place to train in seclusion, telling him to come back only after raising his strength enough to be useful. The moment Ha Gunpyo saw the two elders, he dropped to his knees in a respectful bow. I am Ha Gunpyo, the Azure Flame Demon King, a BY the Sovereign's command. I have come to pay respects to the two masters residing on Mount Tai. That single line completely confused the two elders. Masters? What masters? And what exactly was going on here? This place was never supposed to be known by outsiders, so why had our sovereign sent this broad-backed giant to us? Elder UI let out a long sigh. I truly have no idea what our sovereign is trying to do this time. Elsewhere, ManhwaCapped was sitting cross-legged outside the doorway, facing the east, quietly guiding his breath and drawing in the purple energy of dawn. At that moment, a large hand, faintly glowing with golden light, rested firmly against his back. That hand belonged to none other than Master Hainung, who was currently helping him stabilize his foundation while teaching him the most basic principles of internal circulation. Hainung said slowly, "The flow of breath should move like water. Never force it upstream, that IT must always follow the current." At that moment, he slowly opened his eyes and let out a long breath. ManhwaCapped could now control the flow of his internal energy far more smoothly than before. The heavenly demon, however, looked down on it completely, eye in his eyes. This kind of basic training was meaningless and nothing but a waste of time. But then he changed the subject and asked with a grin, "Passion, have you actually thought about what you plan to do from here on?" The truth was, he had no answer. ManhwaCapped himself did not know where he was supposed to go or what road lay ahead. The heavenly demon let out a low laugh. "I was kind enough to hand all my martial arts to you, and this is all the ambition you've got. If you really have no plans, then I can map out your future myself." ManhwaCapped only snorted. "Give it a rest. With your personality, your so-called plan probably just means telling me to kill my way across the world." After saying that, he simply flopped backward in complete surrender. Grand ambitions or not, the one thing he wanted most right now was simply to live freely. He never again wanted anything to bind his steps, nor did he want anyone else to control his thoughts or actions. Strangely enough, those words only made the heavenly demon even more excited. Exactly. If you won't even do the wicked things you feel like doing, what's the point of being alive? But Huaining immediately cut in. "Benefactor, you must not listen to him. And no matter what happens, you must not become someone who delights in evil. The world may dazzle and confuse the eye, but once you see through its surface, you will find that all things have their natural course. You must never let empty obsession and vanity waste your life. That is precisely the law you should follow now that you possess this power." Both of them were clearly trying to guide him in their own way. Yet the more ManhwaCapped listened, the stranger it all felt. Sometimes he had the absurd sensation that he was living with a monstrously powerful rogue and an unbearably stiff old monk lodged inside his head. The next moment, he sat upright and cut them both off. "Enough. Both of you, stop talking to my life is my own, and I'll decide what to do with it myself." Even so, one question kept weighing on him. Why had he only inherited their martial arts and not the rest of their memories? It felt almost as though someone had deliberately scrambled the parts of memory that mattered. So he finally asked, "Then what do I have to do if I want those memories to become more complete?" The heavenly demon raised one finger and said with disdain, "Once your internal power and cultivation deepen, the missing memories will naturally come back. When your strength reaches 60 years of cultivation, you should be able to fuse the three of us into one completely. And when that happens, there may be other uses too." ManhwaCapped frowned. "And what exactly are these other uses you keep talking about?" The heavenly demon bared his teeth in a grin. "Before complete fusion, if someone uses the returning to death art to kill you first, then we can temporarily act in your place. And after total fusion, maybe it'll even be possible to release us from your body entirely." But the wild laughter on his face made it painfully obvious what he was really thinking. Once that day came, he wanted to seize the body for himself. Naturally, ManhwaCapped saw straight through him and asked in return, "If releasing you is really possible, then does that mean you could leave this place completely or even move into someone else's body?" Watching those two bicker noisily inside his head again, he fell silent. But the heavenly demon's words from just now had already sunk deep into his mind. Before long, midnight arrived, yet he still lay awake in his room without any intention of sleeping. Then, without warning, the heavenly demon suddenly shouted, Get up, heavenly demon scholar passion. At that moment, ManhwaCapped was covered in cold sweat, looking like a man who had just clawed his way out of nightmare. Huaning could not help asking, "Benefactor, what kind of dream did you see to suffer like this?" ManhwaCapped only gave a dry laugh and said it was nothing, though this time he truly did owe the heavenly demon for forcing him awake. The heavenly demon clicked his tongue. "Save the gratitude for later. Someone is getting close to your room right now." That instantly made his heart tighten. Could it be one of the enemies he offended earlier, coming in the night to settle the score? A faint creak sounded, and all three turned their attention toward the door at once. Now that ManhwaCapped was awake, no matter who it was, they would not be able to harm him easily. And yet, even so, that creeping tension still made it hard for him to steady himself. Only then did he truly understand. This was the Jianghu. Just then, he turned toward the doorway and saw a red-haired figure slowly stepping inside. The visitor was none other than Namgung Haimi. Clearly unable to sleep, she had quietly made her way to his room in the middle of the night. That left ManhwaCapped speechless, that he barely had that much interaction with her. So why had she come to him so late? What he did not know was that Haimi's thoughts were far simpler. That young man is just too handsome. It's only been a short while, and I already miss him terribly. She slowly slipped off the outer robe draped over her shoulders and walked toward him with soft, deliberate steps. Only then did ManhwaCapped finally realize what was happening. Namgung Haimi had come tonight intending to offer herself to him. Even he was startled by that. He truly had not expected this young lady of the Namgung clan to fall for him so directly. Inside him, Huaning kept warning him to hold fast to his heart. Meanwhile, Namgung Haimi was already displaying her charm to the fullest. But ManhwaCapped responded in the least romantic way possible by directly pinching her cheek. He said helplessly, "A young lady visiting me in the dead of night puts me in a rather awkward position. You should head back before things get complicated." Haimi's eyes reddened, and she almost looked ready to cry. "Why are you being so heartless, young master? Don't tell me. You simply don't like me?" That question was genuinely hard to deal with at SO. He could only answer stiffly, "It's not that I dislike you, Mississippi, it's just that with my identity, I really am not worthy of you, that I'm only a newcomer who just stepped into the martial world." Then he respectfully cupped his fists. "I appreciate your kindness, truly, but this matter is inconvenient in too many ways." Hearing that, Namgung Haimi's expression clearly dimmed. "What do you mean worthy or unworthy? After what you showed today, it's obvious I'm the one unworthy of you, that a man like you must have entered the Jianghu with grand ambitions. If anyone doesn't measure up, it should be me." As she spoke, her voice even began to catch. "If the young master truly has no feelings for me, then I'll go back tonight. But even if I leave obediently this time, I will never give up on you." That only left ManhwaCapped giving an awkward smile. "You should just go get some rest. Hey, as far as I can tell, you're not actually in any trouble, and that little choked-up act just now was probably fake, wasn't it?" Bang. The door slammed shut behind Namgung Haimi. The heavenly demon instantly cursed him for being an idiot. "You clueless fool! Since ancient times, what great hero wasn't a romantic?" But Huaning openly approved of what he had done, praising him for at least preserving his original heart at a S for ManhwaCapped. Even he had to admit he never expected a thing like this to happen tonight, that IT had truly caught him off guard. After a while, he slowly rose to his feet, clearly preparing to go out. Seeing that, the heavenly demon burst into wicked laughter. "What's this? Don't tell me you're one of those hypocrites who says one thing and does another. Are you heading to that young lady's room after all?" ManhwaCapped immediately shut him down, that he was not that kind of man. He lifted his eyes to the night sky and said calmly, "I'm just a bit restless and want to clear my head for a bit." In the next instant, he leapt into the air and used the heavenly demon flight art. Whoosh, whoosh. In just a few steps through the air, he had already traveled 100 meters away. This technique suited him absurdly well at this rate. Even covering 1,000 miles in a day might not be difficult. The heavenly demon laughed loudly. "Looks like you've already gotten quite good at the heavenly demon flight art. But where exactly are you going? Living however you please is one thing, but don't you think that gets boring?" ManhwaCapped finally spoke. "Before I left, the two elders told me some things, so now, I want to go meet someone." In other words, his arrival in Kaifeng Prefecture had never been for sightseeing, nor had he wandered here aimlessly. Thud, he landed cleanly on the ground, his posture striking enough that if Namgung Haimi had seen it, she likely would have fallen for him all over again. At that moment, both the heavenly demon and Master Huaning noticed the enormous statue towering ahead. ManhwaCapped lifted his head as well and saw at once that the statue truly was imposing, majestic, and full of pressure. It was the statue of Lord Guan in front of the Guan temple, and it also served as one of the beggar sect's most iconic symbols. The heavenly demon looked baffled. Don't tell me you came all the way here just to kneel and worship. With your strength, you have no reason to care about this sort of thing. Just then, two figures shot out from the shadows at the same time, incredibly fast, yet perfectly restrained. They stopped the instant their blades touched his throat and barked out a cold question. Who are you, and how dare you trespass into the Beggars Sect headquarters? ManhwaCapped glanced down at their waist. I in the Beggars Sect. Cloth knots tied at the belt were used to indicate rank. Both men wore second-generation knot ties, which meant they were already considered high-level fighters within the Beggars Sect, the sort of people responsible for watching gates and gathering eyes and ears information for the sect. The one-eyed man among them spoke in a low, stern voice. Who exactly are you, and what business do you have here? ManhwaCapped answered calmly. My name is Manhwa, and I have come to request an audience with the Beggars Sect's former chief, Bong Chionho. The two men's expressions changed immediately. They withdrew their blades and stepped back. Could it be that your esteemed self is the hero known as the Jade-Faced Divine Dragon, Manhwa? That only made me more confused. Jade-Faced Divine Dragon. Since when do I have a title like that? I have no idea where that name came from, but saying I am Manhwa is at least not wrong. Then the two men cupped their fists respectfully and asked, May we ask if you are the very hero who clashed with the Northern Sword Society yesterday at Junhua Pavilion? ManhwaCapped nodded. That was me. Inwardly, I couldn't help feeling impressed. The Beggars Sect truly deserved its reputation. Their information network really did seem to reach everywhere in the martial world. Before long, the two men led him into the reception chamber of the Beggars Sect headquarters. Looking around, ManhwaCapped found the place strangely empty. But soon, a man with 3 knot ties at his waist hurried in. He first bowed respectfully. Young Master Mun, our behavior at the entrance was discourteous. Please forgive us. ManhwaCapped returned the salute at once. Not at all was I who came too abruptly. Though that was what I said aloud, I already understood inwardly that this man was someone of noticeably higher standing, sent specifically to receive me. The watermelon-headed man asked curiously, May I ask what business the young master has with our Grand Elder Chief? In response, ManhwaCapped slipped a hand into his robe and searched around for a moment. Soon, he took out a token engraved with the character Huang and handed it over. Just take this to your Grand Elder Chief. Once he sees it, he'll understand why I came. The man nodded and told him to wait there for a moment while he immediately delivered the token to the Grand Elder Chief. But just as the man turned to leave, ManhwaCapped suddenly called him back. In a calm voice, I asked, I have one question. You didn't ask a single thing, yet you're willing to deliver this straight to your Grand Elder Chief. Why? Only then did the other man explain. Within Kaifeng, the Beggars Sect and the Northern Sword Society stood in open hostility. Once word spread that this young man had thrashed the Northern Sword Society at Junhua Pavilion the day before, the entire Beggars Sect had been delighted, and naturally they had already begun to look at him with a favorable eye. So even if he did not know what relationship existed between ManhwaCapped and the Grand Elder Chief, the events of yesterday alone were enough to earn the Beggars Sect's respect. After hearing that explanation, ManhwaCapped finally nodded in understanding. So that's how it is. Then go deliver the token for me quickly. Once the man left, he settled himself again and began carefully examining the surroundings in greater detail. It did not take long for him to notice that while this headquarters was not particularly luxurious, its overall structure was exceptionally refined and cleverly arranged. Clearly, the Beggars Sect was nothing like the shabby image it showed on the surface. Though it walked the world beneath the name of beggars, its true foundations were shockingly deep. Anyone foolish enough to underestimate them just because of appearances would one day pay for it dearly. But just then, a thunderous boom rang out, and the main gate of the Beggars Sect was blown open by the palm of an old man. Even ManhwaCapped was startled by that sudden development, and he immediately turned toward the direction of the intruder. The newcomer wore plain cloth robes. His white hair split into a 3-pronged style, and his body was shockingly strong. Just standing there, he gave off the pressure of someone no one would dare underestimate. Holding the token in his hand, he slowly asked, This token is the one the young master brought? ManhwaCapped instinctively looked down toward the man's waist, and the moment he did, his heart jumped. The number of knot ties hanging there far exceeded anything he had seen on any Beggars Sect disciple before. That immediately made him inwardly uneasy. Just how high was this man's status within the Beggars Sect? Could this really be the Grand Elder Chief himself? ManhwaCapped answered evenly. That token was indeed brought by me. Did I ask there's some problem? But in the next instant, the only response was a heavy thud. The old man had dropped to his knees on the spot. Then he cried out in a ringing voice, "This servant, Bong Cheon-ho, has only now been able to pay respects to your majesty. Such disloyalty deserves 10,000 deaths." Saying that, he slammed his forehead to the floor and begged Mun Pa-cheon to forgive his late audience. Ironically, it was Mun Pa-cheon who was now the flustered one. What in the world is going on here? Bong Cheon-ho then declared in a heavy voice, "From this day on, this servant is willing to spend his life assisting your majesty." This old man before him was none other than the beggar sect's former chief, Bong Cheon-ho, now their grand elder chief. Looking into the man's eyes utterly free of deceit, Mun Pa-cheon suddenly thought of the two elders in the mountains, as expected. All of them were absolutely loyal to him. Before he had left, those two elders had already told him where the beggar sect was located and had instructed him that once he met Bong Cheon-ho, all he had to do was show the token. The rest would explain itself. Thinking of that, Mun Pa-cheon could not help but close his eyes and let out a faint laugh. Even after death, his father had still managed to calculate this far ahead. His foresight truly had been terrifying. Bong Cheon-ho then asked after Elder Ui and Elder Huan. On that point, Mun Pa-cheon could only answer vaguely. They should still be well enough, I suppose. After all, I haven't seen them in more than a year. At that point, Bong Cheon-ho respectfully called him, "Your Majesty," once again, only to be immediately cut off by a raised hand. He waved it lightly. "I no longer want to be an emperor, and you don't need to treat me with such formal reverence. It only makes me uncomfortable." Hearing that, Bong Cheon-ho bowed his head again. "If that is your will, then this servant will obey." Then his face turned grave. The hidden forces his late majesty left in the Jianghu have now dwindled to only this servant and the two elders in the mountains that if you give the word, we would shatter ourselves to pieces without hesitation. Those words made Mun Pa-cheon's heart sink, because what he truly wanted now was simply freedom. So instead, he returned a solemn salute to Bong Cheon-ho. "Elder Fong, I no longer wish to involve myself in matters of the court. My uncle is now celebrated by the world as a great hero, and I have no wish to spill blood against my own that matter should never be raised again." After hearing that, Bong Cheon-ho was clearly saddened, but he still chose to respect his decision. Then he asked, "If not the restoration of the throne, then how does the sovereign intend to move forward from here?" On that question, Mun Pa-cheon had already reached an answer in his heart. Since he had cast aside imperial power, he could not allow himself to drift into an empty, directionless life either. So he raised his eyes to Bong Cheon-ho and said slowly, "That is why I intend to become emperor in the Jianghu itself. What does Elder Feng think of that? With the beggar sect under your command, plus the two elders in the mountains, ordinary sects would stand no chance against us. If we began by subduing the larger factions one by one, then ruling the Jianghu as emperor may not be such empty fantasy after all." At that point, Mun Pa-cheon gave a faint smile and asked, "Well, Elder Feng, would you be willing to stir up a storm of blood across the martial world for me?" After hearing those words, Bong Cheon-ho first repeated them quietly. "To stir up blood and chaos across the Jianghu?" Then his gaze sharpened all at once. Does the sovereign know why the beggar sect has to this day never joined the Nine-Sect Alliance, the Joding League? Mun Pa-cheon simply shook his head. "I have only just stepped into the Jianghu to AS for these matters. I truly know nothing at all." The reason Elder Feng had maintained the beggar sect's unique system all this time was to ensure it possessed influence across the entire Jianghu, and the kind of force that would throw itself into fire and death at a single command. Because all of that existed for one reason: to prepare for a destiny whose arrival no one could predict. But those things were still matters for the future. If the sovereign gave the word, then even if the beggar sect had to march through mountains of blades and seas of flame, they would obey without hesitation. Even if the deed were unjust, they would still follow, absolutely. Those words shook Mun Pa-cheon deeply. That it was true. The late emperor had been surrounded by servants of absolute loyalty. What surprised him even more was that such power could now be turned toward him. In truth, Elder Feng could easily have dismissed everything he had just said as the reckless fantasy of a naive young man. But as the grand elder chief of the beggar sect, he remained this loyal all the same. That only made Mun Pa-cheon admire his late father even more. The former emperor truly had been an extraordinary man. Then he raised a hand and signaled for Bong Cheon-ho to calm down. "What I said just now was only a joke. Elder Feng doesn't need to take it seriously." Elder Feng burst into laughter. "So that's how it is. Then this old man was the one lacking manners. I failed to notice that the sovereign was joking. That was my mistake." ManhwaCapped could not help laughing too. The older generation really did take certain things far too seriously. Still, even if those words had been spoken half in jest, they had made him feel more secure. That said, while it had been a joke, it had not been entirely one that sooner or later, I will still need the beggar's sect. And when that time comes, I hope Elder Fong will lend me his strength. Elder Fong immediately cupped his fists with force. If the sovereign has any command, then simply speak. 3,000 disciples of the beggar's sect stand ready at any time. But Elder Fong still had one thing he did not understand. ManhwaCapped's name had already spread throughout Kaifeng, and rumors said he had used multiple Shaolin arts. How was this supposed to be handled going forward? ManhwaCapped shook his head. That matter is too long to explain. That if you meet the two elders later, let them tell you that there's something else I'd like to ask. Will the beggar's sect be attending the upcoming Orthodox Grand Banquet? Elder Fong said that he himself would not go, but one of his disciples would represent the beggar's sect in the tournament. If ManhwaCapped attended as well, then they would meet again there. After that, ManhwaCapped selected 2 treasured swords from within the beggar's sect headquarters. Bong Xianho did not mind in the slightest. Those 2 swords may, as well, already belong to the sovereign, that if you want them, then take them. Both the heavenly demon and Huaining thought he was being greedy. 1 sword should have been more than enough. But ManhwaCapped himself was also surprised. Just what kind of blades could make both of them react so strongly? Soon enough, Elder Fong explained the origins of the 2 swords. The black sword was called the Heavenly Demon Sword, and the white sword was the Ganjiang Sword. Both were peerless weapons of the world. At last, ManhwaCapped understood why the Heavenly Demon had grown so excited. The black blade had originally been his own sword. But if that was true, then what exactly was the origin of the Ganjiang Sword? According to Elder Fong, the Ganjiang Sword had been forged in ancient times by one of the greatest smiths under heaven. And more than that, it had long been regarded as a sword fit for emperors. After finishing his business with Elder Fong, ManhwaCapped returned to the place where he was staying. And now, at his waist, both swords hung, one on each side. One of them was even known as an emperor's sword. That left him with a strange feeling. Could there really be some hidden law of fate at work? Otherwise, why had that blade somehow ended up in my hands again? When he returned to the inn, he found that Namgung Hyok Ryan and the others had already been waiting for him at the entrance for some time. Namgung Hyok Ryan was the first to notice him and immediately stepped forward. "Young Masterwind, where exactly did you go just now?" ManhwaCapped answered with a calm expression. "The room felt a little stuffy, so I went out to walk for a bit." But before long, Namgung Hyok Ryan's gaze dropped to the 2 swords hanging at his waist. There was no helping it. Those swords were simply too eye-catching, not only sharp with sword intent, but also radiating an aura that was clearly extraordinary. At that moment, Namgung Hymi suddenly drifted over from who knew where, staring curiously at the 2 swords at his waist. She was obviously dying to know where ManhwaCapped had managed to get them overnight. ManhwaCapped gave an awkward smile. "I just happened to come across them. They're not anything that special." But Namgung Hymi clearly did not believe that. The more she looked at those 2 blades, the more convinced she became that they were anything but ordinary. Behind them, Peng Jinhu suddenly called out, "The Orthodox Grand Banquet is about to begin, though we should get moving." Namgung Hyok Ryan gave a small wave, then turned to him. "Young Masterwind, you should come along with us. That I heard that Zen Master Jikong of Shaolin will also be attending this banquet." ManhwaCapped did not refuse, and simply continued on the road with them. As they walked, Namgung Hyok Ryan suddenly looked back and grinned. "You really surprised me. I didn't expect you to earn the title Jade-Faced Divine Dragon this quickly. Your reputation has already shaken all of Kaifeng this Orthodox Grand Banquet. A lot of people are probably going to have their eyes on you." Hearing praise like that only made ManhwaCapped uncomfortable. "It's not that dramatic. They're just empty titles." But Namgung Hymi immediately objected. "That's not right. Young master, you mastered the 72 arts of Shaolin, in the Jianghu. That already puts you among the top tier." ManhwaCapped could only turn his head a little awkwardly. "Thank you for the compliment, Mississippi." Still, deep down, he had the strange feeling that Namgung Hymi was getting more and more attached to me. Before long, they arrived at their destination. The moment he looked up, the vast and imposing architecture left a deep impression on him. Even the Imperial Palace might not necessarily outshine this place. Even though he was still quite far from the towering structure ahead, he somehow had the strange sensation that it was already right in front of him. Just then, a group from the Northern Sword Society passed by them. The Northern Sword Society truly deserved its title as Overlord of the Northern Lands, though in nature it differed somewhat from the Southern Saber Sect, the Five Union Assembly, and the Juding League. Most importantly, Among the four great orthodox powers, the Northern Sword Society had the largest number of members. Beneath the Sword Lords stood three protectors, each of them terrifyingly strong. Directly under those protectors were the Guardian Hall, the Demon Sword Hall, the Blood Sword Hall, and the Thousand Sword Hall. Beneath them came the Strategist, the Chief Commander, and the Chief Steward, and under the Chief Commander was the Iron Cavalry Corps. Added to that were the Enforcement Squad, the Shadow Slaughter Squad, and the Flying Shadow Squad, all under the Chief Steward. Altogether, the Northern Sword Society had more than 5,000 members. That meant that aside from a beggar's sect, the Northern Sword Society was the strongest and largest single faction in the Jianghu. Though the Northern Sword Society was already infamous for acting arrogantly, what worried Namgung Hyokrian most were the Demon Sword Hall and the Blood Sword Hall. The moment Munpachion heard the names Demon Sword and Blood Sword, he instinctively felt that they did not sound like names an orthodox faction should be using. And Namgung Hyokrian's explanation right after that answered his doubt perfectly. Those people, it turned out, had originally been notorious villains from the demonic path, later recruited and absorbed by the Northern Sword Society. But even after joining, their brutal and vicious nature had never really changed. Because of that, both the Five Union Assembly and the Southern Saber Sect had raised many objections to the Northern Sword Society. Yet every time, the society brushed them off with a few careless words. And that, more than anything else, was the greatest reason why relations between the Five Union Assembly and the Northern Sword Society had steadily worsened. Hearing all this, Munpachion found the Northern Sword Society's logic deeply contradictory, that if they kept absorbing more and more people from the demonic path, then once enough of them were inside, how would they be fundamentally any different from the demonic path itself? Before long, they arrived at the towering pavilion. Looking up at it, Munpachion could not help thinking that a structure this massive must have cost a fortune to build. Then Namgung Hyokrian casually mentioned that the pavilion had cost 200,000 taels of gold, and the number genuinely stunned him. Munpachion clicked his tongue inwardly. Even my own Imperial Palace back then had not cost that much. Just where had the Northern Sword Society gotten so much gold? Namgung Hyokrian then explained that the Northern Sword Society's main source of income came from escorting valuable goods, that on top of that, they also ran inns, restaurants, gambling houses, and banks on a massive scale. At that point, Namgung Hyokrian suddenly glanced left and right. After confirming no one was paying attention, he lowered his voice and quietly added, "That's exactly why the demonic factions became such thorns in their side. Those businesses used to be controlled mostly by the demonic path." Hearing that, Munpachion immediately understood the implication that if that was true, then the demonic path must also control a terrifying amount of wealth. And if someone swallowed those forces whole, it would be like striking a gold mine. Just then, a violent burst of hoofbeats shook the entire street. A horse was racing down the road at astonishing speed. At the same time, a voice packed with internal force exploded across the street. "Everybody move out of my way." The sound was so overbearing that several ordinary bystanders clutched their ears in pain, and some even bled from them on the spot. Even Namgung Hyokrian's expression shifted. The force hidden in that shout alone proved the rider was no weakling. In the blink of an eye, the horse was already charging straight toward them. But at that exact moment, Munpachion stepped forward and moved right into the middle of the road, passing in front of Namgung Hyokrian. The sight shocked him. "Young Masterwind, what are you doing?" Yet Munpachion only stood there calmly, as though waiting for the horse to come to him. The woman on horseback narrowed her eyes at once. She clearly had not expected someone to block her path like this. Was this fool trying to die? Namgung Hyokrian was alarmed and immediately shouted, "Young Masterwind, move." Even the heavenly demon thought this was absurd. "Don't tell me you're stupid enough to try to fight a horse head-on." Munpachion clicked his tongue in irritation. "I just think that person is annoying. Someone that unreasonable is an eyesore that I want to teach her a lesson." When he lifted his head again, the horse was already right in front of his chest. The Namgung siblings were completely stunned that if he did not dodge now, he was going to be hit head-on. But just before impact, the horse suddenly leapt upward. Rider and horse flew clean over Munpachion's head in a single bound. That, more than anything, made him inwardly astonished, especially that absurdly refined horsemanship. As their gazes crossed for a split second in midair, he finally saw clearly that the rider was a woman. With a heavy thud, the horse landed smoothly on all fours, shaking the ground beneath it. Munpachion turned to look, only to find that horse and rider had already disappeared into the distance. He had spent 10 years confined in the palace and had seen far too little of the outside world that a scene like this, a horse vaulting over his head through the air, was something he had never witnessed before. Namgung Hymi burst out laughing. Young master, why do you always have a show off? See, that was embarrassing. Even the heavenly demon laughed non-stop inside him. That's what you get for trying to act cool. Still, I can't blame you entirely. That woman's horsemanship was absurd. Skill like that would be rare, even in an army, that I never thought someone in the Jianghu, where horsemanship isn't exactly the focus, could ride like that. ManhwaCapped narrowed his eyes slightly, replaying that instant in his head. The craziest part was that the rider was a woman, yet she had that savage horse completely under control. The scene from earlier was nothing more than a brief interruption. Before long, their group arrived beneath the great pavilion. Looking around, the place was already packed with people attending the Orthodox Grand Banquet, to the point that it was practically impossible to move through the crowd. Namgung Haimi was visibly annoyed. They're the ones who invited us to this banquet, and now they're making us wait here this long? Just then, ManhwaCapped noticed a familiar face standing not too far away. He immediately burst into laughter. Looks like we won't need to keep waiting in line after all. Namgung Hyok looked puzzled. What exactly do you mean by that, young master went? But before anyone could react, ManhwaCapped had already raised his voice toward the distance. Hironyo, over here. The moment the man in the distance heard that call, his whole body stiffened. Why did he have to run into this living calamity again here, of all places? He could not understand why this monster had shown up in a place like this. But he did not even have time to think, because if he failed to go over, the consequences would likely be even worse. So he instantly plastered on a warm smile and hurried over. Still smiling broadly, Hironyo said, I should have personally received all of you, but I got so busy that I completely forgot my deepest apologies. Inside, though, he had already guessed most of it. This brat had probably come here together with the youngsters of the 5 Union Assembly. ManhwaCapped casually patted his shoulder and said with a bright smile, Hironyo, do you think you could do me a small favor? This line is so long that if I wait properly, who knows how long it'll take. Team might delay my important matters. As he spoke, the weight in his palms sank ever so slightly, and he added with the same smile, Hironyo, surely wouldn't refuse such a tiny request, right? Feeling his shoulder go numb, Hironyo immediately forced a laugh and shifted the hand away. Of course not. We're hardly strangers. Please, everyone, follow me. After a while, he led them to the Shiobin Pavilion, where arrangements were made for them to stay for the time being. At the same time, from higher up in the shadows, 2 men had already fixed their gaze on ManhwaCapped. They clearly had not expected Nyo Hainyung of the Enforcement Division to be crushed so thoroughly by a brat like this that IT had practically cost the Northern Sword Society all its face. One of them spoke slowly, his voice full of contempt. So that's the jade-faced divine dragon? He doesn't look like much. But in the next instant, another figure appeared soundlessly behind Nyo Hainyung. You're bolder than I expected. After what happened, you still dare to show your face here like nothing happened. That jade-faced divine dragon cut down nearly half of the Enforcement Division's manpower, cost us an inn, and even let Seol Jubong, daughter of the Demon Mirror sect leader, escape. And before that, the Northern Sword Society had already lost hundreds of men to a man called Passion. Their losses were immense. Because of all this, people in the Jianghu have already started looking down on the Northern Sword Society. So, as the master of the Northern Sword Society, I can no longer sit back and watch it, and no matter what, that brat must be brought before me. Yet ManhwaCapped remained completely unaware of all this. He was still laughing and chatting with the Namgung group in the Shiobin Pavilion. Little did anyone know that the moment the Northern Sword Society set its eyes on him, the real disaster had actually begun for the society itself. Before long, it was time for the banquet to officially begin, and guests from every direction gathered into the main venue. The number of people attending was astonishing. Everywhere he looked, the place was overflowing with bodies, and the sound of constant chatter filled the air. ManhwaCapped was among them now, standing together with Namgung Hyok and the others. He could not help but sweep his gaze around the place and mutter inwardly, there are this many people gathered here. Are they really all from the Orthodox path? At the same time, a representative of the Northern Sword Society was already standing on the platform for this gathering. He cleared his throat first, then raised his voice. Everyone, please settle down. The reason the Northern Sword Society called this grand banquet is to discuss 2 major matters with all of you. First, the eradication of forces that threaten the righteous integrity of the martial world. Second, the promotion of talents worthy of bearing the greatest responsibilities. As he grew more worked up, spittle nearly flew from his mouth. Before the demonic path can rebuild its forces and plunge the Jianghu into chaos again, they must be uprooted completely and erased forever. That is the proposal we, the Northern Sword Society, placed before all of you today. The crowd below was immediately stirred by the fiery speech, and many began shouting their approval. But Manhwa only felt that they looked like fools. Could they really not hear the real meaning behind those words? Stripped bare, the proposal was simple. Wipe out the demonic path completely while there was still a chance at so this was why the Northern Sword Society had gathered so many orthodox factions here. Seeing his reaction, Namgung Hyok Ryan leaned close and explained quietly. The man on stage is the Northern Sword Society strategist. But Manhwa still felt the man's speech was far too blunt. Were there really people willing to agree to something like this? Namgung Hyok Ryan replied in a low voice. Young master one does not yet understand. Most people present here do not dare oppose it openly. The Northern Sword Society has almost certainly already won over quite a few influential sects behind the scenes. This public proposal is little more than a formality. If there's any chance of things changing, it will depend on where the other major orthodox powers choose to stand. Sure enough, the strategist of the Northern Sword Society shouted again. I ask all fellow martial brothers here to seriously consider our proposal. With that, the crowd's emotions were pushed even higher, and voices began rising everywhere. Crush the demonic path. Crush the demonic path. The heavenly demon only let out a cold laugh, feeling as though he were watching a performance that had been rehearsed long in advance. Manhwa felt the same to him. The Northern Sword Society's whole act was almost laughable. But just then, another figure slowly entered the hall. The moment the people of the Northern Sword Society recognized the newcomer, their expressions shifted with visible shock. The man walked with a slow, almost staggering gait, each step measured and deliberate. Yet the pressure around him was immense, so steady and profound that no one dared underestimate him. And he was a monk. The members of the Northern Sword Society immediately stepped forward and bowed to him with extreme respect. That alone made Manhwa sense that something in the atmosphere had changed at once. Through Namgung Hyok Ryan's quiet explanation, he quickly learned the monk's identity. This seemingly gentle old monk was none other than Master Ji Kong, head of Shaolin's Discipline Hall. Throughout the entire martial world, he was known for immense prestige, terrifying seniority, and strength that few dared measure. After stepping onto the stage, Master Ji Kong pressed his palms together and spoke slowly. I am Ji Kong, head of Shaolin's Discipline Hall. It was obvious that he had come as Shaolin's representative. Yet in terms of political alignment, he also seemed to be standing with the Joding League. Then Master Ji Kong continued, calm and unhurried. I have listened carefully to the Northern Sword Society's proposal. However, I hold a different view. The moment those words were spoken, the entire hall was shaken. Master Ji Kong said evenly, the Northern Sword Society's proposal may indeed come from a desire to protect the martial world, but all things should follow their natural course. One must not force matters too quickly. The demonic path is already acting far more cautiously than before. There is no need to provoke them further at this point. Only when the orthodox path and the demonic path remain in balance can the martial world truly remain stable. Then he brought up the past. 1,000 years ago, a heavenly demon appeared and ruled over the Jianghu. That was the darkest age of the martial world. Yet because some measure of restraint still existed back then, the orthodox path was able to survive until today. At that point, Master Ji Kong even bowed slightly. If even the demonic path must be dealt with in proper measure, then we who call ourselves righteous have even less right to commit such an error. In the end, Master Ji Kong stated his position clearly. Therefore, Shaolin and the Joding League opposed the Northern Sword Society's proposal. At once, discussion rippled through the entire hall, and one had expected Shaolin to make its position so openly known in a setting like this. Even Namgung Hyok Ryan had not expected the Joding League to step out so directly against the Northern Sword Society's proposal. Inside Manhwa's mind, Huining merely let out a quiet chuckle. But it seems Shaolin's spirit of chivalry has not yet vanished. But Manhwa still did not fully understand the past, so he could not help asking, I still don't get it. Why did the heavenly demon end up doing what he did back then? Were you really trying to rule the martial world and sit at its peak as the martial supreme? Didn't you say earlier that you were tired of all that loneliness? The heavenly demon suddenly let out a long sigh. It wasn't that I insisted on walking that path, it was that the world refused to let me live as a nobody. Back then, I'd already planned to withdraw from the Jianghu. But those righteous people still refused to leave me be. They even hunted the followers who wanted to retreat with me. Then, as if remembering something, he brightened again. A lot of my old followers were top-tier experts. If you want, I can introduce them to you anytime. Why Heavenly Demon Cult used to be massive. That left ManhwaCapped stunned for a second, with only one thought in his head. Is this heavenly demon actually an idiot? So he answered mercilessly, by now, all those people from your heavenly demon cult should have died of old age long ago, you fool. Only then did even the heavenly demon seem to realize that point for himself. Elsewhere, MangaMangacapped had originally assumed the 5-Union Assembly would be the first to oppose the proposal. He never expected Shaolin and the Jioding League to speak up first instead. That meant the most important thing left now was the stance of the Southern Saber sect. That if they also objected, then this entire matter would likely be shelved for the time being. ManhwaCapped remembered that MangaMangacapped had already told him earlier that the Southern Saber sect and the Northern Sword Society had never gotten along. So in theory, they should not have supported this proposal. But if that really happened, would the Northern Sword Society's plan simply die there? MangaMangacapped explained in a low voice that if the major powers could not agree on the spot, then the core leadership of the various sects would probably have to gather later for a second round of discussion. The problem was that many sects had most likely already been quietly bought off by the Northern Sword Society. Even if the 5-Union Assembly and Shaolin stood against them, the final outcome still might move in the direction the Northern Sword Society wanted. Sure enough, just as MangaMangacapped had expected, the 5-Union Assembly also openly rejected the Northern Sword Society's proposal. At that point, everyone's eyes in the hall shifted toward the Southern Saber sect. If the Southern Saber sect also voiced opposition, then even if the Northern Sword Society forced the matter through in the end, it would lose even the barest claim to legitimacy. And by then, the Northern Sword Society's prestige among the 4 great orthodox powers would inevitably sink even further. So at this moment, nearly every righteous figure attending the banquet was waiting to see what choice the Southern Saber sect would make. ManhwaCapped narrowed his eyes and fixed his gaze on the Southern Saber sect's representative. He could feel at once that the man carried an extremely powerful presence. But what happened next shocked the entire hall. The representative opened his mouth and openly agreed with the proposal. The Northern Sword Society immediately erupted into cheers. At last, the Southern Saber sect has made the right decision. After saying his piece, the representative calmly stepped down, as if he had merely tossed a boulder into a lake and did not care about the waves that followed. At that, even MangaMangacapped grew uneasy. He could tell immediately that things might truly spiral now. The Southern Saber sect support could embolden the Northern Sword Society into doing something far more extreme. Beside him, MangaMangacapped clicked her tongue lightly. Looks like some people are celebrating while others are drowning in it. Before long, evening arrived. Once the gathering ended, their group began heading back toward the inn, but ManhwaCapped felt nothing but disappointment. He had honestly expected a so-called martial gathering like this to be something special, yet in the end, it felt underwhelming. MangaMangacapped blinked in confusion. What exactly do you mean by special, young masterwind? ManhwaCapped immediately perked up and answered as though it were obvious. Like people with opposing views going up on stage to settle it with a fight, in this kind of situation, isn't that what's supposed to happen? The moment he heard that, MangaMangacapped burst out laughing. Young masterwind, that way of thinking is way too extreme. People of the Jianghu do not solve everything by throwing punches the moment they disagree. The heavenly demon, however, was nodding wildly inside his head, clearly in full agreement with ManhwaCapped. In his view, the Jianghu should always follow one simple law. The strong live and the weak are crushed. Even though ManhwaCapped felt that way to some extent himself, he could still sense that the martial world of today was not quite the same as the one the heavenly demon came from. These days, it was rare for people to start drawing blades and spilling blood the instant they clashed. In the heavenly demon's era, someone like him probably really could have drowned the entire martial world in blood by sheer strength alone. Back then, the rule of the Jianghu had been simple. The strong ruled, and the defeated deserved to die. The heavenly demon grew even more excited at that thought, and openly declared that he would one day teach ManhwaCapped every one of those principles, turning him into a second heavenly demon and the true successor of his legacy. But Huaining immediately cut him off. I believe the benefactor is better suited for Shaolin instead. After all, what you inherited are the 72 arts of my own line. ManhwaCapped had no intention of entertaining the argument of these two old men, who seemed to bicker endlessly in his mind. He simply turned to MangaMangacapped and asked, "At this rate, where do you think the orthodox path is headed?" After a moment of thought, MangaMangacapped replied, "As things stand, the 4 great orthodox powers are temporarily split 2 against 2 as for what happens next. That will probably depend on the final vote from the representatives tonight. Beyond that, I wouldn't dare say too much." But just then, a cold voice suddenly sounded from behind them. "Which one of you is the jade-faced divine dragon?" ManhwaCapped turned at once and answered calmly. "That would be me. What do you want?" The newcomer did not bother with courtesy. "Our sword lord wants to see you, that you'll come with us." That instantly made Peng Jinhu furious. Is that any way to invite someone? That's outrageously rude. But the men from a Northern Sword Society clearly did not think Peng Jinhu mattered enough to care. Just as Peng Jinhu was about to step forward and make trouble, ManhwaCapped raised a hand and stopped him. "Forget it. This isn't worth getting worked up over." Then he looked at the visitors and said evenly, "I remember the representatives of the various sects are about to gather for the vote. If your sword lord wants to see me now, then I assume it must be urgent. Though with a group like you here to invite me, even if I said no, I'd probably still end up being dragged along anyway." The three men from the Northern Sword Society instantly caught the mockery in his words, and their expressions darkened on the spot. The one in front let out a cold laugh. "You really don't know your place, do you? Do you even know where you are, speaking so arrogantly here?" ManhwaCapped only snorted. Whoever made it this far without knowing where they were would have to be an idiot. But just as the tension between the two sides reached its peak, another figure suddenly stepped into view. "Unbeatable, that I seem to have interrupted your conversation. I came in such haste only because I had urgent business on my mind that I hope all of you will forgive the rudeness." The moment Namgung saw who it was, his eyes widened. He had never imagined that Master Jikong of Shaolin would come here personally. After all, the monk still had to return later for the official vote, so his time should have been extremely limited. Jikong did not waste time, that he went straight to the point. "I have heard that someone here inherited the true legacy of my Grandmaster uncle. May I ask, which one of you is the person who received the legacy of Master Huaining?" The men from a Northern Sword Society were instantly thrown into shock. What? Master Jikong's Grandmaster uncle? Then what kind of figure does that make this person? Hearing that, ManhwaCapped felt a wave of discomfort. Oh, I really look that old. They're calling me Grandmaster Uncle to my face now? But when he thought about it more carefully, it was not entirely exaggerated. If his martial arts truly came from the direct legacy of the sixth patriarch Huaining, then by seniority alone, he really would tower over most of Shaolin's current generation. At that moment, even Namgung finally pieced it together. So that's it. I really should have realized that sooner. Master Huaining stands at the ancestral root of the Shaolin lineage that, if young Master when truly received his direct legacy, then that would make him practically a direct successor. In that case, his seniority within Shaolin would be terrifyingly high. Master Jikong gently rolled the prayer beads in his hand, his expression still as mild as ever. But in the next instant, the atmosphere shifted sharply to a quiet but overwhelming pressure spread from his body and descended straight onto ManhwaCapped. ManhwaCapped's heart tightened at once. He knew perfectly well that if Jikong discovered he was only half true and half fake in borrowing Huaining's name, then the old monk might immediately brand him with the crime of desecrating Shaolin itself. That crushing pressure came down head-on, and even ManhwaCapped felt his heart tighten a little. The heavenly demon clicked his tongue in approval. That brat's got some real strength. But Huaining was far less impressed that he owed him. Jikong's cultivation still lacked a certain depth. ManhwaCapped then said calmly, "If you want to test my skill, I can display Shaolin's arts for you right here." In the next instant, Master Jikong's eyes changed sharply. A burst of power exploded from ManhwaCapped's body, and golden Buddhist energy instantly coiled around him. In a flash, the pressure Jikong had cast down on him was forced back and shattered apart. That sight immediately left even Master Jikong visibly shaken. ManhwaCapped looked at him steadily. "If you still doubt me, I can demonstrate the arts here and let you judge with your own eyes." At the same time, more and more people gathered around. They watched the same golden aura circulating around both ManhwaCapped and Master Jikong. It became obvious to everyone that the foundation of their martial paths came from the same source. Jikong soon let out a soft laugh. This little monk would truly like to test the young master's attainments on the spot. Unfortunately, I really do not have the time right now. So this visit was merely to greet you first. Once this matter is over, this little monk would like to verify martial arts with you properly. Would that be acceptable? ManhwaCapped immediately returned the courtesy with a respectful salute. Of course, that I have no objection. Jikong bowed in return as well. Then this old monk shall await the young master's presence at any time. That exchange left the men of the Northern Sword Society completely dumbstruck. Even Namgung stood frozen for a moment, his heart full of shock. What exactly is this guy? At this rate, his seniority in Shaolin really might be terrifyingly high. ManhwaCapped also knew very well that if Master Jikong had not appeared just now, he might truly have been dragged away by the Northern Sword Society. Still, the members of the Enforcement Division had clearly engraved this humiliation into their hearts. On the way back to the inn, ManhwaCapped sank into thought. Those who held power and shaped history were not necessarily righteous or clean-handed. But from another angle, a person's values and judgment could shift depending on where they stood. So he did not fully hate the one who had pushed him into his current state. In the end, it had been because he himself was too weak, too isolated, and too powerless to protect what had once been his. Thinking of it that way, everything almost felt inevitable. Even if that person had not destroyed him, someone else would eventually have done the same. Still, if that person one day brought the world into chaos, then perhaps his own thoughts would change as well. Even so, based on what he knew, that person should not be foolish enough to go that far. And after calmly sorting through those thoughts, ManhwaCapped suddenly felt as though he understood something. The emperor he once was, the domineering heavenly demon Scholar Passion, and the refined, elegant young Master One, the jade-faced divine dragon of the present. These three utterly different identities now coexisted inside him. None had fully swallowed the others, and together they formed a strange and delicate equilibrium. In contrast, the balance of the current martial world was already beginning to collapse. At that moment, he remembered what Huaining had once said to him. Perhaps that was precisely the meaning behind why the laws of heaven had granted him such power. And so ManhwaCapped began to wonder whether, in this martial world, the future he should truly create was one built on a new kind of balance. Meanwhile, at Xiaobin Pavilion, ManhwaCapped was lounging atop the loft with his eyes closed, pretending to rest. But inwardly, he still felt bored to death, wondering when the voting results would finally come out. Then, without warning, a figure suddenly flashed past his sight. ManhwaCapped snapped his eyes open at once, startled. What was that just now? He looked up immediately and saw that shadow vanish into the distance after only a few swift movements. Yet even from that brief glimpse, he could already tell that the intruder's lightness skill was extraordinary. This was the very heart of Northern Sword Society territory, and yet someone had dared to infiltrate it so openly. Just what kind of person was that? With that thought, ManhwaCapped did not hesitate any longer. His body moved at once as he gave chase. He wanted to see exactly what that person was after. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The figure moved like a phantom, springing from the ground to the rooftops in just a few flashes, and the longer ManhwaCapped pursued, the more certain he became. This person's movement skill was no ordinary thing. The man's movement art was uncanny. Every step made subtle use of the surrounding shadows, and on that point alone, he was probably above Nyo Hainyong. In a few sharp flashes, the figure shot forward like a ghost, leaving behind little more than streaks of afterimages. But ManhwaCapped was no slower. He stayed right on the trail, never letting the gap truly widen. Before long, he realized he had chased the intruder all the way to the foot of that towering structure, Divine Sword Pavilion. In today's martial world, there seemed to be only two people truly worthy of the title Divine Sword. The first was the current Sword Lord of the Martial Union, the Heavenly Divine Sword, Namgung. The second was the master of this very pavilion, the Lord of the Northern Sword Society. This man was known as the Supreme Divine Sword, Dako Haiyan, and among the leaders of the four great Orthodox powers, he was the youngest. Some in the Jianghu even honored him with the title Sword Emperor. And of course, a tiger's son is no dog. His father, the former Sword Lord, Zhanryong the Great, Dako Jin, had also been a peerless expert in his own age. Ever since Dako Jin handed the title of Sword Lord over to his son, he had all but vanished from the public. I doubt a rumor had continued to circulate through the Jianghu. That Zhanryong the Great was hidden away somewhere, personally training Dako Haiyan's son, his own grandson, the Azure Dragon Flying Sword, Dako Mul. Of course, rumors were only rumors, but one thing was certain. As the current Sword Lord, Dako Haiyan had the entire Northern Sword Society firmly in his grasp. While ManhwaCapped was still thinking through all this, the black shadow ahead flickered a few more times and slipped straight through a hidden opening beneath the tower. ManhwaCapped immediately flattened himself behind a nearby wall and steadied his breathing. He quickly noticed that dozens of guards were hidden throughout the area. None of them were ordinary fighters. Every one of them carried a notable presence. And that only made him want to see the inside even more. Whatever was being hidden, there had to be important. But that raised the problem. How exactly was he supposed to get in? If he exposed himself by mistake, he would instantly be treated as an intruder. So he turned inward and asked the heavenly demon, If he wanted to approach that structure without being seen, was there some more effective method? The heavenly demon immediately looked at him like he was hopeless. Has it occurred to you that you already know exactly the kind of technique? That made ManhwaCapped pause. You mean the heavenly demon stealth art, but if I get too close to guards at that level, won't I still be noticed? The heavenly demon gave him a sly grin. Kid, you're seriously underestimating my art. Pour all your internal power into the heavenly demon stealth art and drive it to the absolute limit. In the next instant, ManhwaCapped lowered his body and pushed all of his internal energy into the technique. The faint red aura around him instantly grew denser. Then he launched forward in a blur, moving so fast that he seemed to become nothing more than a gust skimming over the ground. Since stepping into the Jianghu, this was the first time ManhwaCapped had ever pushed the heavenly demon stealth art to its true limit. This was the result of pouring more than 5 jiazi worth of internal power into the technique. As long as there was even the slightest gap ahead, he could slip through it like a formless shadow. Just then, one of the disguise guards happened to be stationed directly in front of him. Yet when ManhwaCapped glided right past his side, the guard did not notice a thing. It was as if his eyes were completely incapable of catching even the faintest trace of ManhwaCapped's passage. The man only frowned and glanced around, muttering to himself that a sudden chill had just brushed past him. Before long, ManhwaCapped slipped silently into the room the black-clad figure had just entered. And there, only a short distance ahead, stood the very intruder he had been tailing this whole time. The man clearly had no idea he was being watched, as though he really had come here on purpose. What ManhwaCapped still could not figure out was why. Just then, a slender hand reached toward the towel resting on a nearby stand. When ManhwaCapped looked up, what met his eyes was the graceful silhouette of a woman. In the next instant, even he felt heat rise to his face. He had chosen a truly awful moment to arrive. This was clearly her bathing chamber. Ahead of him, a long-haired young woman was just stepping out of the bath, steam curling around her body and making her beauty seem even more flawless. By following the black-clad man here, ManhwaCapped had accidentally stumbled straight into a noble woman's private chamber, and with that, into a secret conversation. At that very moment, neither the woman nor the intruder had the slightest idea that a third person was hiding in the room. The woman spoke first, calmly telling the black-clad man to report on the matter she had sent him to investigate. After a brief silence, he answered in a flat voice. That man is ruthless, kills without blinking, and is also a womanizer who has ruined countless women. Even the people in several nearby villages curse his name. The woman sounded as though she had expected as much. So it's true. The young sect master of the Southern Saber sect really is the same scum the rumors described. At that point, ManhwaCapped finally understood there was a marriage alliance between the Southern Saber sect and the Northern Sword Society. But the helplessness in her voice was unmistakable. She truly seemed to have no idea what to do, as if her own father had simply sold her off. That was when ManhwaCapped finally confirmed who she was. She was the daughter of the Northern Sword Society's sword lord. No wonder the Southern Saber sect had agreed so readily earlier. There had been this kind of benefit waiting for them behind the scenes. Yet from these few lines alone, it was already obvious that her future fiancé was nothing but human filth. Could it be that the Northern Sword Society sword lord was really willing to marry his own daughter off to someone like that, all for the sake of his ambitions? If that was the truth, then this sword lord was cold-blooded beyond belief. The black-clad man spoke again. If I were in your place, miss, I would refuse this marriage. By then, the woman had already wrapped herself in an outer robe. In a low voice, she asked, if I wanted to leave this house, would you help me? The black-clad man, Huan Sao, clasped his fists and answered solemnly, my duty has always been to protect you. Mississippi, I will remain by your side. And if you wish it, I will help you with everything I have. A soft laugh escaped her lips then, light and beautiful, but tinged with bitterness. A moment later, she dismissed him gently. It's late. You should go back and rest too. With a faint whoosh, the black-clad man vanished from the room in the blink of an eye. The young woman let out a long sigh, clearly overwhelmed by the thought that the man she was meant to marry was someone like that. That helplessness weighed her down until she slowly sank into a chair, unable to move for a long while. Before long, she actually began to cry. That sight struck ManhwaCapped hard, because the sound of her crying stirred memories of his own past. His hand tightened into a fist. That unbearable feeling of helplessness, the feeling of being able to do nothing at all, was enough to drive a person mad. Once, he too had been cast into the river of fate with no power to resist, left to drift wherever the current took him. Back then, the only things he could do were cry and beg desperately for even the faintest chance to survive. Of course, if his late father had not left those two extraordinary men behind for him, he probably would have sunk into despair long ago and never climbed back out. Thinking of that, ManhwaCapped suddenly gave a faint smile that if that was the case, then this time, maybe I could become her lifeline. He stepped forward little by little, his presence drawn tighter and tighter until it became almost impossible to sense. In nothing more than the blink of an eye, ManhwaCapped fully appeared in front of the young woman. She was so startled that she nearly lost herself on the spot, clearly never expecting another person to suddenly appear inside the room. But ManhwaCapped only smiled faintly at her. "Hello, I'm here to save you." The young woman's eyes widened in alarm, and just as she tried to speak, he raised a finger and sealed her acupoints in one motion. At once, her entire body froze in place. Other than her eyes, which could still move, the rest of her body would not respond at all. ManhwaCapped immediately cupped his fists in apology. "Please don't misunderstand. Mississippi, I did not come here to harm you, nor did I intend to offend you. My surname is W-N-I-N the Jiangho. People call me the Jade-Faced Divine Dragon. Tonight, I only followed a shadowy figure here by accident." The moment she heard the title Jade-Faced Divine Dragon, her heart visibly trembled. She clearly knew that name already. ManhwaCapped continued, "I only happened to overhear your troubles just now, that's why I want to help you. As long as you don't scream, I'll release your acupoints right now." The young woman responded with a quick blink, signaling that she understood and would not make a scene. Only then did ManhwaCapped tap her lightly and release the sealed acupoints. But the instant he freed her, she immediately tried to slap him. That actually startled ManhwaCapped instead. What kind of woman is this? Didn't she just agree not to do anything rash? Even so, no matter how fast she moved, she was nowhere near fast enough for him. He simply tilted to the side, and her strike missed cleanly. That made her even more shocked. She clearly had not expected the man in front of her to move that quickly. ManhwaCapped let out a helpless laugh. "So what? Should I have just stood there and taken the slap?" Only then did she stop, regaining some of her composure, and said coolly, "Young Masterwin, do you even realize what you were saying just now?" ManhwaCapped immediately cupped his fists again in apology. "I really was too abrupt just now, and for that, I owe you an apology, but everything I said was sincere that I truly do want to help you." After saying that, he gave an awkward little cough, and the young woman immediately understood the danger of the situation they were in. She knew very well that if she had truly screamed just now, the guards outside would already have come rushing in. She turned away from him and tightened the sash around her robe. Once she had composed herself a little, she turned back and asked in a low voice, "Then, how exactly do you intend to help me?" ManhwaCapped did not pretend to have a perfect answer, that he replied honestly, "To be frank, I haven't figured that part out yet. But whatever it is you truly want, just say, as long as it's within my power, then no matter when the time comes, I'll do everything I can to help you." Those words only made her even more suspicious inside. She truly could not understand what kind of man he was, or why he would help her when they had never even known each other before tonight. And what disturbed her even more was that if ManhwaCapped could enter Shohua Pavilion without anyone noticing, then he was definitely no ordinary martial artist. Even so, she still could not bring herself to trust him completely. Yet after thinking for a while, she suddenly let out a soft laugh. That made ManhwaCapped pause. "What are you laughing at?" She answered quietly, "Just moments ago, I was crying because I thought I would never find a lifeline. And now that one has suddenly appeared in front of me, I'm the one hesitating. When I think about it like that, I can't help finding myself ridiculous." She lifted her eyes to him and added, "Still, whether or not you really are that lifeline, that's something I can take my time finding out later. My name is Dako Seoran, that if you truly can help me leave the Northern Sword Society, then for the rest of my life, I will remember your kindness." "Good. You don't need to thank me like I'm your savior. Change your clothes and come with me now." But the woman turned him down. "Not today. Come back at this same time tomorrow, young master." That left ManhwaCapped a little awkward. Why tomorrow at this exact hour? Couldn't she just leave with him today? At the same time, something happened at Shiobin Pavilion that ManhwaCapped never would have expected, not even in his wildest dreams. Namgung Jaime arrived at his room with a bright smile on her face. But the moment she opened the door, she found the room completely empty. She hurried from room to room, checking everywhere, but still couldn't find a trace of ManhwaCapped. She had been keeping an eye on him all day. She remembered clearly that he had returned with them, yet now he had vanished without a trace. Namgung Jaime instantly realized something was very wrong and rushed off to find her brother. Namgung Hyok Ryan. The moment Namgung Hyok Ryan heard the news, one thought hit him right away. The Northern Sword Society had to be behind this. Namgung Hymi nodded over and over. She clearly remembered that after returning to the inn, the young master had gone back to his own room, but now he was nowhere to be found. Namgung Hyok Ryan cursed under his breath that he should have been more careful. The second he let his guard down, everything blew up. The hostility those Northern Sword Society bastards had shown earlier had already been obvious enough. Namgung Hyok Ryan had underestimated the situation. They were never the kind of people who would let things slide that easily. This time, he had messed up. Peng Jinhu asked anxiously, "Did you think of any leads?" Gritting his teeth, Namgung Hyok Ryan said, "Something may have already happened to young Mastermon that we need to inform the major martial arts figures at once." Before long, Namgung Hyok Ryan got the news out to the major experts of the martial world. He also informed Master Ji Kong, the Shaolin monk representing the Jioding League and one of the most senior figures in the Jianghu. Master Ji Kong gave a calm smile. "I knew this would happen, that I warned him before, yet he still acted so brazenly. If that young man truly inherited Master Huaning's teachings, then ordinary disciples of the Northern Sword Society would never be a match for him. So the answer is obvious that if he's still missing, then that man must have stepped in personally." A young monk asked, "If the Sword Lord of the Northern Sword Society personally got involved, then where do we stand in this?" Master Ji Kong flicked his sleeve lightly. "It's been many years since I last stretched my old bones. This is a good chance to see whether that brat from the Northern Sword Society has improved at all." At the same time, Namgung Hyok Ryan also told the Five Union Assembly about the earlier clash at the inn with the Northern Sword Society's Enforcement Division. That left the experts of the Five Union Assembly deeply shaken. If that's the case, then young Mastermon may already have been murdered by the Northern Sword Society. Right then, an ancient yet thunderously vigorous voice suddenly boomed through the hall, startling both the Five Union Assembly experts and Namgung Hyok Ryan. The front doors slowly creaked open, and a small, thin figure walked in from outside, dressed in tattered, old clothes. But the aura pouring off him was terrifying. An ordinary person wouldn't even be able to keep standing in front of him. He strode straight up to Namgung Hyok Ryan. With every single step, the hall seemed to quake. "Brat, explain the jade-faced divine dragon situation to this old man, right now." 2.5 hours later, Dako Hyencheon, the Northern Sword Society's leader and the Supreme Divine Sword, was stunned. "What did you say?" The Beggar Sect Supreme Elder actually came in person. His mind immediately drifted back to the past. Ever since his father went into seclusion, that old man had never shown his face again. Why had he suddenly returned to the Jianghu now? He shoved the Northern Sword Society disciples out of the way and ordered them to clear a path. He had to receive that old man personally if they truly angered him. The Northern Sword Society might not survive the consequences. One disciple at the side couldn't help saying, "Even if the Beggar Sect Supreme Elder showed up, there's no need to rush this much, right?" But someone beside him immediately rebuked him for his ignorance. Long ago, the Beggar Sect Supreme Elder and the former Sword Emperor, Zhanriang the Great, had been the closest of friends. So even by seniority alone, he was one of the martial world's true elders. Dako Hyencheon's urgency was only natural. Before long, the main hall of the Divine Sword Pavilion was packed with experts from every side. Dako Hyencheon forced his tone to stay calm as he explained, "Supreme Elder, please calm down. We are already searching every corner of the Northern Sword Society from top to bottom." But those words only made the Supreme Elder even angrier. He let out a cold snort. "Is the Northern Sword Society bigger than Kaifeng Prefecture or the whole city of Huguang? You've got 15,000 swordsmen under your command, and you still can't find one living person. Does that sound reasonable to you? If anything happens to that man, then even if this old man has to mobilize 100,000 beggars, I'll level the Northern Sword Society to the ground." Dako Hyencheon's heart jolted. That old man had called him that man. Just who exactly was Manpa Cheon? He genuinely couldn't understand how a young man who looked like little more than a brat could earn that kind of title from the Beggar Sect Supreme Elder. And on top of that, Master Ji Kong was here too. He should know Dako Hyencheon had previously summoned that young man out. So was he also starting to suspect him? Yet despite having more than enough reasons to point the finger at him, Master Ji Kong still said nothing. That old monk was impossible to read. He had also heard the rumors that Manpa Cheon had inherited Master Huaning's true teachings. If that was true, then Shaolin should have been even more anxious to find out where Manpa Cheon had gone. Dako Hyencheon glanced at Master Ji Kong again. Shaolin had already made its stance clear. They opposed the campaign against the demonic path. If Ji Kong wanted to use this incident as leverage to secure Shaolin's excuse not to join the campaign, then that would be a major shift in the entire situation. That old monk really wasn't someone to underestimate. The people from a Southern Saber sect, on the other hand, were the most straightforward of them all. They didn't even know who Manhwa was, much less why everyone was searching for him with such fanfare. One expert from the Five Union Assembly sneered inwardly from the back. Dako Haiyan had been arrogant as hell before, so seeing him cornered like this felt well-deserved. But that tiny grin didn't escape the beggar sect supreme elder's eyes. Brat for the Peng family, what are you laughing at over there? You look pretty pleased with yourself. Got some good news. The Five Union Assembly expert froze on the spot and hurriedly lowered his head. Senior, you're right. This junior was out of line. Meanwhile, back at Shiobin Pavilion, Manhwa's figure slowly emerged in the night. He still couldn't figure out why she insisted on making him come back at this exact time tomorrow. So yeah, he was a little speechless. That wouldn't have been easier to just leave with him tonight. Making him come again tomorrow almost felt like a trap. At that moment, the heavenly demon's voice rang out in his head. Passion, don't tell me you're actually planning to listen to her and come back tomorrow. You brat, don't tell me you've actually fallen for that girl. She met you for the first time and was already willing to hand over her entire future to you. Doesn't that strike you as weird? Manhwa felt that the heavenly demon probably couldn't understand that kind of emotion, but he could, because once upon a time, he had been that kind of person too. And more than that, he didn't want to believe she had lied while looking at him with those eyes. If that turned out to be true, it really would hurt. But the heavenly demon exploded in rage. You damn brat, you really don't understand a thing. For all you know, she could become your enemy one day. Love? Feelings? That crap is nothing but an illusion, worthless from start to finish. So get your head straight. The only thing that matters to you right now is getting stronger, and then even stronger. As long as I'm here, I can make you the strongest under heaven. Carrying my name as the heavenly demon means no wasting time on romance. That kind of nonsense only slows down your blade. Manhwa couldn't be bothered with the heavenly demon at all. To him. The guy was just an annoying little demon who loved meddling and everything. That almost made the heavenly demon explode. If he had known things would turn out like this, he might as well never have latched on a Manhwa in the first place. Letting his name shake the martial world again was already enough trouble, and now this brat still had time to think about romance. The heavenly demon seriously couldn't understand what was going on inside the kid's head. Just then, Manhwa noticed a group of Northern Sword Society members rushing around in a noisy panic up ahead. He stopped them and asked, "Why are you all running around this late at night? What happened?" One of them immediately replied, "Someone went missing. The entire Northern Sword Society is under top-level alert right now that we heard the person vanished out of nowhere, but no one can even clearly describe what he looks like, so we don't even know where to start looking." Manhwa's heart sank. If they didn't even know the person's appearance, then yeah, that was a problem. Then you at least know the name, right? Otherwise, how are you supposed to look for him? But in the next second, his eyes flew wide open because the man actually mentioned the jade-faced divine dragon. The person they were searching for was him. Inside the main hall, Dako Haiyan was just as anxious, repeatedly asking the strategist whether they had found anything yet. But the strategist could only answer helplessly. Regrettably, there's still no clear news. A Peng family expert behind them immediately said coldly, "Are you really regretting it? Or is this whole thing something your side did in the first place?" The strategist instantly flared up. The Northern Sword Society has never admitted to something it didn't do. Don't push your luck. But the Peng family expert wasn't backing down at all. "I'm saying I suspect you what? What are you going to do about it?" There were already rumors that the Northern Sword Society lost face because of the jade-faced divine dragon. And now he just happens to vanish from the very heart of your territory. Isn't that obvious enough already? That nearly made the strategist shake with rage. That's complete nonsense. You're just spewing garbage. Then Feng Chionho roared from behind them. "All of you, shut up. The man still hasn't been found, and you're already busy tearing into each other? Go find him now." Right then, a shout suddenly came from outside the door. Hero 1, the jade-faced divine dragon, has arrived. Dako Haiyan and Feng Chionho were both stunned on the spot. Feng Chionho couldn't help blurting out, "You damn brat, you finally decided to show yourself. If you stayed missing any longer, the whole Northern Sword Society was about to get dragged into the grave with you." When Manhwa stepped into the room, even he looked a little awkward. What exactly is going on here? Why are there suddenly so many people?" At that moment, Feng Chionho got so emotional that he almost shouted the word monarch before rushing straight toward Manhwa. Then he bowed deeply and said, "Thank heavens you're safe. If anything had happened to you, this old man wouldn't have known how to answer for it. That scene left several people in the room utterly shocked. The beggar sect supreme elder was showing this young man that much respect, and had even almost called him monarch. The meaning behind that was anything but ordinary. ManhwaCapped broke out in a cold sweat, and quickly told Feng Chionho to stand up. Lowering his voice, he whispered, "You were way too loud just now. Everyone heard you. How exactly am I supposed to explain this now?" Dako Hyenchion's suspicions only deepened. Feng Chionho was one of the highest-ranking elders in the entire martial world, yet he had just shown such reverence to a mere young man. To him, that was downright unbelievable. An old monster who stood several generations above him was bowing to a junior he himself hadn't even taken seriously before. And no matter how you looked at it, that wasn't normal. So the truth was practically screaming at him now. This young man's identity had to be extraordinary, but if he said it out loud himself, everyone present would probably be terrified. ManhwaCapped quickly whispered again, "Hurry up and think of a way to patch over what you just said." Feng Chionho instantly put on a flustered act and forced out a dry laugh. "Young Master Mun, your sudden disappearance really scared the life out of us." This old man panicked and started babbling nonsense that I even called you monarch. What a ridiculous slip of the tongue. ManhwaCapped was so embarrassed he wished the ground would just swallow him whole. But he still followed up smoothly, "My disappearance was unavoidable. The Supreme Elder has always treated me like his own grandson, so in a moment of panic, it's only natural that he misspoke." After that, the two of them kept up the act, laughing it off together, but no one in the room was stupid. Nobody believed it was just meaningless nonsense. There had to be something they couldn't openly talk about. ManhwaCapped bowed to everyone present. "It was my own carelessness that made all the heroes of the martial world worry like this. For that, I sincerely apologize." Then he gave Dako Hyenchon a separate bow, and especially to the Sword Emperor, "I truly owe you an apology for this disturbance." Dako Hyenchon played along with polite ease. "In that case, let's consider this matter settled for now. Why don't we move somewhere else and continue our conversation?" A short while later, a group of old veterans and two young men were seated together. Dako Hyenchon lifted a wine flask, poured ManhwaCapped a cup, and said with a smile, "Meeting Hero Win today has truly been a pleasure. Allow me to offer you a toast." By then, Feng Chionho already seemed a little drunk. Even so, that earlier slip of his, calling ManhwaCapped monarch, still kept Dako Hyenchon on edge. He refused to believe that old fox had simply misspoken. If anything, it sounded more like the truth had slipped out in a moment of panic. And that only made him even more curious about ManhwaCapped's origins. Who exactly was this young man? And where had he suddenly come from? So Dako Hyenchon made up his mind in silence. No matter what, he was going to uncover the jade-faced divine dragon's true identity. On the surface, the banquet hosted by Dako Hyenchon continued smoothly, with everyone appearing cheerful and relaxed. But in reality, two people were sitting there like they were on a bed of nails. One of them was Namgung Hyokrian, that he had come here to demand answers from the Northern Sword Society, only to somehow end up seated at a banquet table instead. The other, naturally, was ManhwaCapped, that he hadn't expected Dako Hyenchon to place him in such a prominent seat. Wasn't that basically the spot reserved for the main guest? Meanwhile, Feng Chionho watched ManhwaCapped with open satisfaction as the Supreme Elder of the Beggars Sect. One of the largest forces in the martial world, his use of the word monarch could never be dismissed as a joke. Aside from those two young men feeling badly out of place, everything else looked fairly stable. At this banquet, where leaders from the major sects had all gathered, nearly every gaze was fixed on ManhwaCapped. But on the surface, ManhwaCapped remained calm, as if he were ignoring every eye on him. Still, with so many people staring so hard, he honestly felt like they were about to see straight through him. Dako Hyenchon, in particular, never once looked away. Who the hell was this young man? How could Feng Chionho call him monarch? He turned the question over and over in his head, but still couldn't find an answer. Just then, a bald expert from the Five Union Assembly suddenly turned to Namgung Hyokrian and asked, "You've seen young Master Mun's martial arts with your own eyes before, haven't you?" That instantly made ManhwaCapped tense up. More than anything, he hoped the man wouldn't blurt everything out, because that would only make things even harder for him. After hearing that, Master Jikong slowly lifted his teacup and fixed ManhwaCapped with a grave stare. Namgung Hyokrian spoke with clear awe in his voice. "It was an experience beyond belief. I never imagined I would witness the legendary martial arts of Master Huining, arts long thought lost to history, reappear before my very eyes." The others might have spoken casually, but ManhwaCapped's heart was already pounding wildly. For him, this topic was the exact last thing he wanted dragged into the open, so he could only cover for himself. I was just fortunate enough to run into an extraordinary stroke of fate. Besides, none of this has actually been verified by Master Ji Kong yet. At that moment, Old Feng suddenly threw in a line of his own. But once it is verified, you'll become the highest-ranking person in Shaolin by seniority. ManhwaCapped quickly waved his hand for him to stop talking nonsense. I've never dared dream of receiving treatment like that. But Master Ji Kong took those words seriously and picked up the thread himself. The Supreme Elder is correct that by seniority, 6th Patriarch Huaining would stand as Shaolin's Grand Uncle Elder. And in this martial world, what sect doesn't take hierarchy seriously? If rank and seniority collapse, everything collapses with them. So, if the matter is confirmed, then this benefactor's standing in Shaolin would be at least equal to mine, perhaps even above mine. Those words left the people from the Northern Sword Society and the Southern Saber sect utterly stunned. To stand on equal footing with Master Ji Kong carried terrifying implications. In that instant, everyone realized this young man was anything but ordinary. If his identity were truly confirmed, he might become one of the highest-ranking figures in the righteous martial world by seniority alone. Add Feng Qianho's earlier monarch on top of that, and everyone's curiosity about ManhwaCapped's background only deepened. ManhwaCapped could only wave his hand again, trying to calm everyone down. I'm just a junior who only recently stepped into the Jianghu. I hope all of you will look after me in the future. Even now, Dako Haiyan was still obsessing over where ManhwaCapped had come from. He had heard before that the young man knew Shaolin martial arts, but he never imagined he had actually inherited Master Huaining's true teachings. Shaolin had always been the spiritual pillar of the righteous martial world. The saying, all martial arts under heaven trace back to Shaolin, was no empty legend. Its influence and connections throughout the Jianghu were beyond imagination. And the Beggar's sect, led by Feng Qianho, possessed the largest network and the sharpest intelligence system in the entire martial world. So if Dako Haiyan truly wanted to dominate the Jianghu, there was no way around those two forces. Thinking that far, he actually felt relieved. Thank heavens he hadn't really made a move on ManhwaCapped earlier. Otherwise, he might have brought a disaster upon himself big enough to wipe out an entire clan. At that point, what mattered most was no longer guarding against ManhwaCapped, but finding a way to win him over while preserving the Northern Sword Society's relationship with Feng Qianho. If only he had one more daughter. The thought even stirred a trace of regret in him. As everyone at the banquet hid their own agendas and watched each other carefully, the feast carried on, and the title Jade-Faced Divine Dragon was burned into the minds of every sect leader present, probably for life. Then the vote, which everyone had assumed would end in deadlock, unexpectedly swung hard in the Northern Sword Society's favor. Nearly 70% supported their proposal, and the matter was wrapped up in haste. Once the opposition lost its footing, the initiative fell completely into the Northern Sword Society's hands. Not only did this become the first large-scale campaign led by the Righteous Path against the Demonic Path in thousands of years, it also gave birth to the strongest righteous alliance in martial world history. Meanwhile, in a bamboo grove, the Heavenly Demon's eyes went wide in disbelief. Brat, what did you just say? You want me to teach you sword control? ManhwaCapped nodded. I still have something to do tonight, and now that I finally have sword of my own, it makes sense to learn a little while I have the chance. The Heavenly Demon let out a chuckle. The sword is the king of all weapons. Since you won't learn, I'll teach you everything that in time, you could become a demonic sword god of your generation. First, the Heavenly Demon told ManhwaCapped to suspend the Heavenly Demon sword in midair. Sure enough, the moment ManhwaCapped opened his hand, his internal energy lifted the black blade with ease and held it aloft. Then the Heavenly Demon shouted excitedly, "Throw it out! As far as you can, send it flying." ManhwaCapped didn't understand what the Heavenly Demon was planning, but if there were no restraints, then naturally the sword could be launched a long way. So he slowly raised his arm, eyes locked on the floating sword ahead of him. In the next instant, he shoved his palm forward with force, and a sharp whistling sound tore through the bamboo grove. The flying sword shot out like an arrow loose from the bowstring, tearing forward in a blur. But just then, the Heavenly Demon suddenly barked, "Now bring it back!" The abrupt shout startled ManhwaCapped, and he instantly twisted his wrist, trying to recall the Heavenly Demon sword. The blade in midair immediately started wobbling. That sudden yell had broken his focus, and the control over his internal energy slipped at once. With a series of sharp whooshes, the sword spun wildly through the air before slamming hard into a stalk of bamboo. The surprising part was that the bamboo didn't break. That made ManhwaCapped's heart jolt that by all logic, it shouldn't have turned out like that. the heavenly demon burst out laughing. That sword can split cold iron, and yet in your hands it can't even cut through a single stalk of bamboo. Once the sword flew more than 10 zhang away, your internal energy wasn't strong enough to control it anymore. That distance right there is your current limit. At your current level, all this amounts to is ordinary swordsmanship at best. That only made ManhwaCapped even more confused. If this didn't count as true sword control, then what did? The heavenly demon's face darkened. You ignorant brat. Have you never thought about what lies beyond the basic realm of the sword? ManhwaCapped couldn't help laughing a little. He hadn't expected the heavenly demon to really put on the air of a master. But since the guy was serious about teaching, then he had no reason not to learn seriously too. After a brief pause, ManhwaCapped said, I really don't understand the higher realm of sword arts. But if I had to guess, does it mean the sword and the wielder truly become one? The heavenly demon answered coldly. Exactly. Only when your energy, intent, and sword truly merge, when man and blade become one, can you be said to have stepped through the gate of real sword control. Cold sweat started forming on ManhwaCapped's forehead. He honestly couldn't make sense of half the things the heavenly demon was saying. True sword control sounded ridiculously complicated, to the point that he genuinely wondered how the people of the past had ever learned this stuff in the first place. The heavenly demon let out a smug chuckle. I'm a genius. I never needed to grind through this kind of thing. One look was enough, and I understood it. And stop overthinking it. For now, just aim for the realm of the formless sword. 2 hours later, ManhwaCapped was still training in the bamboo grove. At that moment, he used his fingers as a guide, directing the heavenly demon sword through the air. Right as the blade was about to sweep past a bamboo stalk, he suddenly clenched his fist. In that instant, the sword slashed downward and unleashed a fierce wave of sword aura. ManhwaCapped let out a small laugh. In this state, the sword aura he was producing actually felt pretty solid. But the heavenly demon immediately poured cold water on him. This still isn't the end. With sword aura at your current level, you still can't break through truly powerful defensive sword energy. So if you want to push beyond ordinary sword aura, you need to condense it further and forge a real sword edge. ManhwaCapped was still confused about how exactly he was supposed to push sword aura any further. But he followed the instructions anyway. That he raised his palm and gathered his internal energy into the center of his hand, letting it surge outward. The next second, he locked his eyes on the bamboo grove ahead and started circulating his power exactly the way the heavenly demon had told him. Then he snapped his hand forward and flung that power out. Sure enough, the instant he moved, an even more violent and razor-sharp sword edge exploded toward the grove. The bamboo forest ahead was ripped apart like rotten wood under the force of that strike. Even the heavenly demon was taken aback. Pulling off sword edge on the first try, this brat's growth speed really was absurd. But that was exactly what made him interesting. Otherwise, all of this would have been boring as hell. 2.5 hours later, ManhwaCapped collapsed flat on the ground, completely exhausted. Breathing hard, he asked, back then, what realm did you actually reach? The heavenly demon thought about it for a moment before replying calmly. At the very least, I had already surpassed the formless sword. ManhwaCapped immediately sat bolt upright. You went beyond the formless sword. Then that means there are realms even higher than that. The heavenly demon burst into laughter. Of course there are. Once you surpass the formless sword, you enter the realm where the forces of nature themselves can be turned into sword intent and sword force. That realm is called the natural realm. Back in my era, only a tiny handful of people ever stepped into it, and I was one of them. ManhwaCapped didn't think the heavenly demon was joking or exaggerating, but he still couldn't fully grasp what this so-called natural realm really meant. The heavenly demon spoke slowly. I'm not joking with you. Just think about it. If, on a rainy day, you could transform every drop of rain in the sky into sword energy, then forget tens of thousands of soldiers, you could wipe them all out in an instant. ManhwaCapped immediately asked, then what if you turn the wind itself into sword energy? The heavenly demon instantly cursed him out. Idiot! If even lightning falling from the heavens could be turned into sword force, who do you think could possibly block it? The more the heavenly demon talked, the more outrageous it sounded. ManhwaCapped could barely believe it. Could a human being really do something like that? But the heavenly demon dismissed his doubts outright, saying ManhwaCapped's experience was still too shallow. Humans absolutely could reach that level. In fact, the heavenly demon had even more things he wanted to teach him. But at ManhwaCapped's current level, even if he explained them now, the kid wouldn't understand a thing. ManhwaCapped silently sorted through the realms the heavenly demon had mentioned so far. Formless sword, natural realm. Then what came after that? For once, The heavenly demon's expression turned completely serious. The highest realm is called the cosmic realm. And don't think I'm joking, that realm truly exists. Still, he reminded ManhwaCapped that none of this was something he needed to focus on right now. One day, when he had grown strong enough to attract the attention of those beings, he would naturally come into contact with that level. At first, ManhwaCapped assumed that the heavenly demon mentioned meant the great grandmasters of the martial world. But to his surprise, it clearly wasn't them. The heavenly demon let out a dark little laugh. Those so-called martial world elders, they're not even worth my attention. I'm talking about something else entirely. Just keep getting stronger. Once you do, you'll eventually draw their eyes. When that day comes, you'll understand on your own. Until then, explaining more is useless. Just then, Master Huaning slowly stepped forward as well. So the heavenly demon was talking about them. That caught ManhwaCapped off guard. He hadn't expected even Huaning to know about those beings. With his palms pressed together, Huaning said calmly, "This humble monk has never seen them with his own eyes, but I once heard Bodhidharma mention them." The heavenly demon immediately burst out laughing. If that's the case, then Bodhidharma must have stepped into the natural realm too. After that, the heavenly demon told ManhwaCapped to forget all those messy side techniques for now, as long as he kept refining his sword path. Enlightenment would come sooner or later. In the end, his destination wouldn't change anyway. And no matter which road he walked, the end point would still connect. Meanwhile, inside the Divine Sword Pavilion, ManhwaCapped was on his way to the Northern Sword Society leader study. Even he hadn't expected Dako Haiyan to invite him to a private lunch. ManhwaCapped had already known that after what Feng Qianho and Master Ji Kong said, every faction would pay even closer attention to him. But he still hadn't expected Dako Haiyan to court him this openly. Since things had come to this, ManhwaCapped decided to use the chance to test the Northern Sword Society leader for himself. Before long, he stepped into Dako Haiyan's study. Rising to his feet, Dako Haiyan cupped his fist politely. "Today I wish to speak with Hero when in private. I hope this hasn't caused any offense." ManhwaCapped returned the courtesy. "Sword Emperor, you're too polite. To receive an invitation from you is already an honor." Then he swept his gaze around the room and smiled faintly. "Though I have to say, this pavilion of yours is truly impressive. It almost makes a man want to move in." Dako Haiyan kept his expression calm, but his thoughts had already started moving that if he couldn't eliminate someone, then he would pull that person over to his side. That had always been his way. He laughed heartily. "I never expected Hero want to like this place so much. If you wish, you could stay here for a few months. I could even have a brand new Divine Sword Pavilion built just for you." ManhwaCapped narrowed his eyes slightly. He had only tossed out that line as a casual probe, but since Dako Haiyan took the bait, he might as well press a little further. Wearing an innocent smile, he said, "Why go to all that trouble? Why not just hand this Divine Sword Pavilion over to me?" That made Dako Haiyan's heart twitch. This place had been built with enormous effort and expense. There was no way he could just give it away. But not a trace of that showed on his face. Instead, he smoothly smiled and replied, "That works too. That IT would save the trouble of building another one. In that case, when would Hero be free to move into the Divine Sword Pavilion?" ManhwaCapped immediately laughed. "I was only joking. How could I possibly take the Sword Emperor's Divine Sword Pavilion?" But inwardly, he had already judged the man clearly. This guy really was slippery. He could say something that's shameless with a straight face. Soon, dish after dish was brought in. Fish, steamed egg custard, pork rib soup, and a long spread of delicacies. This table of food and wine would not have looked out of place, even in an imperial palace. ManhwaCapped hadn't expected Dako Haiyan to prepare things so thoroughly. Some of the dishes were so rare that even he was seeing them for the first time. In his previous life, he had eaten imperial cuisine every single day, and yet even he couldn't identify all the ingredients in the dishes laid out before him now. That made him realize just how extravagant Dako Haiyan's life really was, arguably even more luxurious than his own had been back when he sat on the throne. Dako Haiyan respectfully cupped his fists again. "Hero One, please try them. These are the specialties of the Divine Sword Pavilion's kitchen that I have great confidence in them. I've even heard they rival the imperial chefs." ManhwaCapped smiled and returned the gesture, though inwardly he felt a little irritated. IT might have been true, but hearing it from Dako Haiyan still felt like a slap wrapped in courtesy. Then ManhwaCapped steered the conversation back to the real issue. Does the Sword Emperor truly intend to launch a campaign against the demonic path? Dako Haiyan answered evenly. That matter has already been settled by vote among the righteous sections. More importantly, many of our fellow martial artists already wanted this outcome, that I merely followed the current. Manhwa sneered inwardly, finding the man laughably hypocritical. This entire thing had clearly been orchestrated by him. Yet now he spoke as though he were just going along with the tide. He pressed on. Then how exactly does the Sword Emperor intend to wage war on the Demon Mirror sect? Surely you already have a plan in mind. Dako Haiyan was clearly prepared for that. If we want to truly uproot the Demon Mirror sect, then the first step is to establish a real martial alliance capable of coordinating the whole righteous path. That step alone will likely take at least a year. As he spoke, he gently set down his chopsticks, picked up a leaf of greens, and continued. Their main base is in Xiangzhou, but their hidden strongholds are scattered everywhere. If we want to tear them out by the root, it may take even longer. Then Manhwa threw out another question. The moment it left his mouth, Dako Haiyan's expression grew noticeably heavier. What Manhwa asked was simple. If the Demon Mirror sect were truly wiped out one day, would the martial alliance be dissolved afterward? At that point, Dako Haiyan finally understood something clearly. This kid had been testing him from the very beginning. Faced with that question, Dako Haiyan could only smooth it over with a vague answer. That would naturally have to be decided when the time comes. Still, he followed it up by saying he genuinely hoped the martial alliance could become a permanent institution and continue existing long-term. In his words, that would be the best choice for lasting peace in the martial world. Heroine, wouldn't you agree? On the surface, Manhwa kept the conversation polite. But inwardly, he had already reached his own conclusion that a man like Dako Haiyan didn't really care whether the martial world lived or died. What he cared about was stuffing power and profit into his own hands. So Manhwa deliberately put on a thoughtful look and pressed a little further. But wouldn't there still be other variables? For example, what happened in the snowy mountains not long ago? The instant he heard that, Dako Haiyan's face turned serious. If we're talking about variables, I wouldn't quite call it that. But I have heard something. It seems the martial arts of the Heavenly Demon sect have resurfaced in the Jianghu. That line shocked the Heavenly Demon so much that he immediately started muttering in Manhwa's mind. Could it be that his old followers were still carrying out his will even now? Even Manhwa himself was startled. Had the Heavenly Demon sect really reappeared? Dako Haiyan continued. To be precise, a man has appeared calling himself the Heavenly Demon Scholar. According to reports, his martial arts are strikingly similar to those of the old Heavenly Demon sect. That left Manhwa painfully awkward. He and the Heavenly Demon had clearly misunderstood the situation. The Heavenly Demon Scholar Dako Haiyan was talking about was obviously him. Manhwa couldn't help cursing inwardly that this bastard had been labeling him like that behind his back. Dako Haiyan was being cautious for a reason. Over the years, he had heard far too many bizarre rumors about the Heavenly Demon sect. There were so many that he couldn't tell truth from fiction anymore. Right then, the Heavenly Demon himself seemed to arrive at some kind of private guess, and that immediately made Manhwa itch with curiosity. He urged him to spit it out. But of course, at the most critical moment, the Heavenly Demon clammed up that he just fell into thought, like he was silently calculating something. At the same time, Dako Haiyan smoothly shifted the topic and said, "I would like to invite Hero to work with us for the sake of justice in the martial world. What does the hero think?" Then he began laying out the bait. The martial alliance that is about to be established is in desperate need of someone as talented as you. If you're willing, I can offer you a position second only to one man and above 10,000 others. I'll make sure your name shakes the martial world. Manhwa sneered inwardly. That was the man's real goal. Clearly, Dako Haiyan had already started seeing himself as the future alliance leader, and now he wanted Manhwa under his command. What he didn't know was that in his previous life, Manhwa had already stood above all others as the ruler of the realm. Why would he care about a mere martial alliance? Even so, Manhwa didn't answer right away. He slowly lifted his wine cup, brought it near his lips, and took in the aroma before finally speaking. The Sword Emperor's high regard truly leaves me flattered, but this is a major matter. I hope you can allow me some time to think it over. Dako Haiyan wasn't stupid. He had already painted a massive future for the young man. Yet Manhwa still refused to commit on the spot. The meaning was obvious enough. So he smoothly pulled back. In that case, let's leave it here for today. We can always sit down and discuss it again another time. But Heroine should understand one thing. I truly do think very highly of you. As soon as he finished speaking, Dako Haiyan snapped his fingers. Manhwa looked up in mild surprise, not quite sure what kind of move the man was making now. At that moment, a slender figure slowly entered his field of vision. A young woman stepped forward and bowed. This daughter, Lana, has come to greet father. Manhwa's heart instantly sounded the alarm. What kind of trick was this old fox playing now? Dako Hyeon smiled. Lana, don't just stand there. Hurry and greet our honored guest properly. The moment Dako Seolran turned her head, Manhwa sharply noticed the slight tremor that ran through her body. Clearly, she had recognized him as the young master from the previous night, but she regained her composure almost immediately and lowered her head in greeting. This young woman is Dako Seolran. Greetings, young master. Manhwa slowly pulled his chair back, but inwardly he already understood what was happening that was the game Dako Hyeon wanted to play. Unfortunately for him, Manhwa was more than familiar with scenes like this. With a calm smile, he returned the greeting. My surname is Wen in the Jianghu. People call me the Jade-Faced Divine Dragon. To be blessed with the sight of the young lady today is truly a fortune of 3 lifetimes. At that moment, Dako Hyeon also started to sense that something was off. The way those two reacted to each other felt just a little too delicate. Soon, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. So slight, it was almost impossible to catch. He immediately had Dako Seolran sit by his side, then asked with deliberate meaning, "What does Heroine think of my daughter? I don't say this merely because she is my child. With looks like hers, she would fall behind no one wherever she went." Hearing that, Manhwa felt a surge of disgust. This Dako Hyeon really was a complete old fox. What, was he planning to use his daughter's marriage to manipulate yet another person? Then Manhwa deliberately put on a shy look and said with a smile, "I've seen my fair share of beauties in the Jianghu, but a peerless beauty like Miss Seolran. This really is my first time." Hearing that praise, Dako Seolran actually blushed a little before giving a light cough, as if warning him to watch what he was saying. At that exact moment, Manhwa secretly sent her a message through voice transmission. "Miss Seolran, you haven't forgotten about tonight, have you?" Dako Hyeon, of course, had no idea the two were already speaking right in front of him. He simply assumed they were exchanging normal pleasantries and kept praising his daughter. She's at the perfect age now. It's about time she found a proper match. But something as important as marriage can't be handled carelessly. If it were someone like Hero One, though, that would be another matter. Manhwa chuckled. "The Sword Emperor really thinks too highly of me. I'm not nearly as impressive as the rumors make me out to be." Still, he cupped his fists toward Dako Hyeon with flawless courtesy. To receive such regard from the Sword Emperor is truly more than I deserve. If you ever have a request, then as long as it's within my power, I'll do what I can. But inwardly, Dako Hyeon sneered, "Oh, what if you're the Jade-Faced Divine Dragon? Aren't you still taking the bait step by step? Looks like this guy can't get past the beauty either." Soon after, Manhwa rose and saluted the two of them. "I'll take my leave for now. Someone is waiting for me outside." Dako Hyeon laughed loudly. "Then it seems I've kept you too long and overstepped. Another day then, we'll talk again another day." Before leaving, Manhwa deliberately looked at Dako Seolran and said with meaning, "Miss Seolran, until we meet again." Dako Hyeon watched his departing figure with a deep, unreadable gaze. Clearly, he was already scheming about something else. Standing beside him, Dako Seolran immediately played along and asked in a soft, curious voice, "Father, who exactly is that man?" But Dako Hyeon had no intention of letting her pry. He coldly replied, "That's none of your concern. You just stay at home and wait to be married. Why next spring, I'll have you wed." Dako Seolran quickly asked, "Then who exactly am I supposed to marry?" But before she could finish, Dako Hyeon cut her off without mercy. "Who else? Haven't I told you already? Naturally, the young sect master of the Southern Saber sect." That made Dako Seolran's heart tremble. After all, that man's reputation had never been good. She wanted to say more, but Dako Hyeon cut her off again. "You only need to do as I say, go back." Left with no choice, Dako Seolran nodded. She knew perfectly well that her father had never truly listened to her. Meanwhile, beneath the Divine Sword Pavilion, the place was still packed with life as people set up stalls and wandered through the night market. So many people had gathered because the celebration was set to last all night. Word was that, in celebration of the righteous sects reaching an agreement on the campaign against the Demon Mirror sect, the banquet would continue until the following day. At the same time, inside Shihua Pavilion, Manhwa had already appeared in secret. With a faint smile, he muttered, "In that case, let's make that guy suffer a little first." On the other side, Dako Seolran's group had also finished making the preparations, but the masked man by her side still couldn't help warning her. "Miss, it's a good thing that you've made up your mind, but can you really trust that guy surnamed Wen? If you suddenly disappear, the Sword Emperor will cast a net over all of Kaifeng Prefecture. Once that happens, things will get ugly fast. Dako Seol Ran understood exactly what he was worried about. Even so, she still chose to believe that everything would go smoothly. Meanwhile, Manhwa was leaning against a wall, watching the whole thing with a speechless look on his face. He truly hadn't expected Dako Seol Ran to tell a servant about their plan. Once that happened, there was no way this could still be called airtight. The heavenly demon burst out laughing. I already told you to face reality. Before this blows up any further, take the girl and get out. Once the whole thing spirals out of control, you won't be leaving even if you want to. By then, Dako Saran was starting to get anxious too. Why hadn't young Master One arrived yet? The masked man lowered his voice and said, "What if he only talked big in front of you, miss, but got scared once he realized how serious this would become? Maybe he doesn't dare come after all." But the instant the words left his mouth, Manhwa's figure suddenly appeared before them, startling the masked man badly. Manhwa's voice turned cold. "You think I'm someone like you? What exactly would I be afraid of?" In the next second, the masked man immediately took a defensive stance and shielded Dako Seol Ran behind him. But inwardly, he was already in shock. The man had closed the distance to this extent, and he hadn't sensed a thing until the moment he appeared. That kind of strength was downright terrifying. And at that very moment, Manhwa finally remembered who this man was. That look in his eyes. Wasn't he the same one from the horseback scene earlier that day? The same guy who had flown right over his head? At the same time, the masked man finally recognized Manhwa too. "So you're the lunatic from earlier? Do you have any idea how badly you startled me back then?" Manhwa looked speechless. Between the two of us, who exactly is the real lunatic here? Anyone who does something that crazy out in the street has no right calling someone else insane. At that moment, the masked man slowly pulled down the veil, covering her face. She stared at Manhwa and said coldly, "There's no way I'm handing my lady over to some shady man whose background I know nothing about." But Manhwa ignored her completely and just looked baffled instead. "What kind of nonsense are you talking about? And why did you suddenly take off your veil?" With that, he walked straight up to Dako Seol Ran and asked whether she was ready. Dako Seol Ran immediately turned around and dragged out a huge bundle from behind her. It was stuffed with expensive clothes, jewelry, and all kinds of valuables she clearly planned to bring along. Seeing that, Manhwa could only think how naive this young lady really was. If you're running away, then just carry banknotes. Why are you dragging all this junk with you? Then he strode over, grabbed the bundle himself, and said bluntly, "None of this comes with us. Throw it all away if it slows us down. It's useless as long as you can come with me and carry some money. That's enough." Right then, the masked woman stepped in front of him again. Manhwa arched a brow, genuinely a little surprised. "What? Don't tell me you're coming with us too." The masked woman put her veil back on and answered without hesitation. "Of course I am. There's no way I'm leaving my lady alone with you." Manhwa turned to Dako Seol Ran and asked, "You really want to bring her?" Dako Seol Ran nodded immediately and said yes, because Huan Sao was the person closest to her. Manhwa glanced back at the woman and said casually, "Fine then. Black bundled, I can take you too, but I'm not wasting extra effort looking after you. Just don't get in my way." Huan Sao looked at him with open disdain. "I can take care of myself. You should worry about yourself instead, and make sure you keep your promise." Manhwa couldn't even be bothered responding. He just turned away and kept talking to Dako Seol Ran instead. Huan Sao might have acted unconvinced, but inwardly she was startled. The fact that Manhwa could slip behind her without making a sound proved he was no ordinary expert. The only problem was that his personality was unbelievably irritating. Then Huan Sao asked in a low voice, "Do you actually have a real plan or not? We can't possibly just walk straight out like this." But Manhwa's answer was absurdly simple. "A plan? What do I need one of those for? I fully intend to walk straight out." Huan Sao let out a cold laugh. "You might be able to, but my lady doesn't know martial arts. How exactly is she supposed to get out?" Manhwa didn't look bothered in the slightest. "That's easy that if she can't move on her own, then I'll carry her out." Huan Sao immediately thought the man was being outrageously arrogant. "Even if you carry her, you still won't get past the people lying in ambush around Shihua Pavilion. Don't tell me you didn't even think that far ahead. If this is all you've got, then I can't hand my lady over to you." After hearing that, Manhwa had to admit she had a little bit of a point. Just a little. Then he lightly clapped his hands and motioned toward Dako Seol Ran. "Miss Seol Ran, come here for a second." Once she stepped over, Manhwa reached out, lifted her chin, and carefully examined her face. After a moment, he made a deeply serious observation that nearly sounded ridiculous. "Miss Seol Ran really is adorable." Then he sent a glance toward the heavenly demon and asked inwardly, Can I use a concealment technique on her too? The heavenly demon replied flatly, of course, but it'll only last for a quarter of an hour. Manhwa smiled right away. That's enough. With 15 minutes, every problem here is solved. Then he turned back to the two women and finally laid out his plan. Miss, listen carefully to what I'm about to say. And Huan Sao, you'd better listen too. Huan Sao's heart skipped. This bastard actually dared treat her lady with that much familiarity? But Dako Ran felt something entirely different. She realized that she didn't actually dislike Manhwa at all, that, if anything, there was something a little roguish and annoyingly attractive about him. Manhwa slowly raised one finger and said in a mock-serious tone, Step 1. I'm going to change the lady's face. Once I've disguised her as someone else, Miss Ran will leave calmly together with Huan Sao. That way, the people hiding in the shadows won't notice anything strange. After you pass beyond the areas around Showa Pavilion where the ambushes are concentrated, I'll appear at once and take the lady away. That's the entire plan. Showa Pavilion itself may be heavily guarded, but the rest of the area isn't nearly as tight. And with tonight's banquet going on, the place is crowded and chaotic. That alone makes the security looser than usual. At that moment, Dako Ran was still visibly uneasy. The second she heard Manhwa say he was going to change her face, doubt flashed across her heart. She couldn't help wondering whether he could really pull something like that off. And if he truly did change her face, she definitely didn't want to spend the rest of her life wearing someone else's features. Seeing her reaction, Manhwa calmly reassured her, Relax, the disguise is only temporary. After a quarter of an hour, your face will return to normal on its own. But right then, Huan Sao cut in coldly. Don't tell me you're planning to use variant disguise art. Clearly, she recognized the method. Manhwa just smiled. Exactly, that's what I mean. But Huan Sao frowned at once. Miss can't use martial arts. Before she could say more, Manhwa cut her off. I know perfectly well that your lady doesn't know martial arts. That's exactly why I told you to listen carefully instead of interrupting. In a moment, go bring me a maid, preferably one who moves in and out of Showa Pavilion often. Someone no one questioned, I only need to get a good look at her face. Once that part's ready, we move immediately. Then I'll show both of you what a truly useful technique looks like. Huan Sao and Dako Ran both stared at him with open suspicion that it was obvious they still didn't fully trust him. 3 minutes later, a maid was brought over. She clearly didn't understand why Lord Huan Sao was suddenly calling for her so late at night. Huan Sao told her to stand still and not move. Neither of them realized that Manhwa was already standing right beside them. Huan Sao couldn't sense a trace of his presence. At one point, she even started wondering if the man had slipped away without a word. The more she thought about it, the less sure she became that this whole plan would actually work. Then, all at once, Huan Sao jolted. Manhwa's voice suddenly reached her ears through voice transmission. Sent her back that I've seen enough. Huan Sao immediately waved her hand. All right, you can go back and rest now. Sorry to drag you over this late. On her way out, the maid couldn't help thinking that Lord Huan Sao seemed strangely off tonight. After the maid left, Manhwa had Dako Ran sit down again. All right, now I'm going to start the disguise. In the next second, a strange red, demonic aura slowly rose from his palm. Writhing like something alive, it couldn't be helped. This technique had been created by the heavenly demon himself, so of course it carried a touch of blood-soaked darkness. Even so, not every demonic technique existed only for evil. The sight of it instantly shocked both Dako Ran and Huan Sao. Then Manhwa raised his hand and slowly brought his palm to the side of Dako Ran's face. A flurry of sharp movements followed. His palm swept across her face again and again, so fast it almost blurred. Huan Sao's expression changed completely, unable to hide her shock. If she looked closely, she would have seen that every place his hand passed over caused a tiny shift in Dako Ran's features. In only a few moments, Dako Ran's heavenly beauty was gone, replaced by the plain face of an ordinary young woman. The change was so complete, it was like watching someone turn into a different person right before their eyes. Manhwa immediately barked, Huan Sao, this is not the time to stand there in shock. Take her to change clothes, redo her hair, and get out now. Once the two of them had changed outfits, they started talking quietly on the way out. Huan Sao still couldn't help asking, is this really going to work? Putting this much trust in a complete stranger. Isn't that way too reckless? Dako Ran only gave a faint smile. From your point of view, it probably looks like I trust him a lot, doesn't it? But think about it again. Every person father can't get rid of, he eventually tries to drag to his side and use to expand his own power. He's always been the kind of man who'll do anything to get what he wants, and his blood runs in me too. So, if there's even a chance to leave the Northern Sword Society, then I'll accept help from anyone, even a stranger. After hearing that, Huan Sao finally understood what Dako Silran meant. In the end, she chose to respect her lady's resolve. And just like that, Huan Sao led the disguised Dako Silran out in full view, as though nothing were wrong at all. But at that very moment, a burst of water suddenly exploded from the pool beside them. In the next second, two figures shot up from the water and landed squarely in front of Huan Sao. One of them pulled the breathing tube away from his mouth and frowned. "Where are you two heading this late at night?" Huan Sao's eyes darkened instantly, and her voice turned colder. "We have business outside, but it's by the lady's order. Move aside." But the other man didn't step back right away. Instead, he said in a low voice, "Do you not know the rules? No one is supposed to enter or leave after midnight." Huan Sao answered at once, "Didn't you hear me? I already said this is the lady's command." The man was clearly pressured by the force coming off Huan Sao. His tone softened immediately. It was obvious he hadn't intended to stop them outright. He had only spoken out of duty. In the end, he stepped aside and muttered, "Then do as you wish." Huan Sao gave Dako Silran a small nod from over her shoulder. "Let's go." After the two of them walked a dozen or so steps, the two guards behind them couldn't help muttering under their breath. Since when did that maid by the young lady's side have a figure like that? Quit talking and get ready for the shift change. Right then, ManhwaCapped contacted Huan Sao through voice transmission. "Just keep walking straight ahead, that I'll be waiting for you in front." When he noticed Huan Sao glancing around instinctively, he immediately added, "Don't look around. Just head straight to the big tree ahead." Very soon, Huan Sao and Dako Silran reached the base of the tree, but there was still no sign of ManhwaCapped anywhere. Then, in the very next instant, there was a sharp whoosh, and ManhwaCapped appeared as though he had materialized out of thin air, wrapping Dako Silran into his arms in one smooth motion. Even Huan Sao was badly startled. This man's movement technique was far too ghostly. ManhwaCapped was fully prepared on his end. From here on, it all depended on whether Huan Sao could keep up or not. In the next second, he pushed off the ground and shot straight into the night sky. Huan Sao froze on the spot and nearly cursed out loud. "How the hell am I supposed to chase that? I know lightning is skill, sure, but I can't fly." Still, with her lady already taken ahead, she had no choice but to find a way to follow. She was still reeling from how absurd ManhwaCapped's movement skill was, but this clearly wasn't the time to stand there stunned. She might not be able to fly, but as long as she followed the direction he went, she should still be able to catch up eventually. Meanwhile, ManhwaCapped tapped through the air several times in rapid succession, his body moving like a streak of light. In the blink of an eye, he had already crossed 1,000 meters. Held in his arms, Dako Silran found herself staring at him in a daze. A quiet thought surfaced in her heart. Looking at him like this young master really was absurdly handsome. The title Jade-Faced Divine Dragon fit him perfectly. At that moment, ManhwaCapped lowered his head and asked whether there was anywhere she especially wanted to go to. If there was, he could take her there right now. To his surprise, Dako Silran answered that she wanted to go to the Beggar Sect headquarters. That made ManhwaCapped pause slightly. What did she want at the Beggar Sect headquarters? Did she already know Feng Chionho somehow? ManhwaCapped chuckled and told her to hold on tighter. "Then hold tight. Mississippi will be at the Beggar Sect headquarters soon enough. If you fall, I'm not catching you twice." The moment he finished speaking, his whole body became like a savage gust of wind blasting across the night sky. 2.5 minutes later, ManhwaCapped landed in front of the Beggar Sect headquarters with Dako Silran in his arms. The impact of his landing sent out a heavy thud through the ground. But the instant they touched down, Dako Silran's face turned pale. She looked deeply uncomfortable, almost as though the speed of that journey had left her dizzy and sick to her stomach. About 20 minutes later, Huan Sao finally came rushing in at full speed. She was gasping so hard she could barely stand straight. But the moment ManhwaCapped saw her, he started mocking her mercilessly. "What took you so long? You're way too weak to your speed. Even a turtle in the river could beat you here." Huan Sao was too exhausted to form a complete sentence. All she could do was wheeze out, "Sorry. I already gave it everything I had." She was both furious and stunned inside. She had practically run herself half to death to get here, while this bastard looked like he hadn't even broken a sweat. Once the two women were safely delivered, ManhwaCapped turned to leave. He still had to get back to the banquet as fast as possible. That startled Dako Silran. "You came all the way out here in the middle of the banquet. Your nerve really is outrageous." ManhwaCapped only laughed. "My guts have always been this big. Besides, no one is going to imagine I could bring the two of you out here this fast and still return like nothing happened. That makes this my perfect alibi, if I want to shake suspicion. This is the cleanest way to do it. Then he added, just tell the beggar sect people that the jade-faced divine dragon asked them to look after you, that they'll help. And since you seem to have some old connection to the Supreme Elder too, the two of you should be able to lie low here without a problem. For now, stay hidden here and keep your heads down. Once I have the chance, I'll come see you again. With that, ManhwaCapped's figure flashed upward once more and vanished back into the night. Dako Ran could only stare after him in amazement. That speed, it's unbelievable. Meanwhile, ManhwaCapped found himself genuinely looking forward to one thing. He really wanted to see what kind of expression Dako would wear once he discovered what had happened. Back at the banquet grounds, the atmosphere was still lively, and everyone remained immersed in the grand feast. Namgung was already flushed red from drink. The moment he saw ManhwaCapped return, he burst out laughing. Young Master Mun, where the hell did you run off to just now? Didn't we agree we were drinking till we dropped tonight? Why did you suddenly disappear? ManhwaCapped looked around and saw that the whole group was already swaying drunkenly from side to side. They were clearly hammered, and who knew how much they'd already drunk. Seeing that, ManhwaCapped laughed right along with them. Fine then, let's keep drinking. From this moment on, we drink till our hearts are satisfied. In the next moment, ManhwaCapped calmly slipped back into the drinking as if nothing had happened. Compared to before, the wine in his cup now carried a trace of sweetness, far less bitter than the last round. During the feast, he even cracked a joke on purpose, making the two men laugh so hard they could barely close their mouths. And deep down, ManhwaCapped knew exactly what he was doing, that he had to create a perfect illusion. He needed enough people to see him drinking, talking, and laughing all night long. Because later on, those very people would become the key witnesses proving he had nothing to do with anything. Peng Jinhu laughed loudly. I'm telling you, Hero 1, your drinking capacity is insane. Your martial arts are terrifying. Is there anything at all you can't do? Then he even brought up the time ManhwaCapped had fooled him before. At first, I honestly didn't like you much, but looking back now, that wasn't really anything, that I was just too narrow-minded. Now that I think about it, you drink like a monster and fight like one to Oh, I've made up my mind. I like you, Hero 1. He even sighed about how lucky he was, saying that being able to meet someone like ManhwaCapped had to be fate. Hearing that, ManhwaCapped genuinely felt a little moved. Likewise, meeting all of you so early in my journey through the Jianghu has been one of the best things that's happened to me. Those words nearly moved Peng Jinhu to tears. Hero 1, you're too good to us? If anything ever happens, just say the word Peng Jinhu, will help with everything I've got. At that point, Namgung also asked, Young Master Mun, are you really leaving tomorrow? If you don't have other plans yet, why not come with us to the 5 Union Assembly and have a look around? ManhwaCapped immediately showed a troubled expression. After leaving here, I still have somewhere else I need to go to. IT is a shame. But if the chance comes next time, I'll definitely visit you in person. Just don't pretend not to know me when that day comes. That made everyone laugh again. Raising their cups, they said, Then let this drink be our farewell to Hero 1. Next time we meet, may your name already shake the land, known across the entire Jianghu. In the end, they all shouted together, To Hero 1's righteous path, cheers. In the blink of an eye, morning arrived. At that moment, Dako expression was terrifyingly dark. What the hell are all of you good for? My daughter has gone missing, and you only realized it now. The strategist was so frightened he trembled all over. He could only force himself to report. Based on this subordinate's investigation, Miss Ran does not appear to have been abducted by outsiders. IT is more likely that she escaped on her own. But Dako refused to believe a word of it and immediately roared back. Nonsense! Are you trying to tell me Lana walked out by herself? You know perfectly well she doesn't know martial arts. Cold sweat poured down the strategist's forehead, but he had no choice except to continue. The guards around Xiuhua Pavilion are handled by Guardian Hall. I end this subordinate's view. If an outsider wanted to sneak in and take Miss away without alerting anyone at all, that would be nearly impossible. And according to the Xiuhua Pavilion guards, around midnight last night, 2 people were seen leaving that area, Huan Sao and someone who appeared to be a maid. But when this subordinate later questioned that maid in person, she was clearly terrified and seemed to know nothing. She was crying in fear and insisted that she had never gone anywhere with Huan Sao and had never left Xiuhua Pavilion at all. Dako was no fool. The moment he heard that much, a conclusion already flashed through his mind. This matter almost certainly involved disguise techniques. But the strategist immediately added, and I fear this was not ordinary disguise work, that IT was likely variant disguise art. Even Dako was shocked by that. Variant disguise art. Isn't that a demonic technique? Don't tell me people from the demonic path infiltrated us, but that art has supposedly been lost for years. How could it suddenly resurface now? The strategist quickly analyzed. Miss has never cultivated martial arts, so there's no way she could have used such a technique herself. Either some hidden expert intervened in this matter, or someone altered her appearance after Huan Sao took her away. But Dako Hainshion knew better than anyone what Huan Sao was capable of. She was his own person, handpicked by him. There was no chance she had mastered a skill like that. If that was the case, then the answer was obvious. Someone else had stepped into the situation. The more the strategist thought about it, the more uneasy he became. If a figure of that level truly got involved, then at minimum it would have to be a representative of one of the three great righteous families, the leader of a major sect, or perhaps the demonic path has truly returned. The righteous factions can mostly be ruled out, because last night the important figures from every side were all attending the banquet. This subordinate suspects it was someone from the demonic path, taking advantage of the feast to secretly carry Miss away. After hearing the report, Dako Hainshion immediately issued a cold order. Investigate this thoroughly. The moment you find any lead, report to me at once. Every single person is to be investigated. Leave no one out that I don't care what methods you use. You will find both the culprit and the people behind this. 2.5 hours later, inside a hidden underground prison, a cloaked figure slowly made his way deeper through the cold, damp corridor. As he walked, he spoke in a low voice. Open the door, I'm here. He first exchanged a few quiet words with the guard and learned that the man inside was barely clinging to life. And no matter how brutally the guards tortured him, he still refused to speak. As for the old man's grandson, he seemed to be close to death as well. The cloaked man gave a cold snort. Then it looks like I'll have to speak with him personally. Lead the way. The farther in they went, the more suffocating the air became. At the end of the corridor, an old man with snow-white hair sat imprisoned inside a cell. The cloaked figure stopped before him and said slowly, "You and your grandson really are stubborn to the bone, but I'll give you that much." Then he added on purpose, "But your granddaughter escaped last night." Hearing that, the old man's eyes trembled ever so slightly, but in the end, he still said nothing. The cloaked man had come here precisely to test him, to find out whether the old man had secretly prepared some backup to help Dako Silran escape. After all, a girl like Huan Sao should not have had the ability to pull something like that off on her own. After a moment of silence, the old man finally spat out 5 words. "Madman, get out." The cloaked man burst into laughter. "So even Zhanriang the Great has fallen this low. Your son has long since died. Your grandson is nearly dead too, at this point. That girl is practically the last blood of the Dako family left. Don't you want her to survive?" But Zhanriang the Great, Dako Jin, only laughed instead of growing angry. That child's fate belongs to her. Whether she lives or dies is up to heaven. An old man like me can't interfere anyway. Hearing that, the cloaked man only grew more convinced it was stubborn pride. He let out a sinister laugh. "Dako Jin, you really are a heartless man that I wonder how much that girl would suffer if she knew her own grandfather was this cold-blooded." Then the cloaked man's face twisted into a vicious smile. "Since we're here, let me tell you something amusing. Before long, the Northern Sword Society will use its campaign against the Demon Mirror sect as an excuse to drown the martial world in blood. When that happens, the Northern Sword Society's name will rot beyond repair." The old man simply looked at him and asked in a low voice, "And you? Are you truly not afraid?" The cloaked man laughed without a trace of concern. "Afraid? You mean that so-called absolute sword scripture you people talk about? In my eyes, you never had any absolute sword scripture to begin with. It was nothing more than a desperate lie invented by people trying to drag out their final breaths. Once you and your grandson are dead, this entire place will be buried. Why then, not even your bones will remain. Who would have thought that Dako Jin, the legendary Zhanriang the Great, would end up dying in a dark, filthy hole like this?" That line finally provoked Dako Jin. His body trembled slightly as he ground out the words, "What a disgusting creature." That insult clearly enraged the cloaked man too. You dare call me disgusting? That's going too far, don't you think? Your son may already be dead, but if these actions disgrace anyone, they disgrace him, not me. If there's anyone disgusting here, it should be that dead son of yours." Meanwhile, back in the Northern Sword Society, the martial artists who had attended the banquet were all being held in place and denied permission to leave. Some had already reached the point of open fury. What exactly is the meaning of this? Since when did the Northern Sword Society become this unreasonable? On what grounds are you stopping us from leaving? No matter how the crowd protested, The Northern Sword Society people only answered coldly that a simple round of investigation was needed and that everyone should cooperate. But of course, refusing to give a clear reason while forcibly blocking people from leaving only made the outrage worse. More and more voices cursed the Northern Sword Society for being tyrannical and lawless. Yet the Northern Sword Society ignored all of it, continuing the investigation in strict, orderly fashion without the slightest pause. They had even specially separated out those whose whereabouts were unclear between midnight and the second watch. As for the people with greater strength or more sensitive status, they were each investigated even more carefully, unwilling to overlook a single possible clue. The investigation moved from one person to the next, and naturally, ManhwaCapped was on the list as well. Before long, his turn arrived. One of the Northern Sword Society men stared coldly at him and asked, "Young Master Mun, were you between midnight and the second watch last night? And what exactly were you doing?" But ManhwaCapped showed no hurry to answer. Instead, he asked calmly, "Is it mandatory that I answer? And if I don't, then what?" The moment those words left his mouth, the other man's face darkened, anger already surfacing in his eyes. It was clear he had started treating ManhwaCapped as a major suspect. Even if ManhwaCapped had done nothing last night, they likely had no intention of letting him go easily now. The man suppressed his anger and said coldly, "Young Master Mun, you'd best explain yourself. If you did nothing shameful last night, then what is there that cannot be said?" His gaze turned even colder. Or is it that you really did do something that can't be brought into the light? ManhwaCapped only laughed. Being forced to stay here and submit to your interrogation is already irritating enough, but the way you speak like I'm some criminal being tried really is becoming tiresome. If you're so desperate to know what I was doing last night, then go call your Sword Emperor over here. The Northern Sword Society interrogator instantly flared up. "You arrogant brat." The moment he heard that, the other man exploded with rage. "You arrogant brat. I'm going to teach you a lesson you won't forget." But ManhwaCapped didn't flinch in the slightest. Instead, he shot back coldly. "The arrogant one here isn't me. It's you. If you've got the guts, then make your move." In an instant, the air between them tightened to the breaking point. The man's hand was already resting on the hilt of his blade. Inside ManhwaCapped's mind, the heavenly demon sneered and urged him to just kill them all and walk out. But ManhwaCapped told him not to rush. He had his own plan, because in his eyes, these people would make the first mistake soon enough. Just then, a set of footsteps suddenly echoed from behind them. ManhwaCapped turned and saw a handsome middle-aged man standing there. The man's face was filled with anger as he barked. "You little bastard! How dare you speak so disrespectfully and demand to see the Sword Emperor? What? Is the Sword Emperor a friend of yours?" ManhwaCapped let out a small laugh. "You again? You were the one getting in my way last time too. Who exactly are you, and what gives you the right to speak to me like that?" The man immediately announced his identity. He was Yahello of the Thousand Sword Hall, a commander under the Northern Sword Society who led 100 men and held some standing within the sect. Once he finished introducing himself, Yahello pressed the matter again. "Now you should be ready to answer. Between midnight and the second watch last night, where exactly were you? And what were you doing?" ManhwaCapped only sneered. "I already told you. I'm not answering. What exactly can you do about it? If you want that answer so badly, then bring your Sword Emperor here in person." That line sent Yahello into a full blaze of fury. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. If you force our hand, then don't blame us for what happens next. The moment those words fell, Yahello drew his sword and slashed straight at ManhwaCapped. But with a sharp clang, the blade was stopped cold, caught effortlessly between two of ManhwaCapped's fingers. ManhwaCapped's expression remained calm, but his voice was full of contempt. "This is the sword of Thousand Sword Hall. It's far too slow." Yahello could never swallow a humiliation like that. Roaring in anger, he fully drew his sword and hacked down again. Even then, ManhwaCapped still didn't bother drawing his own blade. Barehanded, he blocked the strike as easily as before. In that same instant, ManhwaCapped's opening stance had already formed. The pressure from that alone was enough to make Yahello's heart skip in alarm. Then ManhwaCapped drove a punch straight into Yahello's abdomen. The heavenly demon impatiently urged him to stop wasting time and simply draw his sword to slaughter them all. But ManhwaCapped answered coldly in his heart. People of this level weren't even worth drawing a blade for. Then ManhwaCapped fixed Yahello with a sharp, murderous stare and said, word by word, "You'd better survive the next move. Otherwise, I'm genuinely worried you won't make out alive." As soon as the words left his mouth, he snapped a vicious rising kick into Yahello's chin. With a heavy burst of force, Yahello was kicked flying backwards. ManhwaCapped couldn't even be bothered remembering his name anymore. Someone this weak simply wasn't worth keeping in mind. But ManhwaCapped still wasn't finished. Next, he intended to let the man taste the first move of the 18 hands of Guanyin. Red steel spits the moon. By then, a blazing golden light had already condensed in ManhwaCapped's palm. Before Yahello could even land, ManhwaCapped closed the distance and slammed that palm straight into his chin. Yahello's body shot upward like an arrow loose from a string. And the terrifying part was that the force of that strike didn't stop there. Though ManhwaCapped appeared to strike only once, the impact exploded like 18 overlapping blows detonating across Yahello's face at the same time. In the end, Yahello's body crashed down hard right in front of ManhwaCapped, looking utterly miserable. ManhwaCapped's expression was ice cold, his voice pressing down on everyone present. Trash at your level should stop acting so wildly in public. Otherwise, you'll die very quickly, understood? At that point, Yahello couldn't even form a full sentence anymore. He was sprawled on the ground, foam spilling from his mouth. The sight left everyone around them stunned. How the hell is this guy this strong? With the power ManhwaCapped had just shown, crushing a mere centurion of the Northern Sword Society was effortless. A few more of the same level wouldn't have changed a thing. After quite a while, Yahello finally managed to recover a sliver of awareness and shakily pushed himself up from the ground. Looking down at him, ManhwaCapped said flatly, "A second ago, you were so proud of being from Thousand Sword Hall. Is this really all you've got?" But even then, Yahello still refused to back down. Gritting his teeth, he forced out, "Don't leave. I'll fight you to the death." Hearing that, ManhwaCapped honestly started to wonder if he'd hit the man so hard he'd knocked sense clean out of him. But in the next instant, there was a heavy thud as a kick smashed into Yahello again, nearly knocking him unconscious on the spot. He almost died right there. The one who kicked him, of course, was not ManhwaCapped. Dako Haiyan slowly lowered his leg and said with calm restraint, "What a disgrace. MY subordinate failed to recognize the jade-faced divine dragon standing before him. I've already disciplined this blind fool on Hero's behalf. I hope you won't take offense that I would hate for a piece of trash like him to damage the relationship between us." 10 minutes later, high above the ground, a figure raced through the air at blinding speed, covering 100 meters with every step. That figure soaring through the sky was none other than ManhwaCapped. His expression at that moment was dark enough to freeze the air around him. He was in a foul mood, worse than he'd been in a long time. Strictly speaking, if Dako Haiyan hadn't shown up in person earlier, it really wouldn't have been so easy for him to walk away from that scene cleanly. In terms of outcome alone, Dako Haiyan had indeed helped him out of a difficult moment. But what truly disgusted ManhwaCapped wasn't the conflict itself. That it was the way Dako Haiyan treated him with polished courtesy while treating his own men with cold, disposable cruelty. That contrast alone had sickened ManhwaCapped enough to almost make him throw up. Then came a thunderous boom as ManhwaCapped slammed down to the ground. Broken stones burst outward in every direction. A closer look showed that his landing had gouged out a massive crater. Clear proof of just how violently his anger had built up. Watching this, the heavenly demon couldn't help asking, "What's with you? Your mood's been foul ever since earlier." ManhwaCapped didn't hide at all. "Dako Haiyan makes my skin crawl that I seriously want to beat the hell out of him. That bastard uses his daughter's marriage as a tool for power, and at the same time he treats his own men's lives like dirt. One of the most powerful men on the righteous side turns out to be that kind of filth. The whole thing is so absurd it makes me sick that's why I'm pissed." But after hearing that, the heavenly demon only let out a mocking laugh. "Aren't you usually more rational than this? The ones standing at the top were never saints. They were simply the strongest. What exactly is so shocking about that?" Then he laughed again, openly amused. "If you suddenly want to uphold justice now, I'm betting it's really because of that girl Ran." ManhwaCapped frowned immediately. "Don't talk nonsense, that's not what this is." After that, ManhwaCapped sat down on a huge rock and spoke seriously to the two presences in his mind. "Heavenly Demon, Huining, this banquet made me realize something important. I need a power base of my own. Without that, there are too many things I simply can't do. Tell me, do you think there's any way I can start building my own force in a short period of time?" Both the Heavenly Demon and Huining sounded puzzled. Didn't you always want to roam the Jianghu freely? Why the sudden desire to build a faction? ManhwaCapped shook his head. "You misunderstand that I do want that freedom, but now I've realized that with only one man's strength, there are too many things I can't handle." The Heavenly Demon burst into laughter. "That part, at least, you're right about, Brad. Back before I truly made my name, I also wandered alone, Proving myself over and over it was exhausting. But once I founded the Heavenly Demon Sect, all those troublesome things started getting handled by others for me. Life became a whole lot easier. ManhwaCapped nodded. That's basically what I mean too. If I had a force of my own, the number of fools who think they can bully me just because they have more people would drop fast. Even so, the Heavenly Demon still poured cold water on the idea. That said, building a force right now won't be easy. Your name may be rising, but you're still nowhere near the point where people will flock to you in droves. So if you ask me, the most realistic option would be to borrow the strength of the 5 Union, Assembly, or Shaolin first. But ManhwaCapped rejected that at once. That may be the quickest solution for now. But right now, the Northern Sword Society already sees itself as the leader of the righteous path. If I start expanding my own power under their nose by leaning on others, I may as well hand them my throat. Then ManhwaCapped's eyes darkened slightly, and he asked, Heavenly Demon, the Heavenly Demon sect you founded back then, does it still exist? At that, the Heavenly Demon actually showed a rare flicker of embarrassment. Well, whether it still exists or not, even I can't say for sure. If we really want to know, we'll have to go look for it ourselves. ManhwaCapped immediately looked at him with open disbelief. Why are you suddenly this unsure of yourself? When Dako Haiyan brought up the Heavenly Demon sect earlier, your reaction was clearly off. The Heavenly Demon fell silent for a moment before calmly, saying just 3 words, 1700 years. Tell me, how much of my Heavenly Demon sect do you really think could still be standing in this Jianghu after that long? That answer hit ManhwaCapped like a blow. He had never imagined the Heavenly Demon was a figure from more than 17 centuries ago. The moment he processed it, ManhwaCapped shot to his feet in shock. Only now did he realize that he had never truly stopped to think about that part before, which was exactly why the Heavenly Demon had been so startled when he heard that the Heavenly Demon sect might still exist. In his mind, it should have vanished in a history long ago. But after hearing Dako Haiyan's words, the Heavenly Demon had begun to suspect things might not be that simple. Maybe traces of the sect really had survived in today's martial world. That still left ManhwaCapped confused. But when Dako Haiyan brought up the Heavenly Demon sect, wasn't he talking because of me? I've been using the name Heavenly Demon Scholar Passion, and I've caused more than enough commotion with it. The Heavenly Demon immediately cursed him. Idiot, you call yourself Heavenly Demon Scholar Passion, but nobody said that makes you a member of the Heavenly Demon sect. What, you think wearing a title means you magically become an entire sect? After hearing that, ManhwaCapped thought it through more carefully and realized the man had a point. Even if the Heavenly Demon sect had long since become legend, people still seem to bring it up now and then without even noticing. And rumors, by nature, spread quickly, but they are just as quick to fade. So ManhwaCapped turned to Huaining and asked what that really meant. Huaining explained calmly, Benefactor, what Heavenly Demon means is this. If it were nothing but an empty rumor, it might spread fast, but it would not survive this long. Yet stories about the demonic sect still surface in the Jianghu even now. That alone suggests that, whether true or false, someone at some point must have seen or encountered something resembling the Heavenly Demon sect. ManhwaCapped pressed further. Even so, you're practically basing this on a rumor alone, and yet you're still willing to say the Heavenly Demon sect may exist. That part still doesn't fully make sense to me. The Heavenly Demon seemed to find that perfectly obvious. What's so strange about it? The Heavenly Demon sect was always both mysterious and powerful. More importantly, its members were always hidden. Some of them didn't even know one another. In other words, the Heavenly Demon sect was never something that stood out in the open that it could be anywhere. At that point, the Heavenly Demon gave a dark, knowing smile. If those people truly carried on my will, then the Heavenly Demon sect is probably still alive somewhere in this Jianghu. Finding them, though, that'll take some effort. Hearing that, ManhwaCapped's heart started pounding hard. Because if the Heavenly Demon sect really still existed, then he might suddenly gain access to a force powerful enough to shake the balance of the martial world itself. In the very next instant, he shouted up at the sky, "Then what are you standing around talking for? Take me there, let's see if we can find this Heavenly Demon sect, and make it work for me." But before long, ManhwaCapped started feeling that something was off. The more he thought about it, the more it felt like the Heavenly Demon might actually be messing with him. Even the Heavenly Demon sounded awkward now. This may be a little different from what I expected, but this should be the place. At that moment, ManhwaCapped was standing atop a snow-covered mountain. The howling wind hit him like blades, strong enough to nearly knock him off his feet. He couldn't help doubting whether a force like the Heavenly Demon sect would really hide in a place like this. Looking out in every direction, All he could see were endless snowy peaks and wild mountain forests. There wasn't the slightest sign of human habitation anywhere, that he even started wondering if they were supposed to be living in caves or maybe underground. The more he looked, the more Manhwa felt that no living person would willingly stay somewhere like this. If there truly wasn't a soul here, then that would only mean one thing. The heavenly demon sect probably no longer existed. He scanned the surroundings again. Snow, mountains, wind, nothing else. Not a single trace of human life. Still, now that he had already come this far, there was no way Manhwa would just give up if he wanted to uncover the heavenly demon sect. Then he had no choice but to focus and search carefully. So he slowly closed his eyes and spread his senses outward, trying to detect any sign of life in the surrounding area. Then, all at once, his eyes snapped open, because for a brief instant just now, he thought he caught the faintest trace of movement. But the heavy layers of snow around him were badly interfering with his perception. Manhwa even felt that without all that snow muffling the flow of life and sound, he would have found the source much faster. And right then, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. If he changed his approach, he might be able to force whatever was hidden here to reveal itself much more quickly. Neither the heavenly demon nor Huaining could tell what he was thinking. All they could do was remain silent and wait for Manhwa's next move. In the next moment, Manhwa drew in a deep breath. Within seconds, the force of his inner energy swelled violently through his body, even making his abdomen visibly bulge outward. Then he let out a thunderous roar toward the snow-covered mountain below, releasing the power he had gathered in one explosive burst. Instantly, a violent wave of force swept downward, carrying the mountain snow with it in a massive, surging blast. This strike contained a full 70% of Manhwa's power, and the result was terrifying. Even the shattered rocks embedded in the distant cliffs burst apart the moment they were touched by the aftermath of that sonic force. With a booming crash, the thick blanket of snow was driven backward like a flood being pushed away by a tidal wave. Seeing it happen, even Manhwa couldn't help being impressed that he truly hadn't expected that he had already become this strong. A little more than 2 minutes later, most of the snow covering the mountainside had been blasted away. Even the heavenly demon and Huaining were momentarily speechless. The heavenly demon couldn't help muttering that this brat's way of thinking really was sharper than the minds of the old era. Once the snow was cleared, Manhwa immediately spread his senses again and carefully searched the surrounding terrain. It didn't take long before he found a deeply concealed cave halfway up the mountain. Manhwa gave a low laugh. So I did find it after all. Without wasting another second, he rushed inside. What surprised him, though, was how unbelievably narrow the passage was. But after walking a little farther, he suddenly felt that something about the ground under his feet was off. He brushed the surface lightly with his shoe and discovered that it was strangely clean, as if it had been maintained by someone over a long period of time. More than that, he could even faintly sense a trace of warmth drifting out from deeper inside the cave. So Manhwa continued forward, twisting his body sideways and forcing his way deeper through the cramped passage. But after more than 2 hours of winding through the place, he finally started losing patience. Because when he reached the lowest level, he discovered that the whole area was nothing more than an underground maze covered in mechanisms and array patterns. There was no trace of person anywhere. Manhwa grew irritated. Where the hell are these people hiding? This is exhausting. I'm about ready to stop looking. The heavenly demon, however, let out a mocking laugh. What? You're giving up already? You're one step away from the end, and now you want to quit? That doesn't sound like you at all. Manhwa frowned. What? You're sure there's really someone here? The heavenly demon told him to go look at the large stone nearby first. Manhwa quickly moved over and found a carving of a three-headed evil spirit on its surface. IT was the unique emblem of the heavenly demon line, something that any true descendant of that legacy would recognize. After that, following the heavenly demon's instructions, he began searching the surrounding area for hidden mechanisms. Before long, he found one concealed trigger, but it clearly wasn't the sort of mechanism that opened with a single press. It was more like a complex code sequence that required multiple locations to be activated in the correct order. The heavenly demon called out more than 100 positions in succession before Manhwa finally managed to trigger the entire mechanism properly. With a heavy rumbling sound, the ground beneath them slowly split apart, revealing a long and narrow underground corridor. Manhwa's eyes immediately lit up. Looks like this trip wasn't wasted after all. But when he actually stepped inside, the scene beyond still caught him off guard. Hidden beneath the earth was an entirely different world. There were waterfalls, dense forest growth, and a hidden paradise-like landscape. For a moment, ManhwaCapped even suspected that this underground realm might connect to some other region entirely. The heavenly demon only laughed softly. Not bad at why descendants really do have some skill managing to build a place like this. Just then, ManhwaCapped suddenly sensed movement ahead. In that same instant, he activated Heavenly Demon Stealth Art and erased both his figure and his aura completely. Soon enough, two figures slowly approached from the path ahead. One of the girls asked softly, "So who do you think is going to win this time?" The other girl looked almost exactly the same as her. Other than the color of her hair, it was nearly impossible to tell them apart. She replied casually, "Who knows? No matter who wins, it'll probably end up exactly how Elder Red Ram wants." The pink-haired girl stretched lazily and said with total indifference, "Small fry like us can't control any of that anyway. Personally, I hope Elder Red Ram wins. Maybe then we'll finally get out of this miserable place." The green-haired girl seemed more worried. But if Elder Blood Demon wins again, then the plan to advance into the Central Plains will get delayed all over again. Honestly, I can't figure any of it out. Their conversation immediately made ManhwaCapped's heart tighten. From the sound of it, if Red Ram won, they would be allowed to leave this place. But if Blood Demon won, they would have to remain trapped here. And those two young girls had already begun indulging in their own fantasies, eagerly imagining the day they would enter the Central Plains and roam the Jianghu alongside that famed young Master Jade Qilin. That left ManhwaCapped a little curious that it seemed that this so-called young Master Jade Qilin was wildly popular here. Anyone admired to that extent was probably some charming, high-profile golden boy. ManhwaCapped then glanced at the Heavenly Demon and asked in a low voice, "From the look of things, this really is your Heavenly Demon's sex territory, isn't it? What do you think?" The Heavenly Demon narrowed his eyes and answered in a measured tone, "If this truly is a force left behind by my descendants, then reaching this scale isn't surprising. This generation clearly isn't incompetent. Their organization has shape, and they carry themselves with confidence. Don't you think they seem very sure of themselves?" ManhwaCapped only snorted. "What is there to brag about? I'm going to take a proper look around and see what this place is really worth." But after only a few more steps, his attention was suddenly caught by a building ahead of him. The structure had an elegance to it, with enough style to make even ManhwaCapped want to go inside and have a closer look. So he slipped in without a sound, only to discover almost immediately that people inside were already talking. A woman's voice rang out like silver bells, soft and pleasant to the ear. "Even if Red Sun Demon loses, it won't change anything at this point. In the end, young Master Jade Qilin will stand on the winner's side anyway." The woman had a strange mark on her forehead, and her looks were striking enough to command attention the moment she appeared. Both ManhwaCapped and the Heavenly Demon were briefly stunned. The Heavenly Demon even let out a low, satisfied chuckle. "As expected of a follower of my Heavenly Demon sect. If someone's going to join my sect, they should at least look like that." The woman continued, "Still, as long as her Yahello family stands with her, the one who will ultimately control everything is still going to be Red Sun Demon of the Beigong family. Besides, Zhantai and Ouyang were never truly close. In the end, the one who will seize real power is still the Beigong family." All of this was expected from the start. Then she slowly sat upright, pinned up her hair, and casually instructed her subordinate, "Go pass a message to Brother Soul Heaven Demon. Tell him everything should proceed according to plan." Just from those few lines, ManhwaCapped had already pulled out a surprising amount of information. Zhantai, Ouyang, Beigong, Yahello. The way those names fit together felt almost like the Five Union Assembly outside. In other words, the Heavenly Demon sect was likely made up of several major factions balancing one another as well. A moment later, the subordinate seemed ready to take his leave after receiving the order, but the woman suddenly stopped him again. In a soft voice, she asked, "What's your name?" The young man lowered his head and answered immediately, "This subordinate is called Yahello's Hangyun." The woman laughed quietly, her whole body carrying an eerie, seductive edge. "Ajing in your name? Then that makes you part of my nephew's generation." She lazily crooked a finger. "In that case, come here and massage your aunt's legs." That instantly made Yahello's Hangyun tremble all over with excitement. He clearly hadn't expected to stumble into such good fortune. So he hurried over, nervous enough that even his hands were shaking. But the woman only gave him a calm glance, and she deliberately shifted her leg around, never quite letting him actually touch it. In only a moment, impatience flashed across her face, and she cursed coldly, "Useless trash, get out." Yahello's Hangyun's face went pale, and he could only retreat in humiliation. Even after he left, the woman muttered that he was an idiot, clearly disgusted that he couldn't even manage something as simple as rubbing her legs. But in the next instant, something happened that truly shocked her. Because a strange voice suddenly sounded directly inside her mind without any warning at all. Since he's so useless, perhaps I should be the one to massage your ankles instead. What do you think, miss?